Boom. Hello, Sen. How you doing, man?
Hey, I was just taking a look at your stream. How are you doing?
Excellent.
I saw we're gonna hopefully getting back into the streaming side of things. I'm watching your chat, so we should be in for a fun time.
Hell yeah. All right. So let me.
How do you want to do this? I suppose. Do you want to watch it? You stream it, and I'll watch it, and I'll just ask you to pause if I have something to say.
That works. There was this other thing that I tried to use. Was it Go to Watch or something like that?
Here, let me look it up.
Where we can both.
We didn't really prep for this.
Where we can both pause it.
Here.
What was it called? I did it with JJ one night.
Do I need to make an account? That's what it looks.
No, I don't think you have to.
This is just watch. Okay. Let's see. How are you doing, Jason?
Oh, I'm doing great. I got to get my rage out early, so you know.
Yeah, I was. That was a very interesting segment that you did. Normally, like, not a criticism of you; it's your style. You like kind of watch videos and like say a little bit over it, but you were very animated for that video.
Oh yeah, yeah. Sometimes I gotta fucking light that shit up, man. Every once in a while, I gotta get bombastic with it, you know.
So it's called Go to Watch.
Yeah.
Or what? Do you want to just pause it? That works with me.
All right, that's fine.
All right.
If JJ was still in here, he'd know what the name of it was. He's one of the people that told me about it. But fuck it, we got it. Just tell me when to pause it.
All right.
And I'm gonna put my face on for you.
So I will also mention this is the thing that I enjoy doing. This is like my here. I'll do this as well for now.
This is your wheelhouse.
Yeah, I love reviewing. I love reviewing debates because as much as I enjoy doing debates, you get a chance to really look at what someone's saying outside of a debate. So I know Jason is a little bit of an anti-debate reviewer, right?
If it's here's what I don't like. I don't like watching and reviewing debates that are Twitch drama. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Like,
I mean, that's fine.
Like I like watching debates on my own. But when it starts to get like, okay, so like the Anne of War thing and, you know, the Destiny thing and, you know, all that shit, you know, and, you know, all the stuff with Cat and Prime and all this kind of crap, like, you know, it all ends up kind of bleeding in. That's why I avoid some of those debates, because as soon as you like say, oh, well, I like the way that person did, well, then everybody starts trying to attach you to that person. And it's like, I don't fucking care. Like, I'm here to do this for, you know, the people that want to watch me. And, you know, if I make friends with those folks, fine, so be it. But you know what I mean? Like, I am trying to get in the middle of their fucking shit.
Yeah, I like taking a look at these debates for a different reason. And that's because I think you can really look at what someone's doing outside of a debate. For example, when someone's like talking with you, like in a live debate, it's very hard to call out what exactly they're doing a lot of the times. So, for example, I don't know how many, pretty much everyone saw, I'll use the Charlie Kirk debate as an example. Everyone saw the abortion debate Charlie Kirk had, where he thought a dolphin was a human.
Right. Yep. And that was fucking great.
And it was hilarious. But one of the most common things that the right does, whenever we're talking about abortion, is because whenever we're talking about pregnancy in general, one of the very common things that gets brought up is sperm, because it's part of the process.
Sure.
So whenever you bring up sperm in any capacity, whether you're talking about a conservative, when they say they want to ban pornography, and then we say, I bet you watch pornography on your own or something, or whether we're talking about like the process to get pregnant, if you ever bring up sperm, they're going to say, why are you so concerned with my sperm?
Yeah.
And they're going to say, like, you have an odd amount of focus on my sperm right now. And the reason to do that is specifically to not like shift your focus away from the actual question. And it's very hard to call out in the debate. You can say, why aren't you focusing on the question? But outside of that, the point of what they're doing is to completely detract from that and make it so your audience thinks that you're some kind of pervert.
Yeah, and just derail the conversation, you know.
So you're not really able to look at that in the range of the conversation. But when you're looking out of it, it's a really easy thing to look at. And I think that's why reviewing these things can be really important.
Rock and roll. Well, let's get into it.
Yeah.
Debate night, everybody. My name is Charlie Kirk. Tonight's guest is a self-proclaimed democratic socialist, a philosophy
Can you share it over
professor
here?
at Georgia State University.
I guess I could. That would be kind. It might help, if you could actually...
A little
say
bit.
Here we go.
Perimeter College and an adjunct professor at Rutgers University. He's a columnist for the Jacobin magazine and has written 4 books, including his most recent, Christopher Hitchens, What He Got Right, How He Went Wrong, and Why He Still Matters. In addition to all of that, he hosts the podcast, Give Them an Argument, which you can find on his Patreon, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. Please join me in welcoming Professor Ben Burgis to debate.
God, I can't stand this guy. I just can't fucking
Hey everybody,
stand him.
welcome to this episode of Debate Night. With us tonight is Ben, or Dr. Burgis, or Ben Burgis, however you want to say it. We're going to be debating, and we'll see where it leads us, Democrat socialism versus conservative populism. Super thrilled that Ben is here tonight to have this discussion. It'll start with some opening statements, and then we'll take it from there. The 2 minutes is yours, Dr. Burgis.
Thank you, Mr. Kirk, and thank you to Town Circle for setting this up. So I'm a democratic socialist because I don't think anybody deserves to have less power or a dramatically worse life because of factors that are outside of their control. So that's the first part that we could take right now. Things like raising taxes on rich people to pay for social programs that would benefit the rest of us. Things like raising the minimum
dude, glad
wage
you're
for
here.
the working poor. Things like making it easier for ordinary people to organize unions so they can have at least a little bit of a say at what happens in the workplaces where they spend half their waking lives. And I gotta say, what always confuses me about you, Charlie, is that I've seen you say that you're not like an old style kind of corporate Republican in the Reagan, Bush, William F. Buckley kind of mold. And certainly the politicians you seem to be most enthusiastic about, people like Donald Trump or J.D. Vance now, make a big deal saying they're populist, they really want to help like struggling people in the heartland. And if that's true, I don't really get why you don't support any of those things that I just mentioned.
Well, very good. It's almost exactly 2 minutes. So I'll respond. First of all, thank you for being here. And if we want to spend an extended period of time bashing Jeff Bezos, I'm all for that. I think it's actually going to be really fun. So let me just first kind of tell you what I believe and why we believe it. It's kind of framed as
Okay, he's never going to bash Jeff
Put it
Bezos in
simply,
this entire
we believe in the
conversation.
natural law.
Yeah, I think that's highly unlikely. I think, he's...
Jason, you're muted.
I think that's highly unlikely. I think you're right. I don't think he's gonna even bring up Bezos. He's got too much of a vested interest in, pumping up his unbridled capitalism that he loves so much,
Yeah, so something I want to point out really quick, because Charlie's trying to push himself as this populist conservative, where let's keep track of how many populist arguments he makes in this debate. Because I would be shocked if, while debating against socialism, he's going to bring up any populist debates. Because any actual socialist can out-populist a dumb conservative like Charlie.
Yeah, he's definitely not the sharpest tool in the shed. So I'm interested to see how Dr. Burgess dissects him a little bit here. But yeah, I agree with you. He's not. We're not going to get very much populism out of Charlie Kirk's populism tonight.
We believe, as the Declaration of Independence says, the laws of nature are nature's God. We believe in limitations on human beings, and we believe there are limitations on power, both government power and, yes, of course, corporate power, as Barry Goldwater said in the 1960s.
What
We also believe
limitations?
America is strongest when
He just quoted Barry Goldwater, the guy that wanted to shoot down the Civil Rights Act. Okay, is that where we're at? Is that where we're at, Charlie? Come on.
I'm surprised, man.
families are flourishing, when there's a strong moral center, when middle-class work is respected and appreciated. And the populist component to this is we need to be aware of what's happening around us, see when core institutions are failing, like the family, which has been failing over the last 60 years in America, which can be attributed to many different things. I would attribute it to the rise of an aggressive social welfare state and an overindulgence in neoliberalism, that we must be willing to do something about it when the family starts to disintegrate, when our nation starts to fall apart, when our borders remain wide open. And so we pair those two things together, conservative populism, and the kind of philosophical basis for a lot of this is the willingness to act with prudence and wisdom to try and fix things that matter, things that objectively matter. And I've been really looking forward to this discussion. I hope it's more of a discussion than a debate, because we will disagree on plenty. But when you talk about a untouchable oligarchy, I completely agree. I think that there is an untouchable oligarchy in this country, both corporate and governmental, scientific and technological, that is crushing the everyday common man. Where I think we're going to disagree is that I think the end goal, the thing that we must strive to, is family formation, family protection, and that strong moral center. And conservative populism is a resurgence of focusing on these things and developing solutions to hopefully fix it.
All right. I want to say a little bit about that.
I guess what I would say is when you talk...
All right. Go ahead.
So, besides that being complete nonsense, he didn't speak to any of the problems that these groups actually serve. As you noticed, Ben Burgis, which I liked, pointed direct solutions to these problems that he advocates for. Mm-hmm. But Charlie Kirk did not name one. He purely named problems that exist. And at the same time, we can also probably predict that he doesn't really care about those problems. He talks about that we have, what was the main problem that he listed? That the family is under attack.
Yeah,
what does that have to do with...
The family has been disintegrated for the past 60 years, right?
And what does that have to do with big business and big government?
Oh, no. Yeah, see, he's going straight into the culture war type stuff. Mm-hmm. You know, there is no solution. There is only problems in the culture war, you know? And that's what oh, man, I can already see this already. I see where this is going. You can
speed it up a little if you want, by the way. It is a 2-hour wait.
Yeah, one person that's going to, drive probably solution-based stuff, use science, statistics, things like that. You got another person that's going to be a fucking clown this whole time. That's all right.
I'm curious. So what I want to see from Burgess, I want to hit at him on that actual populism. I want to see what he's willing to do to limit. Well, first, I want to make sure that he actually cares about populism, which I doubt he does. But you can hit him on that. And then if he does say he cares about populism, you need to push on how he actually wants to be a populist. He doesn't really want to raise the taxes on these people. He doesn't want to regulate them. He doesn't want to actually push for working interests help. He's worried about the border, which, to be fair, could be populist, but not really in this sense. He's worried about lowering taxes, which is an anti-populist thing. And he's worried about the culture war, which... So I'm excited to see... Because I think it is Charlie Kirk's weakest area is the fact that he pitches himself as a populist. Because that might work against a conservative Democrat, but I think you could really come at him from this more populist angle. But then I don't really think his audience cares about populism anyway, so we'll see.
Tell me if this is too fast too when I bring it back up. I'm going to have to step away for just a second, but I'm going to let this run.
Yeah.
About limited power, right? I get that. That makes sense to me. I think that absolutely, I think oftentimes actually people get the relationship between these things really wrong, and they'll think, well, the more you think that human nature is good and cooperative, the more you might think that a fairer society is possible, and the more you think that human nature is flawed and selfish and cruel, then the more you should think that, hey, we might as well just stick with free market capitalism. But I think the opposite is true. I think that the more you worry that given too much power over another, one person over another, that person is going to treat the other the way that Walmart treats its employees, the way that Harvey Weinstein treated his fired actresses. The more you're worried about that, the more you should want power to be distributed as evenly as at all possible. And that's really why I'm a democratic socialist.
I wish I could pause this.
Russia under Stalin or Amazon under our mutual friend Jeff Bezos.
Not a friend.
Then anytime you have one person having way too much power over another without democratic accountability, I think you're going to get really bad abuses.
So I think that's helpful. Where I think we'll disagree, though, is the means of which we can represent individual people against oppressors or people that have power. This is why I tend to defend markets.
Okay.
And I want to be very clear. Markets are a tool, something we set up to hopefully help human beings. There are externalities. There are jerks and dirtbags like Jeff Bezos that tend to con the system, not pay taxes, not treat their workers.
What
And
bad
one of the reasons
thing
why
has
this is
Jeff
momentous,
Bezos
I think,
done that he
for conservatives
cited yet?
is we're willing to use
He just
prudence
says he
in a
doesn't like
non-dogmatic
him.
way and say, wait a second, if we're trying to conserve something that is eternal and beautiful and true, is it a good thing that this kind of, let's just use Bezos again, $200 billion of net worth, while the average American family is struggling to pay off student loan debt or financial debt? Where I think we're going to explore, I can't do this in the remaining 20 seconds I have though, is true decentralization must happen in a way that is consistent with both reigning in the administrative state and reigning in the technological and corporate power sources in our country. And the ultimate form of decentralization is the family. Strong families, strong households.
No policy prescriptions whatsoever.
So I guess when you talk about the family, sure, absolutely. If people, social institutions are making it harder to keep families together, that's a bad thing. I think that I would point to the financial pressures that that people are often under as a huge source of problems within families, as a huge reason for relationships and marriages failing. And that's something that I think would be helped by doing things like changing labor laws to make it easier to organize unions, so people would be getting better wages and have more job stability, less of what employers like to call flexibility, and everybody else.
Did I miss a hold on?
A tiny bit. Ben Burgis said some stuff about how he wants to actually serve the people. Charlie Kirk said that the only way to serve the people is by adhering to the market, and yeah.
And we know that hasn't worked. that's why we're in the situation we're in, is because people try to adhere to the market, and it just didn't. It's not working.
So the one thing that I'm noticing is he's also attacked Jeff Bezos a lot. While he did levy one criticism of him, where he said that he should be making $200 million a day, while your working family makes nothing, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I'm curious. You could consider that populist to a small extent, but we're gonna see how he offers to fix that.
Yeah,
and I have a feeling it's not going to be substantive.
And
I want the big thing whenever we're going to go into these types. This has to do with a fascist appealing to these things, even though I would consider Charlie Kirk a fascist. It appeals to any kind of right-wing populist when they're trying to do this. We can agree on this and that. Vosh is a lot too. We can agree on problems all day, but the solutions are not going to be there.
Yeah, agreed.
Called precarity. And so that might be one place to start exploring this is, maybe you'll surprise me here, right? But I do not think we disagree. We agree on that.
So, yeah, am I good to respond?
Yeah,
okay,
go for it,
good.
go
No,
for
I
it.
just didn't
No,
want to take any of your time.
No, please.
So I want to get into the union argument. I want to get into the minimum wage argument. I want to get into the healthcare argument. And I'm glad for you to say, and I really want to zero in on this, that family formation is a good thing, because that is something that is debated amongst some Democrat socialist circles. And once we kind of get into the back and forth, I want to ask you about that, because certain activist organizations tend to disagree.
No, here's the problem. Here's what Charlie Kirk is saying. He's saying heteronormative families are okay, whereas Ben Burgis is saying families are okay. There is a difference there, Charlie Kirk said start talking about the traditional family, right? We know what he means by that, So just wanted to point that out.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I don't know what Democrat who wants to truly leave behind the family. The one argument that that you could make from a conservative angle is that by promoting single mothers, we're leaving behind the family. But that's about it.
That's true. It's true.
No one dislikes families.
Yeah, I think inherently we all are kind of okay. I don't know. I think everybody, generally, unless they're in a really bad situation, loves their parents and loves their siblings and shit. I think it's a fruitful thing. I don't think anybody's gonna be like, oh, this is horrible. We shouldn't have a family unit. What the fuck, dude. That's why I disagree with, kind of what his premise is about the family, because I know exactly what he's referring to.
Family, oppressive, patriarchal, where I believe the family is beautiful and the ultimate social bedrock institution. And every single statistic shows that when families are flourishing, divorce rates remain low.
See, he just said that a family has to be, he said people misconstrue the family as oppressive and patriarchal. No, they don't. Nobody says that.
Outside of Anarchities Online, but yeah.
Yeah.
which they aren't currently, that crime goes down and literacy goes up and communities flourish. And I think one thing we can agree on, and you said it a little bit differently than I would, I think it's wrong when corporations are making families choose between spending another 10 hours at some soulless job or spending a weekend with your kids. I think the priority should be through our public policy, and our laws should always be for the development of children and families getting stronger.
Well, I think that,
Okay,
I think
wait,
that if
pause.
you want to have a traditional family, absolutely, you should be able to do.
So, the big thing. Let me look it up. I'm very curious if Charlie Kirk is against paternity leave. I would love to see it because it would not surprise me. What's your bets? I'm gonna look it up.
I guarantee he's against paternity leave because it's not a market-driven solution, and that's what he's going to start talking about. Is that, oh, you have to vote with your dollar? I guarantee that something like that's going to come up where he talks about voting with your dollar. And, you know, it's in the marketplace that we can correct these things, you know.
And guess what we have right here? When a top-level candidate secretary can leave his job for 2 months without anyone noticing, you know our government has gotten too big.
Yep. Knew it. Fucking knew it.
Man, did not take long, did it?
Nice contradiction, Charlie. You really care about the American family unit, don't you?
Do that. You talked about activist organizations. I think that I would point to, like, you know, the Working Families Party in New York, for example, as an activist organization that clearly has no problem with families. Of course, if you want to live some other way, that's great, true. I think in a pluralistic society, I think everybody should be able to strive for their vision of the good life, and everybody should be free to live in the way that they want to be free. And I think that this is one of the biggest problems. You know, when we talk about things like healthcare, oftentimes people on my side will emphasize the fact that life expectancy is higher in places like Canada, the UK, where they have socialized healthcare, and infant mortality. And you want to talk about families, you know, people's babies are less likely to die in places like Canada, the UK, than in the United States. And mortality amenable to healthcare, which is a stats nerd way of saying that you're less likely to die from treatable diseases, is lower in those places. And I think all those are true and important, but I don't think it's the most important thing, because most of us are not on the verge of dying most of the time. Most of us are not worried that our babies are going to die most of the time. The biggest way, I think, that not providing everybody with healthcare as a right affects the lives of most people is that it makes us less free. Because people are a lot less likely to leave jobs that they hate if they're worried about, will I still have health insurance? Will my family still have health insurance? People stay in those jobs and don't pursue their dreams all the time because of that. There are people, you know, I think people who are in good families and want to keep them together, absolutely, they should be able to do that. But there are also people who stay in bad or even abusive marriages because they cannot afford to lose their spousal health insurance. And so I think that we're not only happier and we not only live longer, but I think we're also freer if we take care of those things.
So that's an interesting point. And what you're articulating, as before we get into the back and forth here, is what Lyndon Baines Johnson would call freedom from necessity, which is something I take exception with. I do not believe the state should play an interventionist role in saying that.
Yep.
Do you think, and I don't have a true answer for this, because there are times where I think it'd be good and times where I think it can be bad. Do you think they should be going harder on Charlie right now?
I think it's a 2-hour debate and we're 12 minutes in. So
Yes, but and that's a fair point. I am I think there's a lot of things that Charlie has kind of said, though, that we're not really getting pushback on. And credit to Ben Burgis if he's not familiar with Charlie Kirk enough to really be able to push back on the stuff that he said. That's fine. But I think what I'm afraid of and what I'm hoping that gets kind of fixed is, and you can either agree with me or disagree with me, that they're kind of a little bit talking past each other. They're saying what they want to say, and then they're not really responding to the other person's statements.
I could see that. I hope that they engage with one another a little bit more. I think that would be better. They're both kind of playing with kid gloves at this point. They're just getting their ideas out there. I have a feeling that Ben Burgis, he teed up this healthcare debate though right now, and I think that we're probably going to get a little bit more meat out of that. So let's see what happens.
Let's see, and let's see if Charlie dodges it.
Yeah, he's a populist. He could see a reason why it would be okay, but we should find a market-driven solution for that. More healthcare. We need more hospitals and private industries involved in healthcare, because that'll make it better. I really want to go to the Spirit Airlines of hospitals,
It is the role of government to say that you should be free from wants or necessity. I would argue that through a natural rights compact, that you should be free to pursue virtue. That's not to say you shouldn't have a social safety net, which far too often becomes a hammock, not a social safety net. But I think the design of government and the state, which is really what we're debating here, right? What is the role of public policy, should be supporting things that are objectively good for people, for children, for the nation, and for the country. And so I'm happy to go into the kind of three categories that are common points of Democrat socialists next: healthcare, union membership, and kind of the development of unions. All right, no more rules. We can interrupt each other. It's totally voluntary, unlike socialism. I'm kidding. That's my first socialist joke tonight. So let me ask. So I want to ask you just kind of generally about Democrat socialism.
Sure, yeah, let's do it.
Very funny. The right's getting better at comedy, everyone.
Best embodiment.
Yeah, I mean, if that was good comedy, you know, man, I don't want to know what bad comedy is, but hey, he made the effort, you know.
Man, I don't know what the hell those 3 points are that he mentioned of like Democrat socialism, which he's not saying democratic socialism. He's saying Democrat socialism.
Yeah, he said,
which is
what were the 3 again? He said
it was
healthcare,
universal healthcare, union membership, and another thing about unions.
Yeah, I'm like, that's what you boil it all down to, man. I mean, shit, you're missing a lot. Maybe that's the problem. You like miss the boat on almost everything, but okay.
Yeah. So I think that that all of the things that I want, you know, I do not think exist together right now in the world. But if you want to talk about places where a lot of the policy goals that I'd support, you know, have been implemented, I certainly don't think they're fully socialist societies by any stretch of the imagination, but I think a lot of it has been implemented. I would talk about, you know, the places you'd expect me to talk about: your Swedens, your Finlands, your Denmarks, your Norways. Now, these are complicated societies that, you know, there are right-wing parties win elections sometimes too, and they do things that I don't like. But I think that these are places, broadly speaking, where a lot has been done to take certain things, like healthcare, for example, outside of the market, so that people have that kind of freedom that I'm talking about, that they're not tied to jobs that they hate because they're worried that they and their families' basic needs aren't going to be taken care of if they don't stay in that subservient relationship. And you talked earlier about how you want the state to support things that are objectively good.
Yes.
It seems to me that living longer is objectively good,
Yes.
having lower infant mortality is objectively good, and I would also say that having greater freedom to live your life how you want and not being tied to a particular job, I think that's also objectively
So job mobility is interesting. I want to get into that. So I'm not stunned you mentioned the Scandinavian countries.
Sure, yes.
So Denmark doesn't have a minimum wage.
Well, but you got to do the other half of that. They don't have a minimum wage, but they
Oh,
have vastly more
no.
favorable terrain for unions than the United States does, and so
he did it. He said it.
He didn't even work up to it. He was just like, Norway, or was it Norway or Sweden? Sweden doesn't have minimum
Denmark.
wage. Okay. No, these Nordic countries don't have minimum wages. And we all know why they don't have minimum wages. And the easy line that you can always use in this case is, hey, if you don't want a minimum wage, why don't we support union culture? And that's what we can do before we get a minimum wage.
Yep.
But he's not going to agree with that either. So I wonder if he's going to be able to, how he's going to juggle that, and whether Ben Burgis, which it seemed like he's about to call him out on, is going to do it. He didn't even work up to that talking point, though. He just like, bam. Not even make an argument, just stating information.
Oh yeah, I knew that was. I knew that he was going to throw that out there. That's like, it's such a go-to, and it's like, come on, dude. Look at the union culture. Like, obviously, if that's where your head's at, like the minimum wage part of it, you don't understand why they don't need a minimum wage. You know.
And to be fair to a certain extent, not to Charlie Kirk, but to people that have said this stuff. When I've debated ANCAPs, like when I debated Scott, the thing that they say is they want a super strong union culture. And they say that's part of the free market, even though it's probably not part of the free market. But to be fair, they all, like even your hyper-capitalists that you see on Twitch, like the most capitalists of the capitalists will support unions because they think they're necessary.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that they don't have a minimum wage, but they have vastly more favorable terrain for unions than the United States does, and so a lot of the wage floor is enforced that way. It's still not just they get whatever the market says they get.
But no government mandated minimum wage. What I find interesting, and there are some aspects of the Scandinavian countries appeal to me.
Sure.
I would have pushed back way harder as soon as he was like, but no, it's so nationally mandated. Well, yeah, but unions. Like, and then I would have countered with, how do you feel about unions, Charlie Kirk? Like, do you have an issue with mass unionization or union culture? Because if you don't have a problem with that, then I can understand your argument for no minimum wage, you know. But if you have a problem with that, and then you also don't want a minimum wage, then you don't care about the workers, which means you're not a populist.
Correct.
End of story. You know.
To the World Economic Freedom Index, every country outside of Norway is more economically free than the United States. And so, is that something that would interest you? If economic freedom is the definition of your view, then I would change the Bernie Sanders shirt.
I think that what I mean by economic freedom and what they mean by economic freedom are going to be very different. I think oftentimes if you look at the methodology of those lists, it's very unclear.
So he was talking about some economic freedom index.
Yeah, I think he said, I doubt Norway is like established as like less free than the United States. I don't think that's I would look at the freedom index. One of the big problems is we're not going to see sources cited in this video. So at the end of the day, we kind of do have to take whatever Charlie Kirk says with a grain of salt.
Of course.
Like you'll get like the Cato Institute or whoever in some cases will do these lists where they rank places by freedom, and it's like the things that they get points for, the things they don't get points for. Abortion doesn't matter. Whether you can have raw milk matters. I think are at least unclear to me. But I think this is the bigger philosophical thing, right? Like let's just do this rather than getting into the nitty gritty about the list. I think that what those guys mean by economic freedom is how much business owners are free to conduct their business however they want, without interference by the state. What I would mean by freedom in an economic context is the right of ordinary people to live the kinds of lives that they want to live and not be under the thumb to the extent that people are in the United States of whatever some corporation wants to make them do.
Right. And so just to clarify this though about some of the Scandinavian countries, they went through massive deregulation in the 1980s, right? Many of these Scandinavian countries did, including Denmark. Denmark has actually come out and has said, "Stop calling us socialists. We are not socialists." You've seen that quote.
Well, I have seen it, but I would like to say something about this. And people can check out. I actually wrote something about this last summer for Art Digital Media.
I think I read it.
Okay, well there you go. So
I know where you're going before you say it.
All right, well beautiful. Fortunately,
but the audience doesn't know. So
happily though, there are people who are watching who don't know. So let's say it anyway. So I think that
also pause real quick.
This
is nothing to talk to the debate. But this is something I have purely noticed of Charlie Kirk out of all the conversations he's had. He does I don't know whether it's out of like insecurity or not, or it's just he has like some intern do it, but he has a ton of research done about every person he debates. When we went into the Vosh debate, we found out that he did like a ton of research on Vosh before the debate happened. And it's kind of weird that we're seeing this. Like, it's fine preparing for your opponent, but it does kind of notice you after every conversation that you might be pulling in people that you think you could beat.
Yeah. Well, and I'll say this, he probably has to have the research done or do the research because his rhetorical skills, I honestly don't think are very good. Like, I'm listening to him and there's nothing... Even if I were to say be on the right, that I'd be like, oh, gotcha. Like there's none of that. Like, I don't know. I think his arguments are rather flaccid, to be honest with you.
I mean, he got destroyed by Kyle Kulinski and Hassan in a debate.
Yeah. I mean, and Hassan says outright, he's like, I'm not a debate bro. I don't do debates, So, I mean, that says something right there.
Center-right kind of prime minister who says, no, these social gains have nothing to do with socialism. And you say, oh, well, he says it, right? So therefore, he must be speaking for, Denmark as a whole, the Danish hive mind. I think is approximately equivalent to if the only two, if you were from Denmark and the only two Americans you'd ever talk to were Bernie Sanders and me, and you say, well, here's what they say about what America's all about. Here's what they say about, Social Security or the post office. This is the American point of view. I think, if you look at how long socialist parties were in power in Denmark and how many of those programs came about under them, I would not say that these are societies that have achieved socialism. We could certainly talk about what that would need to be. But I would say that these are societies where socialist parties allied with strong unions have brought about really beneficial social reforms as an effort to move farther in that direction.
So let's talk about Norway, a
Sure.
country that I'm familiar with, you're familiar with. Very wealthy country.
Yeah.
Why?
Because I think the biggest reason is that they have done something that I'm sure that you wouldn't support, which is nationalize their oil industry.
You mean use fossil fuels, not keep it in the ground like Bernie Sanders would be. Bernie Sanders has tweeted, we need to keep all fossil fuels in the ground, but Norway's built $1 trillion sovereign wealth fund after.
Okay, so would you support that?
Nationalization? No, but it's better than keeping it in the ground.
I think ultimately you probably are better off.
So Norway's rich because of oil, but I don't support them being rich because of oil because they shouldn't be able to nationalize their own fucking fossil fuels. You see what I'm saying?
That was great.
Like his arguments fall flat because he contradicts himself. Like he's a fucking hot mess, dude. I'm sorry.
That's one of the easiest things that you can ever do in one of these debates. Where if you're ever talking with because these people will say about these SOCDEM countries, which they are social democrat, they're not socialist.
Mm-hmm.
But when you look at them and you ask them, how do they do so well? And then they bring up this free market position. And then in reality, you would ask, so are you in favor of copying the Norway, and they just say no. That was an incredibly easy dunk, and we'll see why. Like, you can get around that to a certain degree, but that was not a good point to bring up in any capacity. If I were him, I would want to stay away from like these countries as far as possible. The best way that Charlie Kirk could actually dig in to like the problems with government overreach is like looking at the way that the United States handled our government involvement in our markets, and that's like his best area.
Oh, sure, yeah.
So
I just want to give a shout out real quick. Obi-Wan Ginobili, dude. I still have that massive slushie in my freezer. We've been chipping away at it. It's still freaking delicious. But I switched up to Bloody Marys last night because I got tired of trying to chisel away at the ice while I was on stream. And now I'm drinking wine tonight. So there it is. Thanks for the pause. I'll get back into it.
Energy sources, but if we're going to use oil,
I
would
will
much
quickly
rather
respond
that
to
that oil
Arm
be
in
the
the
hands of the people that it fund generous
in the
programs.
chat. It's fine with like not liking debates. When it comes to winning or losing, it is like, and I know you were talking about how like when we talked yesterday, your goal was not to win or lose. But when it comes to these debates, what you're really looking for, and when we define the win and the lose, because it's not just like arbitrary. I think this person did better than this reason because they came off cooler or something. What we're looking for is how will these arguments stand when they're put up against someone else, and that's where we like define the win. And you can come down to whether an argument is substantial and ill-substantial. And why we're saying that Charlie Kirk is getting beaten here is he's not using, like, number one, I don't think he's using his best arguments to the best of his ability. And two, I think the arguments that he's bringing up are pretty easily contested, and we're kind of seeing that now.
Yeah. I love how Ben Burgis is able to very politely make short work of, of what he's doing, you know, like, anyways, yeah, let's continue.
Like in Norway, and I often do kind of get a sense when conservatives say this. It's like, oh, well, there's really nothing socialist about it. They've just nationalized the oil industry and used the proceeds to fund all of these social programs. Well, I mean, if that's not socialist, can we at least have that not socialist thing? That sounds nice to me.
Let me clarify is that if there is wealth to be redistributed, there must be wealth to be redistributed.
Sure.
And Norway has the advantage of having some of the most strategic oil reserves in the country. And I just pinpoint it in particular because there tends to be this anti-fossil fuel development movement.
It's something Norway and the United States have in common is that we have a lot of oil. Now, if you want to, again, I know you've said you don't want to do this.
No, of course, I think the private ownership of minerals is a strategic advantage for the United States. But let me ask you about what I think is one of the reasons why I think the Scandinavian countries' pursuit of egalitarianism looks good on paper.
Okay,
and this is strict immigration.
I would ask him why he thinks the strategic ownership, or why he thinks the private ownership of minerals is a strategic advantage, and make him lay that out. Because I don't think he can.
So there are, and I would agree with that, there are like some arguments that you could make for that, right? And like the interesting thing that we see with this area is like you could point to having specific mineral wealth, and like whether you have the nationalized industry or you just use it, that's going to be an advantage either way. But Norway isn't the only massively wealthy country in this area. There are tons of European countries that a lot of the reason that they've thrived is they managed to group together. They've managed to like endure hardships together. Sure, some countries do worse than others, but it's not purely because of this one oil industry. And I would also mention, if these countries were only rich because of their oil reserves, once the price of oil goes down, like it did during COVID, they would have flopped. That's not the only reason that these economies thrive.
Oh, yeah.
Now, this has changed in recent years because of a lot of the Syrian refugee crisis and more kind of left-wing governments taking over Sweden in particular. But Norway, for example, takes in about 70 immigrants a day, even with their more relaxed policies. America, much bigger country, albeit 2,740 legal immigrants, about 5,000 if you include the people going across the southern border. Do you, as being a Democrat socialist, do you support closed borders and strict immigration?
No, I don't, and I'll tell you why. So two reasons. One is that I think that all of the economic data that I've seen says that having more immigrants actually increases the amount of wealth that society has to go around. And the second is I would ask what the alternatives are, right? So, we can do, like those families that, that you talk about, right? We can do things like separating families. We can do things like raiding, churches, to drag out immigrants. But I think we really have to step up that, by a factor of 100 to actually get rid of all the undocumented immigrants in the country. Whereas I think a much better solution, if what you're worried about is, hey, here are people coming in who, yeah, they definitely contribute to economic growth. But here are people coming in who are willing to work for low wages or whatever. I think a much better solution to that problem is for those people to have a pathway to citizenship, so that they're not afraid to do things like join unions, or they're not afraid to do things like take their employers to court when they violate labor laws. I think that's a much better solution to that problem than the sort of heavy-handed police state kinds of tactics, which I think would be the only way that you're actually going to resolve the status quo in the other direction.
One of the things I like about Norway that you just said you don't like is to become a Norwegian citizen, you must speak the native language. It's non-negotiable. You must have citizenship by birth, it's not applicable, and you must have lived in.
The United States does not have a recognized national language, by the way.
That's correct. I'm going to point out a response that I would have loved from Ben Burgis here. And this is what I would have said to him asking, should we have closed borders? And I would say, and I think this is killer, if you want to copy the European system of immigration, where they take in 825,000 people a year, I would love to copy that model.
Right. Boom. Boom.
And even that's not enough, but it would be a step in the right direction at the very least.
Norway for at least 8 out of the past 11 years. And so maybe you can help clarify this for me, because the mascot you're wearing on your shirt has changed on this, because I would understand the position you're espousing more if you said, hey, we're going to close off the borders, we're going to take care of our fellow countrymen, we are going to reject these globalist institutions, because Bernie Sanders used to say that. In 2013, Bernie Sanders said, it does not make sense to me to bring hundreds of thousands of those workers into this country to work for minimum wage and compete with American kids. Bernie Sanders said in 2007, 6 years prior, if poverty is increasing and if wages are going down, I don't know why we need millions of people to be coming into this country as guest workers. What changed?
Well, I think that the main thing that changed is that the context of both of those quotes that you just read was not about whether there should be a pathway to citizenship. It was about exactly the opposite. It was about the Bush administration's interest in 2007 and then later revivals of it in 2013, attempts to create a guest worker program, which I think he rightly compared to legalized slavery. A lot of immigrant rights groups were actually against those proposals for the same reasons, because those are things.
I want to point out there was a ton. It wasn't just a lot. There was a ton. Lucha was against that plan, because that was a plan that was written up by Newt Gingrich. It would allow employers to pay these people like pennies on the dollar compared to American workers. It did not give them the opportunity to appeal to the courts if there was any issues with their employment. Their employment was their guest worker program was completely contingent upon them keeping these jobs, so they're not going to quit, and they have no work mobility when shit happens. So effectively, like, Bernie shot that down for very, very valid reasons. And I've heard this excuse over and over again. I've heard people use the same talking point that Charlie Kirk is using right now, and it's because they are deliberately acting in bad faith and taking his words out of context. And I know you hate bad faith, but that's exactly what that is, because they're not framing the full context of the argument, which is that he didn't want people coming in who are going to be able to make less than American workers, and that be a systemized, institutionalized practice, right? And that would have undermined American workers, just like NAFTA undermined American workers. If you want to bring them in at the same wages and they can compete for the jobs because they've got the skills and the talents to do the jobs, fine, so be it. Like, I don't think anybody would be mad about that.
There is another element of this too, where there's one difference in this debate. Bernie Sanders, for as much as I love the man, has also engaged in some degrees of populism that I'm not a huge fan of. Like, Bernie Sanders will engage in protectionist trade policies, which I think he would do a lot better than Trump's protectionist trade policies, but I'm still not a fan of them. And I don't think that that's like necessarily a great thing for us to do. Like, Bernie has been against immigrants, and I believe in certain cases where I would probably disagree with him. But that does not necessarily contextualize my views or Ben Burgis's views, which is interesting that he's focusing on Bernie Sanders. And the other element of it too, which is, I think this argument is phrased in entirely bad faith, is the line, and I'll just address it right now, the line that having more immigrants lowers wages, right? So there is an economic reason why this argument exists, and it's because having labor is a resource. So when you have a limited amount of labor, that hypothetically, the prices for labor should go up. However, because the free market doesn't work, wages don't go up when there's a limitation on wages. That's what we've seen right now. Wages are not going up right now, even though we have a massive labor shortage. So this is, and then when we actually look at policies, accepting immigrants right now is not going to lower wages. It's just not a fact. If we were paying all of our employees $30 an hour, you might see that could have potentially happened, but that's not going to happen here. And it's just a misphrasing of like contextual economic arguments.
Agreed. Let's go.
That instead of giving people the rights of Americans so that they aren't afraid to do things like organize unions, those are things that would essentially just legalize the status quo. This is a second tier of workers who are not going to have those citizenship rights, who it's much easier to get, it's easy, who you can kick out of the country if their employer decides they don't like them anymore. And I think that that is a completely different thing. I think it could also, so I think in that case, I think there's less of a contradiction there than you think. But hey, look, Bernie Sanders is not my shirt because I think that the man is infallible. I could rattle off a list of things that he's gotten wrong over the years, but the reason he is that I think he's been the most important champion of doing things like raising the minimum wage to $15 an hour, like giving everybody health care, ending the wars, et cetera, that would actually really materially benefit the majority of the population. And I guess I really struggle when I hear, conservatives being interested in the welfare of the working class suddenly when it's this issue of competition from low-wage workers, which is a question of pitting some workers over other workers. But when it's a question of doing things that would benefit workers in general, like raising the minimum wage, like giving everybody health care, then suddenly it seems to be a different story. Suddenly it seems to be that this is too interventionist. This is too administrative state. Kicking immigrants out seems like a big expansion of state power.
Okay,
I want a small yet strong government. Strong in what it does and foreign citizens.
I do actually, even though I am completely on Ben Burgess' side, I do actually think he's being a little bit weak here at the moment. And that's because I think he's letting Charlie getting away with like misphrasings of social democratic policy. I think doing stuff like focusing on like the use of oil from Norway, I think focusing on like the restriction of labor that these countries is doing and not combating them to the degree that he should be is letting these so in debate terms, what that means is he's letting these arguments flow. And I don't think he's doing a good job preventing them from moving by at the moment.
Let's see.
Do you have an opinion on that?
I think that I'm not necessarily averse to where he's at right now. He's keeping it conversational instead of more hostile. I guess it would be nice to see a little bit more of that out of him. However, I think the danger that you come across is, especially when you're like talking in the realm of socialism or democratic socialism, when you are speaking to others, especially conservatives, they're already viewing you as radicals. So if you go in hard, then it gives the perception that you're this extreme radical, and it validates their culture war image of you that they're trying to create. So I think that's why, a lot of times when people go up against folks like Charlie Kirk and these types, especially those who are from academia, they won't necessarily go in as hard because they understand that the optics of it, right? Because then all of a sudden it's like, oh, the radical socialist went in on Charlie Kirk, and he can spin that however he wants. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I agree with that. I don't so to rephrase what I mean a little, I don't think Ben Burgess has to go in harder. I just do think he needs to provide a counter narrative to what Charlie Kirk is saying. So how Charlie Kirk has managed to phrase the Norwegian country, is they thrive purely off of oil, and they restrict labor to a very strong degree. And would you agree that he's been able to phrase it that way?
I don't know. I think Ben Burgess has provided quite a bit of pushback on that. I think that he could be more illustrative in that pushback. He's kind of glossing over a little bit. I think more examples would probably help him to fuel his argument right here. But I don't think he's completely dismissive of it or not acknowledging of it. I just think that he probably could pull in some more examples to use that would create that counter narrative that you're talking about, right?
Yeah, and I'm not necessarily I don't think Ben Burgess is necessarily doing a bad job right now. But what I was saying is, if I was in that situation, I would want to prevent Charlie Kirk from characterizing the countries that I generally support in a rather conservative fashion.
Right. When we know that's not the case. Yeah, and it's like the thing with Denmark where, PM comes out and says we're not a socialist country. It's like, yeah, you just have a shit ton of social programs. Okay, buddy. You know, like, no, you're not a socialist country. You're not straight. You know, the means of production haven't been returned to the workers. No, but you've got quite a few social programs that makes it very cushy for workers to be able to do what they do there. So come on, you know, I think it's again, it's a little bit of a misnomer, a little bit of like, you know, playing with fucking definitions a little bit, you know, and I would have been a little bit more, I think actually you're right. I probably would have been a little bit more direct in attacking those definitions, you know. I love the fact that he's sitting there with a fucking book and Ben Burgis is just hitting from the hip, you know. Like, it says a lot, and I honestly think it doesn't make Charlie Kirk look good that he's got to sit there with a big book of shit in order to figure out what the fuck his beliefs are and how he's going to counter it. But that also tells you that he's probably pretty damn intimidated by Ben Burgis, you know?
Hey, I'm actually going to come out against that. I am pro-book. Even if you're, like, as dumb as bricks, I think if you're going to, like, make the best argument possible, Charlie Kirk is going to need that book.
Yeah, true. You know,
I'm giving him all the credit that he deserves.
We can afford him some training wheels, right?
Foreign citizens, sure, or illegals in the country should be deported, should be taken out. And I think there's a cultural aspect to it that deep down you agree with, and that's what Norway gets right. They realize if you don't speak the language, you don't have a shared culture, then there's something that all of a sudden makes it less like a nation and more like a colony or more like a temporary place for corporations to make money. Let's talk about the minimum wage. Sure. The reason why I don't want abrupt...
No.
Increase.
I would have gone back. I would have said, no, we're going back. No, sorry. No, we're not moving on. We're not talking about minimum wage. Let's air this out. So I know Ben's not going to go back to that, but I wish that he fucking would. I wish that he'd air that shit out. You know, you're right. He needs to air that shit out because otherwise that narrative is going to go by. And when Kirk's viewers watch it, they're going to take it as a win. And it's not a win. It's not a win if you know and have done your research on it. Like, it definitely is not a win for him. It's a bunch of mischaracterizations of a country that, you know, again, we just said has a ton of social policies that make it work the way it works. So.
And like the easy thing that you can always do, even if you don't want to, like, because they are in bad faith questions. So if you even want to like ignore like the characterizations, you should like purely ask, hey, if you like these countries so much, why don't we nationalize the healthcare industry? Right.
Do
stuff like, there's ways that you can like get around this stuff. And he should be doing it.
And I think that's another important thing is like, well, what's your solution? You know what I'm saying? Like, I haven't heard Charlie Kirk outline one solution. I've heard him be on the attack towards, not even democratic socialist countries, but SOCDEM countries, right? He's been on the constant attack on these countries, but he has yet to outline anything that he would do to materially improve anybody's life in this country. You know what I'm saying?
I do actually. He has to some degree. He has stated. I actually do disagree with that a little bit. I disagree that his solutions are bad. He has outlined limiting immigration massively. He has outlined using oils. So to be fair, he has had some retorts. I just think they're really bad ones. And like that's one of the
Oh, go ahead.
That can be like the difficult part of like looking at one of these debates because I can think someone has a really, but that doesn't mean that the person that's going to respond to it is going to do a great job either. So that can be like the difficulty and the importance of looking at these debates, in my opinion. Not that Ben Burgis is necessarily doing a bad job either. Just want to go a little bit more in depth.
Yeah, dig into Charlie a little bit. He can take it. You know, he's getting that coke money. You know, I'm not talking about the drug. I'm talking about the old men, but
and the drug money.
Probably that too. You know, a little of both.
Washington Post. A very credible new study on Seattle's $15 minimum wage says the following: workers have seen cut payrolls, they've been put off hiring, reducing hours, or letting their workers go. That is Seattle. Another study from just Target, just because Target raised their wages abruptly in
that's not true. I've read a lot about Seattle. Seattle is actually their industry up until COVID was doing very well with the $15 an hour minimum wage. So
Still's doing pretty well. I was just up there, and I know, like, and I will mention every taxi driver that I was with complained about how expensive things are there. So I will be fair to Charlie's point, but their economy is still doing pretty well. Like the people, there's tons of people still moving there. There's tons of like high end businesses, and even if things are a little bit expensive, it is doing pretty well.
Yeah, they're thriving. It's still a thriving metropolis. There's no question.
2019 shows that workers say their hours were cut, leaving them struggling. Another one.
Okay, so
I can go through them. I have a whole pack of them.
Let's pause and do the first
Seattle,
couple.
the same thing.
First
I go
couple,
through New York.
because in Seattle there have been a bunch of different studies, including one from UC Berkeley. I know.
Thank you.
That have, I don't know which one was published by Jeff Bezos' newspaper that you're referring to there.
Yes, I'm no fan of the Washington Post.
But there was another study from UC Berkeley saying that actually
By Jeff Bezos.
the industry had achieved its goals.
You just called him out for
Yeah,
using Jeff Bezos' newspaper. That was pretty good, man. And the way he snuck it in there, that was like real.
That's good. Maybe if some that's really good. I'll give him that.
I think I think if you watch, though, he is slipping a lot of things in there, just like boop. It's like
That was slick. I'll give him credit for that.
I know if you look at the
And
congressional
I liked how he
often
didn't
has
let
to
him
make a
keep
position.
talking.
yeah, she shut him up real quick on that one.
Love to cite. They said that if you raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour, and by the way, I thought it was interesting that you said abrupt, because I'm interested in how whether you'd be okay with it if you did it slowly. But,
I think moderately kept up with inflation, done prudently, especially as we're about to have a
But
period
just-
of
but
mass
just-
inflation. I think that coupled with a workers' tax cut and other pro-growth policies wouldn't be the worst thing for the economy.
Okay.
No, I think that's a moderate economic position.
but keeping up with inflation, right? Like you're still saying the purchasing power of low-wage workers. should
So,
be-
So
just so you know what Charlie's pitching right now, just so everyone can know, he's most likely pitching the whatever it was called. Who is the conservative that all the conservatives hate right now? The one who ran for president in 2012.
Who is it?
Mitt Romney.
Oh.
Mitt Romney. So Mitt Romney proposed a minimum wage minimum wage increase, which was $10 an hour, and it stayed there permanently, and it just rose with inflation. That was Mitt Romney's proposal. And I have a feeling that's what Kirk is proposing right now.
Yeah.
So to be fair, that is what's happening.
We're already there,
And-
Charlie. We're already doing it. You know. Thanks for the non-solution.
now. And I would say that if you want to run this argument that, well, it's actually going to hurt, it's actually going to hurt workers more than help
Well,
them.
the studies show
well,
that it
I don't
has
think the studies do show that.
Well, so here's what it says.
so
Low-wage
here's,
workers-
here's
I'll
why.
let you finish.
I mean, like, I understand what you're saying, that the studies show, some of the studies show that minimum wage increases lead to increased unemployment. That's the big claim that's usually made. Sometimes people will also say that, leads to a reduction in hours, but the big one is usually increased unemployment. And so I'd say two things about this. First of all, the effect of minimum wage increases on unemployment is like the most studied thing in empirical economics in the last several decades. And there are studies you can find that say yes. There are a lot of studies that you can find that say no. And a word I almost never hear from people who say that it's going to lead to unemployment increases is meta-study, right? In other words, if you look at a bunch of studies over time and see, like, since you can have, very small sample sizes and, and making big conclusions from very small sample sizes is generally, and then like making a big deal about them in the press, that's how people end up believing that plants can think and coffee cures cancer, that they looked at like some study with some super small sample size. But when you do the meta study of a bunch of different studies, most of those show no. But let's say, for the sake of argument, yes, let's say that it does lead to some unemployment increase.
Because you agree, certain studies do show that.
Yes, certain studies do show that. I think most of them, and especially meta studies over time, say no, but sure, let's say yes. So if yes, would that mean that it was going to hurt workers more than help them? Well, we could look at like the Congressional Budget Office, what they said in 2019, which was that 2/3 confidence that you'd have a range of unemployment effects somewhere in between 0 and 3.7 million, and most likely they said 1.3 billion people would lose their jobs. Now that's bad. I don't want 1.3 billion people to lose their
That's a lot
jobs.
of jobs.
But they also said that 27 million people would keep the jobs they have right now and be paid more and would have more purchasing power. And so we say, okay, we have 27 million people who are being lifted out of poverty by this. We have 1.3 billion people out of jobs. Now, even if there was nothing that you could do about that, I'd still say that treating this as a knockdown, well, this is going to help poor people, working poor people, more than it's to hurt them, more than it's going to help them, I don't think makes sense. But also, I don't think we have to accept that those 1.3 billion people, if that's a true estimate, have to be permanently out of a job. We could have public works programs that could employ those 1.3 billion people, give them dignified,
let me build
unionized
that more.
public sector jobs.
I'm
And
not
if
sure
you don't
about that
think there's
argument.
Plenty of work for those 1.3 billion people.
Did you like that argument?
I think that, well, he's steel manning him a little bit, right? So he's saying, even in worst case scenario, let's say you're right, this is what you're looking at, right? I don't think it's necessarily bad to steel man him a little bit, especially when he's coming from like a democratic socialist perspective where, there would be government jobs program, like jobs guarantees and stuff like that. I think that's what he's getting to. being that he's providing solutions in his argument back to Charlie Kirk, even with steel manning the Charlie Kirk's argument, I think that's a valid approach, because he's not saying that that's going to happen. He's saying even if, let's say that even if, like, your study is right, even though I know it's not, which he prefaced in the beginning. So I think he is doing a sound job of like arguing against that, because he's pointing out that, like, I don't think it's going to do that. But
let me rephrase. So let me focus on this one hyper part of his argument. So I don't know if I would say losing 1.3 million jobs is a plus, even if we do raise all wages. I'm not sure whether. How do you feel about that argument specifically?
Let's say again now.
That even if we lose 1.3 million wages, jobs, that the jobs that we keep are going to be way more benefited.
Well, I mean, if you think about how many people would get raises from the minimum wage, I think arguably you could say that. Plus, it's not just the people getting more because they're now getting a higher minimum wage. It's the people who are in job roles that are require more competency, or may require, more education or something like that. They're also going to see a bump, because now the baseline for wages is higher. So that creates an opportunity for wages to go up across the board, because these companies will now have to be competitive. Otherwise, I've always said it like this. Okay. If I can make $30 working at McDonald's versus making $30 doing some fucking super technical job that requires a lot of extra effort and headache and, continuing education, shit like that, I'll go take the job at fucking McDonald's, man. You got to fight for my employment now. You got to fight for the worker now. And so I think in that sense, I think he's correct. I do think it's a valid argument.
To some degree, I can agree with that. Like, if we're looking at the minimum wage argument, like Destiny has comes out against the minimum wage, right? He says that the raising $15 is dumb, and I think taking Destiny. Would you say that taking Destiny's argument is steel manning Charlie Kirk?
It sounds like it. Yeah, sounds a little bit like it.
So what I believe that Charlie Kirk says, and what everyone says, and I'm sure you would agree, other than unions as the solution, is the best solution is specifically a statewide minimum wage where we could control minimum wage on different levels in different states. So the minimum wage in California would be way higher than the minimum wage in Missouri. And that's the typical proposed solution from the left that we see. Otherwise, Charlie wouldn't be in favor of that anyway, but he might be more in favor of it. And he'd probably actually be very in favor because he's very interested in leaving it to the states. But when you get into these arguments, the main area they have to look at is there may be some specific businesses that get disadvantaged by a minimum wage increase. You might have small businesses that typically are thriving on very small margins, and they'll have to readdress, right?
So I think there's a way around that, though, because you have to look at the totality of the program, right? Because if we're talking about democratic socialism, we're also talking about the ability to have a socialized medicine, right? So if you have socialized medicine, these small businesses no longer have the burden of paying for health insurance, which my dad owned a small business for many years. The most expensive part of his business was paying for benefits. It wasn't the salaries, it wasn't the wages, it wasn't keeping the lights on in the building. It wasn't paying the court fees when you had to go, file documents. It was the health benefits. It was the health insurance. So I think it's really, if you take that burden off of those small businesses, there is a possibility for them to increase wages. Also, I think that right now we're already in an exploitative state with our workers, and we do let too many people who do not have the capital to open a business and continue to exploit those workers. Now, what you could do around that, let's say that the healthcare resolution isn't enough, I think that you could create subsidies for small businesses to succeed, or encourage them to move to a cooperative situation where there's a broader investment amongst the workers to see the business bear fruit, and I think through that the business could succeed and flourish, so.
I agree with you. The thing that I'm the problem is that we do kind of have to do, unfortunately, we do kind of have to divorce the minimum wage increase from Medicare for all, which is just unfortunately not something that we could like push through electorally. But absolutely correct point there. Probably a little bit unfeasible. The reason that I am like interested, and I'm not a huge fan, and like this is the only reason that I think you can make an optical argument against what Ben Burgis just said there. And the reason that I think he could do it is I think that a federal jobs guarantee is a very hard pitch to Charlie's audience.
Yeah,
and
because they'd look at it as conscription. I could see that.
Mm-hmm. So one of the things that so I think a way to phrase it, which you might be able to get conservatives on your side, is, hey, if you think that this is really going to harm like small businesses and lower unemployment, how about we just have some tax cuts on these small businesses? I hear that you quite like that. Why don't we like try and accommodate for like some of these areas? So for the people that are going to be most affected aren't going to be harmed as much.
Yeah.
Or
and that's actually what I addressed as well, saying that there should be subsidies for small businesses so they do have the opportunity to flourish. So,
and then like just a slight thing you could do this is instead of saying a federal jobs guarantee, you could maybe say increased military personnel, which is an argument that you could make for unemployment, which is a little bit better optically to what Charlie would want, you know, and what his audience is open to. Yeah, I think I'm interested to see how Charlie responds to this.
To do in terms of federal public works. Trust me, I could give you a long list of things that could be doing.
Let me build out the study, and then I want to ask you a question.
Sure.
So low-wage workers on average now clock 9% fewer hours, earn $125 less each month. That's Seattle. There's another one. New York City businesses struggle to keep up after a minimum wage increase. Would you support eliminating the FICA contribution for workers? That's a 7% tax on wages before we even talked about raising the minimum wage.
Well, I'd like to talk about raising the minimum wage with no preconditions.
But why not the workers' tax cut? That's what I always don't understand, because we tax workers at 7%. 7% of our workers here lose their paycheck as half of their FICA contribution. I never
7% is a fucking minuscule amount. Like, he's got to understand, these people are making next to nothing. That 7% isn't making the difference as to whether or not they're going to get by. And I think it's a tokenized bullshit ass argument. I'm sorry.
What was the specific tax? Like it's
7% FICA tax on payroll.
How do you spell FICA?
FICA.
Okay. Let's take a look. I'm curious what this specifically is. You can continue the video.
hear that from workers' rights advocates. Why?
Well, I think that first of all, the first question you have to ask is what's the money that's going to generate that for the workers. And the second question that you want to ask
Pause
is
real
what's
quick. Yeah, this tax is for fucking Social Security and Medicare.
Yeah. You see what I'm saying? Like, so he wants to take away your Social Security and Medicare tax. So then that would deplete our coffers, our already depleted coffers for Social Security that the government needs to pay back. Why not do that a little bit more? Because fuck Social Security, right? It doesn't matter if you have money when you're old.
Dumb argument.
Lost on the other end in terms of services if that's cut. And I think that
and he just hit on it too.
Having those
Hold on. I need to back that up because Ben Burgis addressed that right, we got it right in the middle of it.
Mm-hmm.
So I just want to pull it back just a second to see if we can capture
more
that.
purchasing power. And so we say, okay, we have 27 million people who are being lifted out of poverty by this. We have 1.3 billion people out of jobs. Now, even if there was nothing that you could do about that, I'd still say that treating this as a knockdown, well, this is going to help poor people, working poor people more than it's hurt them, more than it's going to help them, I don't think makes sense. But also, I don't think we have to accept that those 1.3 billion people, if that's a true estimate, have to be permanently out of a job. We can have public works programs that could employ those 1.3 million people, give them dignified, unionized public sector jobs. And if you don't think that there's plenty of work for those 1.3 million people to do in terms of federal public works, trust me, I could give you a long list of things that could be doing.
Let me build out the study, and then I want to ask you a question.
Sure.
So low-wage workers on average now clock 9% fewer hours, earn $125 less each month. That's Seattle. There's another one. New York City businesses struggle to keep up after a minimum wage increase. Would you support eliminating the FICA contribution for workers? That's a 7% tax on wages before we even talk.
I also want to mention, that is a non sequitur from Charlie. He just wanted to finish reading the study and then moved on to something entirely separate.
Yeah.
FICA had nothing to do with the study that he was reading.
Talked about raising the minimum wage.
Well, I'd like to talk about raising the minimum wage with no preconditions.
But why not the workers' tax cut? That's what I always don't understand.
You can just respond to me on Twitter. Give me a second.
7%.
What's that?
You can keep going. He just responded to me on Twitter.
Our workers here lose their paycheck as half of their FICA contribution. I never hear that from workers' rights advocates. Why?
Well, I think that first of all, the first question you have to ask is what's the money that's going to be generated by that for those workers. Then the second question that you want to ask is what's going to be lost on the other
He just
end
called
in
me a
terms of
selfish
services.
19-year-old.
What did you tell him?
So I was watching the Dr. Heem, Dylan and Vosh video, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they were having a meme debate about like whether it's okay for children to take all the candy from the Halloween, like for people that leave it out on Halloween. And Heem said that he wouldn't hold any like it's fine to do even if you're like up to 19 years old. So I said, while watching the Bring Up podcast, Heem said that it's okay for me, a 19-year-old, to go around and steal every bowl of candy left out. And then Heem says, not okay, just that you're young AF and I have almost no expectations for a 19-year-old selfish kid.
Dude, I gotta admit, he's funny as fuck, dude. He fucking makes me laugh so much when I watch his shit.
Think that paying people
let's
higher
keep
minimum
going.
wage,
I just had
having
to
those
talk about
27
that.
million people get a living
I can
wage.
give them a 7%.
And-
I can give them a 7% wage increase tomorrow.
And what-
It's called cutting the FICA tax.
Yeah.
Every working person deserves 7% of their wages that are currently being taken by them by the government. Why don't you instantaneously
So,
agree?
so what are you going to? Well, because I know what the other shoe is that's going to drop there. What are you going to cut to pay for that tax
Okay,
increase?
so there's plenty. I could name a whole litany of departments I think I would cut to try to pay for it. But let's pretend that it's paid for, like everything Washington D.C. says.
Yes,
Wouldn't
if
it be worth
you
it?
could cut workers' wages and not
Wouldn't work wages, the
sorry,
taxes.
the taxes on workers' wages. If you could cut that, and on the other end, there would be absolutely no loss in anything that's a beneficial thing that's going to make workers' lives better. Then sure, why not? But I think
glad we agree.
I think you should still raise the minimum wage because I think
Thank you.
again having those 27 million people now having a living wage, having the ripple effects for lots of people who are already making more than minimum wage, it's going to increase their wages, and then 1.3 million people need new jobs. Trust me, we can take care of that.
So you're obviously no fan of President Trump or his administration. During his presidency, the bottom 10% of workers actually had an income grow faster than the top 10% of workers. And so what we saw was a real blue-collar boom over in the prior administration.
I think what
without having to abruptly raise the minimum wage. And the reason was, let me just finish, is an emphasis on entrepreneurship. This is an indicator that I don't hear talked about a lot, which is how many new businesses are being started. And when you
Burgis
raise
is
the minimum
about to
wage,
go
it's
in.
harder for the deli owner, the dry cleaner to enter into the market because all of a sudden the labor pool is like, man, $15 an hour, I could barely pay to keep the lights on. So if we want new business, and you agree, entrepreneurship is a good thing, right?
I think it's good to have new businesses. I'd like more of them to be organized as worker cooperatives.
We're going to talk about unions in a second.
We can get into that.
I want to get deep into unions.
But I do just want to say on what you're claiming about the Trump economy, because I think this is an important point, right? So yes, sure. Why? What explains those numbers that you just mentioned? You'd say it's a new emphasis in entrepreneurship. I'd say it's two things.
I could go through other things,
Okay,
too, including an energy renaissance.
But I think the primary things are two things. One, that quite a few states during that time period actually did raise their minimum wage, and I think that had a big effect on that. Two, sure, that employment increases give workers more bargaining power, which a lot of conservatives now object to. They say, oh, nobody wants to work. But employment increases give workers more bargaining power in the labor market, and that's a good thing. But that's not really this new emphasis on entrepreneurship that Trump was doing. If you look at all the employment figures, whether you're looking at the overall civilian employment rate in the United States or whether you're breaking it down, black, white, Hispanic, whatever, all of those, you see the same trend, which is that in 2009, at the beginning of the Obama presidency, when the effects of the 2008 crash were really coming in, all of those were way up here. That there was like, you have like 10% unemployment. Over the course of the 8 years of Obama, it goes from 10% to 4.7% overall civilian, unemployment. And then sure, into the 4 years of Trump, or like we'll give them a pass for the COVID part, but under those years of Trump, then you go from 4.7 to 3.5. So that is a continuation at an overall slower rate, but a continuation of what had happened before. And the reason I'm bringing that up is not that I'm a big Obama guy. I mean, look,
No, I know you're not.
as you know, I'm a Bernie Sanders would be a good start guy, but
And I want to get into that, too.
yeah, absolutely.
Because I think you are
Sure.
cleverly cloaking your
Okay, well, I
radicalism
don't-
in 3 issues that are...
Saku shit.
we're gonna-
Thank you
we're
very
gonna-
much
I
for
don't
the
think so. I think
follow. Glad to have you with us.
What?
Baby steps in the right direction.
Okay.
I guess-
Pause that real quick. You're also muted. Talk about bad faith. That's cleverly cloaking your radicalism in your free market arguments, is what it just said. Is that here? Go back a second. I want to hear that full statement. Like 10 seconds.
Okay, let's go back.
That's plenty. There you go.
That Trump was doing, if you look at all the employment figures, whether you're looking at the overall civilian employment rate in the United States or whether you're breaking it down, black, white, Hispanic, whatever, all of those, you see the same trend, which is that in 2009, at the beginning of the Obama presidency, when the effects of the 2008 crash were really coming in, all of those were way up here. There was like, you have like 10% unemployment. Over the course of the 8 years of Obama, it goes from 10% to 4.7% overall civilian, unemployment. And then sure, under the 4 years of Trump, or, like we'll give him a pass for the COVID part, but but like under those years of Trump, then you go from 4.7 to 3.5. So that is a continuation at an overall slower rate, but a continuation of what had happened before. And the reason I'm bringing that up is not that I'm a big Obama guy. I mean, look,
No, I know you're not.
as you know, I'm a Bernie Sanders would be a good start guy. But
And I want to get into that.
yeah, absolutely.
Because I think you are
Sure.
cleverly cloaking your
Okay, well, I
radicalism
don't-
in 3 issues that are agreed.
I don't-
We're gonna get
I
to the root
don't
of that.
think so. I think I front loaded.
Wait,
that.
okay.
You're really cloaking your radicalism in 3 points that we agree upon. What the fuck?
Wait, first, I'm not sure what they even agreed upon here. I don't think that they agreed yet.
I haven't heard an agreement, but
And then cleverly cloaking your radicalism. Why don't you ask him a question about what he believes? I don't think he's trying to hide anything. It's been like... So,
this
I
is
guess you
why-
could say...
This is why I don't know if you've watched much of Dr. Rashad Ritchie's debates, but he's like, if you ever watch him in the bullpen, he's got the bullpen on his show.
Mm-hmm.
He asks the people up front to describe what they believe and what they think about X subject, whatever it is they're debating. He says, I don't want to presume to know, what you believe. Tell me what you believe in your own words, and he ends up being able to use that quite a bit for fodder for his arguments, and I think anybody debating should, if they're the first one speaking, they should really, really lean on that. I think it's a really good strategy because it gives you the opportunity to pick apart what somebody else's belief systems are, right? And you can pick out the holes because they're only going to get so much time to explain it. You know what I mean?
Well, yeah, and let's also just focus on that is a problem that needs to be addressed, but let's point out the reason Charlie Kirk said that. Because Charlie Kirk doesn't think that. He knows that Ben Burgis has been incredibly honest, and has actually been incredibly fair to Kirk as well. But the point that he said that was to discount everything he has said up until now, and saying it as if he doesn't really believe any of that, and that's not what this crazy socialist is really on about.
Right, yeah. Oh, no, he doesn't really believe that. He's way more radical than that. He wants to send us all to the gulags.
Exactly. Here, let me test a tweet by you. I'm thinking of saying, so Heem told me he has no expectations for me because I'm selfish. I said, let me break all your expectations by letting me crush it on Pardon the Heem Interruption.
There you
Jason,
go. There you
all right,
go.
let's go.
Has been said these would be baby steps in the right direction, and I'm very confused
I
about
guess-
how you can be a populist without
We're all
supporting those baby
we're all
steps.
Hegelians now, I suppose. Let me ask you this question.
But I do want to finish the point because I think it's an important one, right? That it's not that I think Obama is great. It's that I think that if you're going to say the populist thing about Trump economics, even though this is a guy who appointed hardcore union busters to the National Labor Relations Board. This is a guy who tried to throw millions of people off of healthcare, in terms of going against the Medicaid expansion. This is a guy, who tried to make it a lot harder to qualify for food aid for those families he talked about. That the big populist thing is that he oversaw economic growth and hence job growth. Well, hey, if that's enough to be a populist, Barack Obama was a better populist than he was, and Bill Clinton was a big populist because he oversaw lots of economic growth
and
in
that's
the
not what I'm saying.
1990s.
What I'm saying, though, is that it's mischaracterized that
Okay,
the people that
pause
you
real
care
quick.
about, the lower workers, actually did really well.
What I would hit on there, because I do actually, if I was, I think that was a good response. But what I think would have been really good to hit on is I think, because Charlie Kirk opened this argument by saying why he thinks the unemployment fell so much during Trump's presidency. And then
Right.
he points out that it has fallen. Do you remember what reason that he said Charlie Kirk gave?
What the fuck did he say?
He said that Trump has inspired a
Entrepreneurial yeah.
culture, which, to be fair, culture can, creating a new culture can change your effect in policy. For example, as soon as Biden came into the presidency, we had a mass influx of immigrants because the culture that Trump created was so anti-immigrant that no one wanted to. A lot of people didn't want to come.
Yeah, they feared
But-
coming. They feared ending up in the fucking I'm going to call them internment camps because that's what the fuck they were. They were internment camps.
So, it is true that culture can change, the material, politics of all the day-to-day lives, but he would need to point to how many new jobs were created and how these statistics actually lay into it, and what Trump specifically did that carried this chain throughout. If
Well-
it was really entrepreneurship, then then why did we see so many businesses fail under Trump?
That's
if it was
right.
truly... Mhm.
And anybody that understands the way the markets work and understands how presidential economic policy works is, that the president inherits in his first 2 years of his presidency the economic legacy of the previous president. So when you talk about, the unemployment numbers dropping, you have to remember that the unemployment numbers dropped most significantly in Trump's first 2 years in office. It's after that, actually, that you saw the degradation of pay and, different things like that. Granted, we could say COVID was a part of it. I don't mind ascribing some of it to that, right? But he didn't do anything to grow wages beyond what Obama had already done. Like, he wasn't making moves in that direction, because the minute you do stuff to crush like union membership and organizing, people lose their bargaining power. And if they lose their bargaining power, we already know businesses have a required interest. Okay. It is a legal interest. It is illegal for them not to think about their bottom line. All right. That's the way corporations are set up. So inherently, unless we force their hand, they are legally obliged to find a way not to spend the money on labor, on ways to pocket the money and give that back to their stockholders. So by that very nature, without having government intervention into those things, their legal liability says that they have to try to short the employees. They have to try to create more economic growth for their stockholders. And that means doing whatever they can to get cheap labor,
And just so I can quickly, because Obi-Wan Kenobi in your chat, I do want to respond why we talk about the minimum wage specifically. And I think we kind of left it unaddressed. And what I think the reason that, while obviously increasing lowering the price of living decently is incredibly important, the other element of it too is when we watch businesses, they kind of have to be forced to raise wages. And you can force them through a bunch of different means. You can force them through government policy. You can force them through unions. But either way, they don't seem to do it of their own volition. See, and what we've talked about, why would you raise an existing person's wage that's already going to do the same amount of work for you, as opposed to hiring someone new? And that's one of the big problems with this situation. Now, I'm in favor of super strong unions to raise have these businesses forced to do it, because collectively you have a much stronger bargaining power than otherwise. But if we just lower the cost of living, that might just result in more people getting hired at a non-livable wage, and that would be the main thing that I'd be worried about.
Well said. Let's see.
Well, under those 4 years, I think Trump could have been more conservative, more populist in certain things. And just to clarify on the food stamp issue, millions of people got off of food stamps under Trump voluntarily because their wages went up. But I don't want to get too bogged down. I really don't want to get too bogged down on the
you had that extra 1% change of unemployment going down, which is a continuation of previous trends.
So let me kind of ask you more broadly, I guess we go into.
He should have said that's a continuation of the previous presidency and made it very, very clear. I think he glossed over that way too much, because that was the sticking point that Charlie was riding, right? I would have nailed him on that. I would have gone in on that a little bit more. I think that was a little bit weak.
And the other element of it too is, and I think the great response is, oh, so you think food stamps are working? They've served a great job in helping people in their time of need.
Right? Yeah. Hey, look, they worked. So you're in favor of food stamps, right?
Some of these other aspects.
I have a question I'd love to ask you in a minute, by the way, but go for it.
Yeah, you're free to do that too, by the way. Do you trust the government?
Do I trust the government? Do I trust the government to tell me the truth, to do things that no, the government by and large that I think that those millionaires and billionaires, the guy in the shirt likes to talk about, exert vastly too much influence. But here's where I think people often go wrong from that true premise that the government is untrustworthy. I think premise is fine, but the conclusion, therefore we should have less government in the sense of we should have less expansive social services, we shouldn't give everybody health care. I think that that's a fundamental confusion, because I think that there's a difference between talking about what the government can do to you And there we're talking about police, ICE, the expansion of the national security state,
Yeah,
and,
this is important.
what the government has a legal obligation to do for you in terms of supporting what I would see as fundamental human rights like healthcare and education.
Let me tell you where I think there's a flaw in this, and I really want you to talk.
I liked his distinction there. I thought that distinction was really good.
Yeah, and I think drawing the line here can be important because this is like the very recent debate, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So what Charlie Kirk's going to like point to is he's going to point to the CDC. He's going to point to like a lot of medical information that we've looked at, which, to our knowledge, has no reason to look in this direction. And I really think that like the reason that he's saying these things because it's good to have a healthy distrust of power, and I'm sure both of us would agree on that.
Oh,
but that doesn't mean that everything that the government says is going to be wrong.
Exactly.
Or it doesn't say all information that comes from power is always wrong. And like you can always take a look at whether there are like negative consequences. For example, I think what's a power source like Fox News. Fox News has plenty of incentives to mislead the public.
Sure.
However, the government doesn't really have many incentives to mislead people on issues like COVID.
Yeah.
We want to get past COVID.
So, like, I actually posted about this the other day. I don't want to veer too much off track, but I posted about this. Maybe it was even today. People that are like anti-mask and anti-vax, what they don't realize is they truly are the useful idiot that our country's enemies love, because they're the exact people who are derailing our economy, derailing our public health, derailing our ability to function as a society, because we're all still, a lot of us are on lockdown or, having to go through this fucking bullshit. So I think a lot of times when people have this like weird distrust of Fauci or the CDC and therefore are anti-mask, anti-vax and all this shit, they're playing right into our enemies' hands. And they're the ones that claim to be the biggest patriots. I just think that's horribly ironic.
And you know what else? They are also inherently increasing the government's power. For example, if you don't get vaccinated and that's harms our country, you're making it so the government has to step in and force people to get vaccinated. You're like, by not doing what like will actually help the country, you're forcing the government to step in and do more work. Yeah.
The work that you don't want them to do. So just, let's not get the mandates and everybody just go get the vax because it's the right thing to fucking do, But hey, fuck me. Freedom, am I right?
I have the freedom to restrict my freedom and then push it on other people.
Exactly.
There must be bureaucrats to enforce these things. You need the administrative state. So then you get the CDC, you get the NIH, you get unregulated agencies that you, as being someone who focuses on democracy, focuses on the power of the people, where is the check and balance against the CDC, the NIH, HHS? For every government program, you need hundreds of thousands of...
He does realize that they don't have the power to tell you what the fuck to do. They're merely an advisory capacity, right? Like,
I would say... Yeah, and the check and balance is that people are not listening to the fucking CDC right now.
Right? Like, just take a look. A lot of good they're doing and enforcing that shit if they're this totalitarian regime, they suck at it. They're really bad at it.
Man.
America
has failed at creating this regime that that the conservatives think that we've created.
Right.
Like, man.
The cabal is so dangerous. You have Trumpers storming fucking the Capitol on January 6th, and they couldn't even stop them. That's how dangerous the cabal is, Wow, we're doing a bang-up job on our authoritarianism. Damn it.
Man.
So you say you don't trust the government, yet you support expanding the social services, which will then necessarily expand government. Why do you want to expand something you don't trust?
Well, first of all, congratulations on the French vocabulary. I like it. But
I have other words too. We could après no les deluge, which means after me the flood. We could talk about all my favorite French terms.
Okay, pause.
You write for the Jacobin magazine for goodness sake, so we could.
What? Your response. Congrats on the French word. Using that French word. I know other words too.
I know words.
Man.
Yay!
I don't know if that was meant to come off as cute, and it did like relieve. It put a little bit of levity to the conversation, but that was not the way.
This is as Boba Fett would say, this is not the way.
Man.
Oh God, he's so bad, dude. I'm sorry. The fact that like we're even talking about Ben Burgis having some bad arguments in this, like the simple fact that Charlie Kirk is just kind of shooting himself in the foot with a bunch of the shit he's saying. Like it's
and to be
like,
fair, we're only criticizing Ben Burgis of making stronger arguments. We're not saying that he's making bad arguments.
Yeah, we just wanted to be a little more forceful, a little bit more illustrative,
exchange notes on Robespierre and Jean-Jacques Rousseau. I've only read the Confessions once. Go ahead.
Okay, well, I'd be happy to do all of that. Although, my French is like Duolingo. I can't do that much. But
I'm done. I promise.
But I would say that if you don't want to use that, that's the big objection.
No,
Here, let me flex my brain. I know French. I know some French, not all French. I just know some French sayings. I'm going to throw them out there just to show you I'm as smart as you because I couldn't finish college.
True.
This is him having a moment where he's definitely his inferiority complex is kicking into high gear right now.
Man, the right is getting better at comedy and the left is scared.
Even if it's unintended, right?
That's part of the objection. It's an element of it.
Sure. So let's start with that element. So if you don't want bureaucrats to have more power, then the thing that you should really object to, right? Because you said earlier, you think we got to have some kind of social safety net. So we're agreeing that there are some social services programs. We're arguing about how expansive they should be and how they should work. So
generous versus limited.
Sure. Okay, but this is the thing. If you want those bureaucrats to have less power, you don't want limited. That's the last thing that you want. You want generous, and here's why. Here's why. I know. Like I really like what you just did there. That was some good.
So to restrain their power, you must give them a lot of power.
No, you're not giving them any power. You're taking away their power. It's a really simple argument. Here's how it goes. That means-tested programs give power to bureaucrats. When you say you have to jump through all these hoops to qualify for something, and there's some bureaucrat who gets to decide whether you get it or not, bureaucrats have more power. Whereas when you say this is a legal right,
cuts them off. Here's why you're wrong.
No Canadian is having a bureaucrat decide whether they qualify for healthcare. Or in Finland, you talked about all of the policies that in Norway that you thought would be an issue for me. Finland
is the poorest
where they have. Okay, I don't think it's because of this, but in Finland where they don't even have private schools, and certainly you have a right to higher education as a citizen, the way that you have historically in lots of countries, and I think it's worked very well. But when you have that, you don't have students jumping through financial aid, bureaucracy, hurdles, and does this person qualify to get school? Does that person qualify to school? Where bureaucrats have the power to decide what's up, because that's the case where bureaucrats have power over you, and everybody gets something as a right of citizenship. Bureaucrats have no power in that circumstance.
But let me ask you something though. So you want Medicare for all?
Yeah.
Yet HHS is the largest civilian branch of our government. So as we have expanded Medicare, as we've expanded Medicaid, it hasn't been means tested as you want. We have hundreds of thousands of desk workers that are doing the means testing. Are you qualified? Yeah. Medicare reimbursements, and so even under your example. But Medicaid, it's woefully idealistic. The point is,
Medicaid is a means
you
testing.
cannot have a generous social program without a massive bureaucratic and, dare I say, corrupt administrative state.
Well,
Woodrow Wilson would even say that. You need the administrative state.
You think I like Woodrow Wilson, the guy who...
Probably. He was a college professor,
and
a college president. So he's got...
Oh, God, dude. Like, he is fucking... This is such a straw man bunch of bullshit, dude. What the fuck does Woodrow Wilson have to do with this shit? And
I noticed that he does that a lot, too. Like... It would be one thing if he said even Bernie Sanders would agree with it, which is one thing. But bringing up Woodrow Wilson out of nowhere makes no sense. What that comes down to is like it's. Well, here I'll let you give your thoughts.
Well, so what he's doing is he's saying, well, you see, Medicaid. It's had to be so expansive, and that's why the HHS is the largest government organizational structure, or what have you, that's a civilian. The problem with that is that he's right now, he's making Ben Burgis's argument for him, because he's arguing against means testing. Because the reason that you have that bureaucracy is because in order to get on Medicaid, you have to be within a certain income threshold. Right? Which means that there has to be means testing, which means somebody's got to sit at that desk and go through and make sure that you qualify for this. And you have to go through the red tape and yada, yada. I know, I've been through it. I've been on Medicaid. And it is a process. I've even gotten denied when I was out of work and had no fucking money because of the bureaucracy of it all. So, but the problem is that he thinks he's advocating for like no Medicaid or limited social safety net, he doesn't realize that he is right now making Ben Burgis's argument, which is that you remove the means testing, you remove the bureaucracy. You don't need all those people working in that industry, in that service, to do that, because now everybody just qualifies. Then you're just talking about pumping through claims, which we already fucking do. Like, it's already built into the system. So that was my whole thing on it.
Yeah, and like also another thing to point out, if we look at, for example, let's take a look at the United Kingdom, the system that I would probably say has the worst national healthcare system, like other than the United States, but is still much preferable to ours. They spend less on their system than we do on ours.
Yeah,
like per capita too, not just a less because they have less people.
Agreed.
So they have a smaller system than our existing current one, and we should look towards it.
And honestly, like I've said this before because I'm in the industry, I know. If the entire country went into like a single payer, we would have a vast risk pool, which is why it would be cheaper for everybody. The larger risk pool you have, the cheaper it is for each individual and the cheaper it is for the administration of the program. That's just basic common sense if you have worked at all in health insurance. And then because you're able to buy bulk services, prescriptions, medical equipment, all this stuff, everything goes down. The price goes down because, as we know, for all our capitalists out there, supply and demand. If you are buying more at a time, the price goes down. That's it. That's it. That's the economics of it, and that's market economics. That's Charlie Kirk's economics. So you can speak to him on those terms, and that should make sense. But he's going to tell you why it won't work because bureaucracy. Although
and also,
we took care of the bureaucracy part by not means testing anybody. So where does that leave him? What wiggle room does he have?
And to also respond to Duty's comment, which was earlier, we aren't in favor of when we talk about a mask or a vaccine mandate. We're not in favor of making it for people who can't medically take it.
Yeah, I think that's different too. Like because Guillain-Barré is very serious. My soon-to-be stepdad, as of Saturday, has Guillain-Barré because of a vaccine that he got a long time ago. So he can't physically get the COVID vaccine. It could kill him. Totally fine. I don't think anybody that medically shouldn't get it should be forced to get it. But I think that if you are medically able to get it and you don't have any limitations, I see no problem with a business choosing to do that, especially a business that has a lot of interactions with the public, because they themselves could end up, finding themselves in some kind of liability situation if, say, a bunch of people go to their restaurant, for example, and everybody's getting COVID from going to that restaurant. You could argue that there could potentially be some civil liability if the restaurant isn't taking measures to protect its patrons and its employees. So, I don't know. To me, it seems like it would be smart for a business to do that, just to CYA,
Yeah. Are you familiar with the story that Obi-Wan Kenobi is talking about right now? It seems like you have talked about this before. With their most recent message.
Let me see. The one about calling out the non-subscription insurance industry?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I need more context. I'm not sure what he's referring to.
All right. Well, if you have more context, please feel free to send it. Let's get back into this. We're not even halfway through this.
Okay. Trust me, neither of those things are in any points for me. But
content, baby, content.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that
That's fair.
But I mean, Woodrow Wilson is the guy who resegregated the federal bureaucracy after
trust me,
it integrated. He put Eugene J. V. Debs in jail. Nobody on the left is going to say Woodrow Wilson is a hero. Liberals, nobody on the left. But I was just going to say,
I know plenty of people that would, but that's fine.
I don't think you're going to find a lot of
SER,
socialists who
LBJ.
Who the fuck is this guy? Nobody thought Woodrow Wilson was good for the left. Where are you at, dude? Like, I'm sorry. I'll stop. I'm just gonna let it go.
And to also be fair, I do go in some elements. I think what Woodrow Wilson tried to do was okay. I'm not like fully against Woodrow Wilson. This is like a weird segue into nonsense. Now the left like absolutely supports Well, some of them do, some of them hate him, but absolutely supports FDR. That's entirely separate from fucking Woodrow Wilson.
Mm-hmm. And FDR did some horrible shit too. I mean, the Asian internment camps were fucking abhorrent. You know, like,
Yep.
It just so happens you happen to have some really good economic policies. I don't know.
We're not going to complain
all
about
these
Social
people.
Security for now.
What's that?
We're not going to complain about Social Security at the moment.
Right. Exactly.
Believe in a strong administrative
Well, I
state.
mean, you're rattling off a bunch of liberals, but that's okay. We don't need to argue about the historical figures. Let's just say this. If you're talking about administrative state, bureaucracy, well, your example is...
Also,
which
really
is a
quick to
means-tested
make
program.
that point,
And
Ben Burgis, to be fair, to know the audience that you're in, you would have to preface that you are not a liberal. Conservatives don't know the difference between liberals and leftists anyway.
Yeah, dude. Well,
so he would need to preface that.
I think it's deliberate. You know, it's a deliberate pejorative. You know, and they intentionally mix up the two, because if they were to have to deal with the fact that leftists actually give a shit about workers, whereas liberals generally fucking don't, you would be having a different conversation. You know, they don't want their audience to know that, yeah, in fact, leftists really give a shit about employees. You know, and it's an easy dig to lump them in with liberals, and again, Charlie Kirk has done it more than once with this guy, and it's like, dude.
Yeah.
And he's made it clear.
But,
hey, I am not an Obama fan. You know, he's like, he keeps reiterating that shit.
Yeah,
I'm
I
glad
think
he's
that's
doing
really
that.
good. That's like the one thing that the left can always do, so they don't like. That's like, it flips every conservative on their head.
Yeah. I'm not a Biden fan. I was not an Obama fan. Shut up about it already. I don't give a fuck. I'll point out more flaws with them than you will. Okay, so sit down, sir.
even despite the means testing, which is the part that gives the bureaucrats their power, which is also the part I'm objecting to, even despite that, we're talking about bureaucracies. As I think you mentioned earlier, the government has no monopoly on bureaucracies, plenty of bureaucracies in the private sector. And if you want to know which programs have the smallest overhead, right? Even Medicaid, even despite the means testing, Medicaid, Medicare, all of those have much smaller administrative overhead than any of the private insurance companies, because the private insurance companies, one, they have to plan out their strategy for competing with each other, and two, the private insurance companies have a vast bureaucracy that is dedicated to finding ways to deny people's claims, because they've always got one eye on the bottom line for shareholders. And one question I'm very curious
Please,
about,
it's
by
your
the
turn.
way,
How
is
about
that you object for all of these reasons. You think it's too interventionist. You think it's too much administrative state to just providing everybody with healthcare.
These are all elements of the critique.
Providing people with healthcare as a human right, so that you can have like what people I know in the UK always tell me, which is, hey, when whatever my mom got cancer, when whatever the situation is, people will say the only person I ever talked about this was with a doctor, which is very different from Americans' experience with healthcare. If you can object to that on the grounds that that's too much big government, I am really curious whether you'd say the same thing for fire services. Like would you be okay with it if we didn't have public fire services?
Absolutely not. As I said, small but strong.
Okay.
The government exists, as it says in the preamble of the Constitution,
Pause
amongst
real
many
quick.
other things, to secure the blessings of liberty, to ensure domestic tranquility.
One thing that I would like, and this is much more like a broader conversation, so it'd be like a point, kind of, but a point that Ben Burgis could make that I would really like is that nothing that Charlie Kirk is saying right now is anything related to populist.
Yeah,
He's advocating for taking away aid from people right now. And the problem that we have with this is, I would say, not taking away, like Ben Burgis could say, that taking away aid from people really doesn't sound like populism to me. And what we get into is it's really important to look at this kind of stuff and determine, is he being a libertarian right now, or is he being a populist? And what Kirk likes to do, and he does it badly, is he likes to shift between both of those options. And if Kirk did it better, he might actually be really smart with it. But Kirk's not able to make that slide as clean as he should be doing it. I think you could make really populist arguments for libertarian views, but Kirk is not managing it right now, and I would love to see it.
Well, he has to dance carefully, because remember, he's also saying that he doesn't want corporations to be making all this money while the average worker makes nothing. So now he's backed himself into a corner, because it's kind of like, okay, I can only argue this to a point, otherwise I'm going to contradict myself. He really put himself in a corner. So,
and that does run into the contradiction between what Charlie Kirk really is, which is a libertarian that probably supports protectionism.
Oh yeah,
and a a actual populist. Now, as much as I have a problem with right-wing a right-wing populist would support Medicare for all. They would support it for like the white people, but they would support Medicare for all. They'd support a large amount of institutions to help their people.
Right.
Now, he would disagree on who their people are, but if he was actually a populist, he would be making incredibly libertarian arguments.
Yeah.
And Hamilton said it best, that you need a nimble yet effective federal government, good at what it does, but not overreaching. And that's the whole idea of conservative populism, is within this constitutional republic framework. I'm a big fan of firefighters, police officers. I'm a big fan of border patrol. I'm a big fan of all these sort of things. But when
He's a big, the only one that he said out of those that was an actual service to the people is firefighters. He said he's a fan of police officers and border patrol. I'm like, yeah.
And I also
people
don't.
are kind of shitbags, man. I've known a lot of them, and they are not fucking. They certainly don't give a fuck about helping Americans, dude. Like,
And to also analyze the statement that he just made, he cited Alexander Hamilton, the creator of the National Coast Guard and the National Post and the National Bank, that he's in favor of a small government.
yeah. Quote the guy that made some of the biggest institutions that we have within the zeitgeist
At least
of
be
our
consistent.
existence as a country, but hey.
And if you're gonna cite, like, I have no problem with Kirk, like, because when he's citing these people, what he's really trying to do is make himself come off smarter than what he really is. But if you're gonna cite these people, you can cite dumb intellectuals. Just do it. Like, actually, don't strawman those intellectuals.
Right. Yeah, Mike Lightyear is saying, is that AstroTurf?
Mm-hmm.
LOL, only Kirk. Yeah, that sounds about
And
right.
we had the perfect pause at 44:20.
when all of a sudden I believe you get outside of the constitutional limits is where you birth this fourth branch of government. And our mutual hatred of Woodrow Wilson is a perfect example of this, because he really believed the state, this is a Hegelian idea, will usher in that utopia, that the state is God, that through the mechanisms of the state, we will be able to turn the chapter and with it remake man. He wasn't the only person that believed that. FDR did, Lyndon Baines Johnson did as well, where we as conservatives and conservative populists say, hold on a second, that is not what the state is there to do for. Let me just say one last thing, which is that the state is there to preserve the natural law with prudence and wisdom, to hopefully develop families and foster children, not to try to remake human beings.
Wait, he just said the federal government is there to develop families and foster children? What the fuck is he talking about, dude? Like,
How
is
if I
that
could get
in any way? I'm sorry. How is that in any way conservative? Like, he's saying that he wants to the government should see to it that we're all like having families and birthing children. Like the American baby factory. Like, what the fuck is that, dude? Like,
And hey, if Charlie Kirk really believed that, I believe he should support massive taxes to update our adoption agencies.
oh yeah.
So,
Broad-ranging
does it really
adoption
seem-
agencies.
But I have a feeling that Charlie Kirk wouldn't support that either.
Oh no, because you can't give children a social safety net after they're out of the womb. They're on their own, man. They gotta fucking figure it out, dude. Newborn,
They have to
get a fucking
pick
job.
up their bootstraps. They have to pull themselves up by their bootstraps.
Pull yourself up by your booty straps.
your children booties.
Yeah, your children booty straps.
So when it comes to healthcare, not only do I have a moral complaint that it's not the role of government, it's also not good at doing it,
Well,
and it also hurts the everyday common man.
I
So I have two.
don't think either of those things are true.
But I have a moral argument, and I also have a utilitarian
Okay, well,
argument. I just want to make sure that's clear.
let's start with the moral argument, because I am very
Wait.
unclear on this. Because why is it that having public firefighters or public police is not overreach, but having public health care is? Why would it be objectionable if instead of having public fire services that everybody gets to use, you had everybody just having to have private fire insurance? And if you had a better private fire insurance plan, they'd probably put out your fire faster. Or maybe we had public fire insurance, but only for people, the poorest people or the oldest people, which would be the exact equivalent for healthcare, or the same thing for policing, the equivalent, for like security insurance. Because all of these things seem very similar to me, because having your house burned down, being victimized by a crime, or needing chemotherapy, those are all cases where your life and limb is in danger. Like, these seem pretty parallel to me. What do you see as the big disanalogy?
So the first problem is mostly local, police and fire, so therefore it's more accountable.
Okay.
So the dollars don't go to some sort of albatross to the kingdom of Washington, D.C., of unelected, unknown, kind of just unchecked bureaucrats. That's number one. Number two, we do have a system in the country, despite what you're saying, where if you need health care, you will be taken care of. Is it
Well,
broken?
that's
Is it
what I just
inadequate?
said, though, right?
Well, hold on a second. I'm saying it is illegal to deny someone service of care. Illegal. Now, do we have problems with our healthcare system? Do you think if you could put
That's such a fucking bullshit argument, because he's not accounting for the aftermath of the fucking medical bills. That's such a fucking bullshit statement, dude. I'm sorry. Oh, God.
And the other element of that, too, is his first argument, which is a relatively reasonable argument that I think, is that the firefighters are on the local level, as opposed to running them on the national level. I don't think Charlie Kirk would be in favor of locally run Medicare for all. I don't think that's his specific plan, right?
Right, exactly.
So we can just forget about that. And the other part that I also want to mention is what he's supporting is like these means testing systems, and we've talked about this. And he does want to remove like the specific interest in these groups. And I'm curious, one thing that I love that Ben Burgis could do, and in all fairness, you could make an anarcho-capitalist argument against abolishing the local fire stations and see how Charlie Kirk would be able to respond to that. Because, I mean, it's his ideology that he's citing right there.
Agreed.
In a room and I could strike a huge bargain with you. I think that there are elements of the German system that are admirable. I will say that. Where you have a public system and a private system. Where I start to all of a sudden say timeout, no go, no fly zone is where I hear people like Bernie Sanders, and I'm paraphrasing, who want to get rid of private insurance as we know it. That's a big mistake. Here's how I think the biggest problem with healthcare is. It's not individualized. It's way too bureaucratic, way too top down. And yes, we have pharmaceutical companies that are addicting people to drugs that they should not be addicted to. We have a sick care problem in our country, and I agree with a lot of people on the left with this. On this, maybe we'll agree that we have an obesity problem. We have a problem of how we get our food. We have a corporate farming problem. I agree with all those things. Do I think that a government-run system of healthcare that will be more similar to how the IRS or how the Postal Service works, that's somehow going to be the solution to that? Absolutely not.
Well, the Postal Service is amazing, and I do not think
say that again?
The Postal Service is amazing. It has been an engine of upward mobility. It has been an engine of racial equality. If you building the black middle class, massively an engine of that.
Have you ever used the Postal Service?
I have, and the Postal Service will carry a letter from here to Alaska for not for the same price, and they're certainly not going to serve.
You know it's going to get there.
No, I do not know that, and it's certainly not going to do it. It's never going to get there with as much service to out of the way rural areas.
I got to give you credit.
Anything.
I've never heard anyone defend the Post Office.
Like it's cheap. Well, you need to talk to more people because like the Post Office is the basic.
The Post Office actually delivers to all those rural areas that Amazon and FedEx and UPS won't go. As a matter of fact, those companies, even DHL, they outsource to postal services to service these rural areas because they won't fucking go there. Like that's a simple fucking fact, dude. Like I get shit. If I get something from DHL, it comes from my postal service. It does not come from DHL. Same with some things that I get from UPS. Some of it will be once it gets local, it's the postal service that's delivering it. You know, so yeah, that argument. God, this is like something I think that like. When you live in a world where you actually have to function within it and you understand like how our postal service works, it's a little bit different. I have a feeling that Charlie Kirk is very disconnected because he probably doesn't drop anything in the fucking mail for himself.
And the other part of it too, I have it right here. I'm going to send this to you in your chat. If Charlie Kirk really is in favor of the German system, which they have a public option, I wonder what this means. Go ahead and take a look at that.
I'm looking at it. If Obamacare is so great, why did Democrats exempt themselves and their staff from living under its rules? Ouch.
Clearly, he's not really in favor of a option. Really the case.
Jesus.
So, we have Lion Kirk.
Lion Kirk. Good old Lion Kirk. Hey, I think it sounds better than Lion Ted.
Kirk is credit where credit's due. Kirk is a fun last name to say.
It is. It always makes me think of Captain Kirk though, and then I get disappointed because I'm like, "Fuck, man, I loved Captain Kirk." Now I just think of Charlie Kirk, you know.
An institution, and it should be massively expanded. In fact, one of the best things I think they have in some of those Scandinavian countries is postal banking, which, if we did that, Bernie Sanders' proposal would immediately put out of business all the payday loan vampires that prey on unbanked people, would create millions of new, good unionized jobs. Postal service is great, but I do want to go back because I don't want this to get lost.
The post office lost hundreds of thousands of packages and was 6 months late. That's where you want to run our healthcare system?
I think that. Well, first of all, I think that if you actually have a fair look at the numbers, I think the postal service does do a really good job. I think that oftentimes when people...
This is so stupid because unless he's going to start pulling, like, Ben Burgis isn't going to sit here and pull up competing numbers for UPS, FedEx, fucking DHL, and all these other places that never get your fucking package to you. or that break their shit in transit, man. Even Obi-Wan Kenobi said he used to work for UPS too. They have no regulations for how they handle the packages. So that's why your shit gets tossed around. If you got something fucking fragile, it's usually broke when it comes from UPS because they're just throwing it at your fucking door like a football, you know.
Another argument that you could make
there, but
yeah, but completely looking at that, I wonder if you could say, okay, if you want to fully privatize the mail industry, why don't we, like, would you be in favor of putting regulations on it so they don't damage your packages? Because it doesn't really seem like right now they're preventing that at the moment.
Exactly. But hey, he wouldn't be okay with that because, you know, conservative populism, no regulations, you know.
Well, no, a conservative populist would be pro-regulation. That's if a true conservative populist would be in favor of regulation, or because a right-wing populist would be in favor of regulation. They just wouldn't like black people. That's about it.
Yeah, the regulations would be don't deliver to black neighborhoods, you know? Like, what the fuck?
They are not using the same metrics to evaluate it they've used to evaluate everything else. But if you want to know something that would be very much like what Medicare for All would be like if we had it in the United States, then I'd say looking at delivery of packages is probably not what you want to do. What you probably want to look at is countries like Canada, where they already have Medicare for All, Great Britain, where they've gone further, and the hospitals are publicly owned.
That's all the let's talk about that.
Well, okay, but those are places
That's a different
where,
thing.
where people live longer, where fewer of their babies die.
How is that a different thing? He was just comparing fucking Medicare for All to the fucking Postal Service. Ben Burgis is comparing Medicare for All to other Medicare for Alls. Like, like what the fuck, dude? Come on.
The rate of mortality amenable to healthcare is way better. Or look, you said you want it to be local. That you don't like the fact.
Super localized.
Sure, local, great. So if all the hospitals were municipally owned, you'd be cool with that?
All the hospitals, it would be, well, first of all, that's actually the case in a lot of places. There's like county-run hospitals all across the country.
I'm not denying they're county-run.
Actually.
Okay, so you would.
County-run hospitals are very limited. There are more private hospitals, and there are county-run hospitals. County-run hospitals are harder to get to, and they're usually starved of resources.
I do also want to say that is Ben Burgis stealing my argument from me. I just want to point this out. I said it first, and Ben Burgis took it.
Damn it.
Would be okay with that. So it really has nothing to do with centralization.
Well, no, it does. Trust me. The city of Chicago can be equally, if not more corrupt than the Kingdom of Washington, D.C.
Is it going to be more corrupt than the private insurance companies?
I mean, that's a good question.
Okay,
Let me ask you a question.
but you did also say, right, and I really want to make sure
that local is generally better, but I'm not going to die on the Cook County is a great county.
Well, this does go back to what you said earlier, though, when I asked
then
you
he's not in
about
favor
fire
of the...
because you said, well...
Yeah, this is the time I would make the ANCAP argument against fire stations. That would be like a great thing to make right now.
Right, yeah, agreed.
Difference is that
to be, in all fairness, I actually don't know for getting rid of fire stations because who the fuck wants to get rid of fire stations? But
right,
I'm sure that there are arguments.
That is a law.
Yes, that is a law. I'm glad that it's a law.
I am too.
Okay, good, wonderful. We agree on that. That is a good government intervention to stop the private sector from doing what it would otherwise do and did otherwise do before that law was passed. But also, I would say, do the equivalent for the fire services. That the only people who get it without having to pay at the point of service are the poorest people, are the oldest people. Everybody else has to rely on private fire insurance, which varies wildly in quality. And if you don't have private fire insurance, if you're not poor enough to qualify for the means-tested bureaucrat-enabling system for poor people, and you're not old enough for the other one, and you end up having to have the fire department come and save you anyway, then you have a giant bill that's going to bankrupt you. Do you think that sounds like a fair system?
No.
Pause.
So is that...
He said that was a fair system for medical care. He totally was fucking totally fine with it. Now he says it's not a fair system for fire departments. It's like a fucking contradiction, dude.
Yeah, go back, and I just want, go 10 seconds back. Because I really want to see Charlie's face. Look how mad Charlie is here.
I'm probably going back a little too far, but this is...
Yeah, but you did also say, right, and I really want to make sure
that local is generally better, but I'm not going to die on the Cook County is a great county.
Well, this does go back to what you said earlier, though, when I asked you about fire protection, because you said, well, the difference is that nobody can be turned down from the hospital.
That is a law.
Yes, that is a law. I'm glad that it's a law.
I am too.
Okay, good, wonderful. We agree on that. That is a good government intervention to stop the private sector from doing what it would otherwise do and did otherwise do before that law was passed. But also, I would say, do the equivalent for the fire services. That the only people who get it without having to pay at the point of service are the poorest people, are the oldest people. Everybody else has to rely on private fire insurance, which varies wildly in quality. And if you don't have private fire insurance, if you're not poor enough to qualify for the means-tested bureaucrat enabling system for poor people, you're not old enough for the other one, and you end up having to have the fire department come and save you anyway, then you have a giant bill that's going to bankrupt.
He's pissed.
He's so mad. He's so mad.
This is going to get good.
That's the best moment of the debate, right there. He just killed it.
Do you think that sounds like a fair system?
No. So let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
So is that, here's where, how do you define healthcare? This is a very important question, right? Because healthcare could be, hey, I just got a gunshot wound that needs to be taken care of.
Deflection.
Or healthcare could be, I'm 800 pounds overweight.
What? It doesn't matter. Healthcare is both. Whether you're 800 pounds overweight or whether you got shot by a gun. That's the thing about healthcare, right? Like, oh my God, dude.
I'm eating terribly. I have no sort of interest to exercise or eat well. Why all of a sudden should that person be put into the same exact level of care of someone that has saved money and taken care of their health? Why should someone who's 800 pounds overweight be given in this sort of realm? Why should human agency and choice have zero emphasis at all?
What you're describing, the only difference between that and what already exists in the United States is that we would have to add, and they're rich enough that they can afford really high quality medical care. Right now, somebody who's 800 pounds, who doesn't watch their diet, who chain smokes, etc.
I agree. Yes.
But
you could add chain smoking.
But sure, yeah, all those things.
So you think that none of that should be given a preference?
Well, here's what I'm saying. That I think in the system that we have right now, somebody who checks every single one of those boxes, but is rich enough to afford the best medical care, skips in line ahead of the person who takes care of their health, exercises every day, doesn't smoke, eats well, but lost their job or just is cobbling together 4 part-time jobs like so many Americans are, and thus doesn't have employer health insurance.
It's an interesting question. So you believe just because you have better money, you shouldn't be able to have better stuff?
I believe,
or more money, better stuff.
I believe that when it comes to something like healthcare, no.
That's a very broad thing.
I do not believe that people should get life-saving services preferentially because of how much money they have. I think that,
so how much money they've saved. How about that? Someone saved their whole life, and they said, in case there's a disaster, I'm going to put $500 away a month. They get to age 45, and all of a sudden they realize that they have some sort of health complication. They shouldn't be able to take advantage of the money they've saved for their entire life?
Well, this actually goes back to the very first thing that I said, like the opening couple sentences.
What is justice,
that I said. Because what I said is that I don't want some people to have dramatically worse lives than others because of factors outside of their control. Now,
what about things they can control, though?
Well,
saving money.
If we lived in a world where all economic inequality,
this is such an easy argument to dispel.
Thrift versus indolence.
Oh yeah, I think it sounds like Obi-Wan watched it. You say he's about to rail him right now.
I mean, just seriously say, why the hell should they have to save that money? Why do you have to limit your economic standing just to worry about a health crisis that could kill you?
Yeah, I don't care if they're rich or poor. I don't want anybody to have to worry about it. Like, why should a rich person have to pull money out of their fucking pocket to pay for this shit when we can do it as a public work? I don't want that burden on them just as much as I don't want the burden on the poor person. That's where I'm at with it. That's why I don't want means testing on it.
One of the things that I actually really love about this part is you just see them both completely phrase 2 different things entirely differently. And then we phrased it entirely differently as well. We can just see how so many people look at how you can just create negative ideas of the exact same thing by saying it in negative or positive ways.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
Or laziness versus industriousness, I would have much less objection to this stuff than I do in the world where we actually live, where somebody who saved up their whole lives, but then they have unexpected medical expenses that bankrupt them, which happens all the time. That they have is going to get worse healthcare than somebody who has never saved at all. But if somebody if Hunter Biden, right, had some massive medical bill tomorrow,
he would probably have. Considering his lifestyle.
Sure, right? So if Hunter Biden had that huge medical bill tomorrow, then he would get in line ahead of people
for multiple reasons, both access to power and also money.
Sure.
So that's a good example.
Those are both bad things, but they have
largely unearned. And I
agree. It's a bad example for you, Kirk.
About the Walton children, I would say the same thing about anybody who is inheriting money. When you go to the hospital, or you go to buy insurance, they don't ask you, did this money come from being thrifty and saving your whole life,
let me ask you a question.
or did this money come from stock ownership, or did this money come from inheritance? They just ask, do you have the money to afford this?
And that's part of markets, right? Is that you're not able to make a moral claim for every dollar bill, but generally markets will go towards value and value creation. I actually want to close this thought on one thing because it goes to your other thing that
actually, I mean, if you'll indulge me, could I ask you like a 30-second question?
Sure, because I really want to.
I know we're coming up to it,
yes.
but I'm so fascinated by this,
Sure.
right? So we agreed
Is the
earlier.
firefighter thing again?
It's not the firefighter.
Okay, good.
Okay. Although I think there's more to discuss.
I'm very anti-fire.
Well, that's good.
Pause.
Equally anti.
He did not want that again. He did
Yeah.
not want that. He's like, no, please, God, don't drill me on this.
I know the way that he like said it was supposed to come off as if it was like a stupid thing to even bring up, but the way that it came out was just like he's terrified of him making this argument again.
Yeah. Obi-Wan Ginobili said Kirk hears the word Hunter Biden and he acts like a dog with a squirrel, like runs right into it. And he did. He ran right into it. He ran right into the fucking argument.
That's great.
Cancer, and then just like we have fire departments, we should have that.
That's why I think people who eat well and don't smoke and make good decisions should be rewarded for human agency.
Yeah, which is not at all what.
Because the inverse of your statement, I just want to make sure this is clear. The inverse is you say that people should not be penalized for factors outside of their control. The inverse is that I think people should be rewarded for factors inside of their control.
Yeah, and most of what we've got right now is not about.
No, I agree with that.
But
I want a system that rewards people for good choices.
Okay, so there's a way you could do that, right? Like you could give tax deductions or tax exemptions for people who like regularly show to do well in their physical checkups. Like you could build that into the system if you wanted to reward people for taking care of their health. Like there is a way to do that,
And to also mention, because I think Kirk either massively like doesn't know what he said in the past, or has like massively changed his mind.
No, listen, the guy has
Recently.
no belief system. He has no belief system. His only belief system is, I'm going to counter whatever the socialists say. So it doesn't matter what he said previously, and that's the same with all of these guys. They can say whatever they want previously, but in the context of the debate, they'll say whatever they can to get the points. And it's like, but you don't believe that. And that's always one of my issues with some of these debate situations is you don't fucking believe that, dude. Like,
I agree with
you don't believe that.
But the argument that he's building right now is an argument in favor of a public option where you can still pay more for your health care, but the government provides a base service to everyone. That's the argument that he's making right now. And that would be a hell of a lot better than what we have right now, and it's what Biden is pushing for.
Yeah, exactly.
What he should be pushing for. So if that's really what you want, why aren't you voting Biden?
Exactly, because that's what he's offering, right? I mean, hell, and that's what always pissed me off about people that were like anti-Obamacare, anti-ACA. That was a Heritage Foundation plan. That was Mitt Romney's baby. Like, what the fuck are they talking about? Like, oh, I hate Obamacare, blah, blah, blah. You sure didn't mind it when Mitt Romney was fucking pushing it in, what was it, Massachusetts? Yeah, all different story then.
I'm reading what Opie said. I love the incentive idea, especially when it comes to with government agencies ensuring that private companies aren't selling us false goods. Like Subway had to stop calling their chicken because it was mostly soy, which kills everyone who thinks they're eating healthy. Yeah, absolutely. Killer things. That's a really good regulation that we need to put on the market.
Bam.
So here's what I want to ask. Real quick, I promise. So we established earlier how much we both liked Jeff Bezos.
Yes.
Just like that's Jeff
Are you
Bezos.
going to ask me, should I raise his taxes?
Well, because this is why I'm curious about it.
Because
I saw it in 2019.
Yes, with Kyle Kalinske.
Yeah, and he asked you, would you be willing to raise Jeff Bezos' taxes by like 1% to provide housing for homeless veterans? Your response at that time was
wait, pause real quick. Are you familiar with Kyle Kalinske, right?
Yeah, I used to love Kyle Kalinske. I think he's kind of gone off the deep end a little bit recently, but I still like him.
Yeah. I think Kyle Kalinske, I don't think he's like an exceptional hater, but Kirk was fucked so hard by Kyle that he still remembers it to this day.
2 years later, where's that SpongeBob meme when you need it?
Exactly.
2 years later.
And I think at this point we've established that's not going to happen. He'd prefer to buy a spaceship. So
that's probably true. Yeah. So if you put a gun to my head, would I raise his taxes? I mean, I guess if I was a representative, I guess yes.
Okay, that's good.
For other
This
reasons.
is progress. I'm so proud of you,
Let me tell
Charlie.
you, I guess conditionally, if all of a sudden there would be a comparable piece of legislation alongside of it that would actually value and prioritize things I cared about. If it was just to raise his taxes to go into the current albatross
Okay, but
pit of the
if it
administrative
was-
state, I'd rather have him buy spaceships than give money to Fauci.
But if it was earmarked for a housing for homeless veterans, and you would say yes.
The
now,
answer is yes, because I think Jeff
outstanding.
Bezos,
This
from a
is
moral
such good
standpoint,
progress.
but let me tell you why. Let me clarify why.
Sure.
Jeff Bezos games your favorite department, the Postal Service. He games the corporate tax loophole system. Jeff Bezos has a total disregard for what I consider to be the American way of life, and he has this weird fascination of going into orbit. And guess what? I hope he stays there.
Okay, well, I congratulate you on this progress.
Well, you could call it progress. You could also call it a commitment to prudence. I want to ask you a question. I will get back to the other question. I want to ask you what, and I want to get more into philosophy.
That's a fair.
What are your
Okay, pause.
My view of
He just conceded.
Well,
At least
yeah,
that
I mean that
point.
is
Like
fair.
he just did concede that point.
I'll even be nice and say that's not a concession. I'm just happy that Kirk has grown. I'm happy that he has grown in the sense that he is at least moving a little bit towards quote unquote conservative populism. I'll give him credit where credit's due. I won't even say he conceded.
Karl Marx is pretty positive. I think that you can certainly find things like anybody who's writing the mid-19th century that, you know, if there's nothing that you think is wrong about 100, you know, whatever, 150 years later, then like something has gone very wrong, right? You know, there should be ways that you can say, no, this part no longer makes sense. You got to rethink that. I think you have to look at it a la carte, but I think that Karl Marx is a basically positive figure. I think that the theory of history is mostly right, and I also, so yeah, I see you smiling, happy to get into it.
I'm happy to debate the Hegelian
well,
dialectic and the phenomenology of spirit.
Oh, okay.
No, not
Okay,
debating.
pause.
Not where I thought this
This is
was going.
something dumb that Kirk does. I don't know why he does this. Well, I'm not sure how. Are you familiar with Hegel?
No.
So Hegel was essentially great philosopher on his own. He was Marx's teacher, essentially.
Okay.
So Hegel was great. I don't know why Kirk is obsessed with giving Hegel all the credit for everything Marx wrote. He did the same thing in Vosch's debate. He did the same thing. I've seen it before. Like I've seen him do it in other times. It's incredibly strange that he focuses on not giving points to Marx, which is, I think, what he's trying to do here, and it's so stupid.
Yeah, because so what? If Hegel was the inspiration, the results are the same. You know, like it doesn't change the results. You know, like come on, dude.
But that's cool. But I
No, I mean, that's basically what you mean by the theory
well,
of history,
I
right?
don't think it is. I think there's a big difference there.
He was the head of the young Hegelians.
Well, he started out as a Hegelian, and then he rejected it in favor of what in some ways structurally is similar, but in some ways is the opposite, 'cause it's based on materialism. But here's what I do think when we talk about Marx, because I think that there's an interesting thing that happens here, that when people talk about Marx, they tend to say, well, any like dictator who existed in the 20th century, who claimed to be inspired by Marx, you know, people who were born decades after he died, that discredits everything that Marx said. But then when we're talking about a philosopher like John Locke, who a lot of
Love John Locke.
yeah, right. And then, but then like John Locke, you know, the man both philosophically justified and was personally involved in the slave trade, given his role, you know, formulating the Constitution of South Carolina colony, and then philosophically justified the genocidal dispossession of Native Americans.
That's a misunderstanding.
Well, I think so, right? Because like his view is they don't really have property rights because they're not using the land properly, and so they haven't mixed their labor with it in the right way to establish a right to it. Whereas not only did Marx never not praise any dictatorships that were alive, you know, when he was alive,
To point out a weakness on, like, a rhetorical weakness on Kirk, I think Kirk jumps into things a little bit too quickly. We can see what happened, like, criticizing Kirk that he could do better. We saw what happened with the dolphin incident.
Right.
We saw what happened here. He's very good at kind of laying his grave, in a sense.
Oh yeah, yeah. Dig
And
that grave, baby, dig it.
I combined laying your bed and digging your grave.
Hey, it worked out. You know.
Yes. But I think, like, to give honest criticism to Kirk, he should probably wait a little bit and hear out what the person's going to say.
Yeah, he's but see, that's the thing. This is why I think like he's got a serious like issue like with like confidence here. I really do think he's God, I just had it and I'm not, the words are escaping me, but he is definitely like not feeling confident in his intellectual capacity with Ben Burgis. I think that's why he brings up a lot of shit that really has no relevance, but demonstrates that he's learned, you know, and I think that's why he's jumping on stuff, you know, because he's like, if I just go on the attack, you know, inferiority complex, that's what I was looking for. Thanks, Obi-Wan. But yeah, I think he's got an inferiority complex, so he's jumping on things quicker. He's acting hastily because he's already playing the defense, and that's just his own heuristic that's fucking with him.
Yeah, and it's interesting to kind of see it happen to him twice now. And the other interesting thing that I'm going to make a prediction for how we're going to see Kirk react, and I think it might make him look a little bit better and a little more human, is when someone gets that dunk on him, because that was so clearly a dunk. What Kirk's going to do is he's going to use his media training and act. But while in reality, and I'll give Kirk credit for this, he's going to say, well, I wasn't in favor of Locke when he was advocating for the slave trade, but I think generally is like a lot of the stuff they said was really valuable. And if he says that, I'll give him value. But what I'm guessing he's going to do is he's going to ignore it and move on.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
Model for what he thought transition to socialism would look like was the Paris Commune, which was ultra-democratic, and the only head of state anywhere in the world who he liked enough to send a friendly telegram to was the democratically elected Abraham Lincoln, who he liked for anti-slavery reasons.
So there's a lot of things I want to get into. So with the Paris Commune,
yeah, sure.
Are you your favorable view of that? You do write for the Jacobin magazine, so I
Yeah,
imagine. Do you think that? I guess this is a question about human nature.
Sure.
Do you take a Rousseauian view of human nature? Do you think man is born free and
Okay.
life it chains, or do you believe in time?
Pause.
Yep, he ducked it. He ducked
First, complete dodge, and then second, this has nothing to do with anything. I think this is a strategy because he did this in the Vosh debate as well. I think he's prepared this to just ask this as something to switch to at a notice whenever he's losing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I've seen him do this exact thing before.
It's formulaic. And you know what sucks is people that go back and start watching his debates are going to see that and they're going to fucking capitalize all over that because he'll lather, rinse, repeat it. He seems like the type of guy that does that.
Blank slate, or what is your view of human nature?
Okay, sure.
Because I think that's actually instructive.
Sure.
For how we proceed.
So we covered this a little bit earlier, but I'm happy to go back into it. So I think that as far as human nature goes, are people fundamentally kind and decent and cooperative? Are people fundamentally selfish and cruel? I think that to fully answer that, you need to get really deep into evolutionary psychology and a lot of other things. And the answer is incredibly murky. I think the only really honest thing you can say about it is what David Hume says in his essay on the afterlife, when he says that it would be really hard to sort out who deserves to go to heaven and who goes to hell because most of us float somewhere between vice and virtue. But what I think is that almost everybody gets the relationship between the human nature issue and the capitalism and socialism issue exactly wrong.
So tell me why.
That's because
you touched on this earlier.
Yeah, I did touch on this earlier.
Because if you have a Hobbesian view of human nature, you think that you should actually want big government.
I'm happy to get into it. So I think that
which is what Hobbes believed.
Well,
yes.
I certainly don't want big government in Hobbes' sense. This gets back to
Leviathan.
This gets back to the distinction between the things that government could do to you, like break up families and deport people, and the things that government is under a legal obligation to do for you.
You really think?
True. Okay, wait. Pause.
Restrain itself from saying,
that is a. Did you catch that dunk?
Say again.
Did you catch? So the dunk that happened was and it was. I think this was very slick. How Kirk was talking about how much he cares about families and how that should be the importance of the government. And then Ben Burgis comes in much later and says, "Yeah, I certainly don't want the government using its border policy to break up families."
Yeah, exactly.
And to the person in my chat currently asking, generally, I have my criticisms and I have my favorable points of Biden's presidency. There's a lot of stuff that he's done that I am lukewarm on, and I think he could do better. But I think overall he ended up being preferable than what we had before. Do you have an opinion on the Biden presidency so far?
I think he made a lot of promises to progressives to get elected, and I think that he's failing on fulfilling on that. I don't think he's using his bully pulpit enough. If you want to know my honest answer about that.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. It's a hard balance because there's elements of that he's done. Like, I'm very in favor of his child tax credit, which is pretty good.
Yeah, I agree with that. Like, he's doing some things that I like, but I just think, like, so I've got this opinion about Biden, right? I don't think that he was ever as progressive as he was saying that he was going to be in this election. I don't ever think that his intention was to pass a lot of this stuff. I think that Kyrsten Sinema and Joe Manchin are great covers for him. You know,
to a certain degree, yeah.
He can use them so that he doesn't have to go as far as he advertised, you know. And I often wonder because they have all these conversations with him directly, but they won't talk to the rest of Congress, you know. And I have a feeling that he's just telling them, yeah, dude, we're not really going to do that shit. Like, fuck it, you know, tank it. I don't care, you know. Which is why we went from a $10 trillion reconciliation to a $6 trillion reconciliation to a $3.5 trillion reconciliation to agreeing with Manchin on $1.75 trillion. okay, like we've axed this thing so fucking bad. Like, I don't know. I think it's fucking worthless. I honestly think the reconciliation bill is not going to do a whole lot for people. It'll do some things. It'll be piecemeal, but it's not gonna go nearly far enough.
I think at the end of the day, like what we're seeing is it'll be good at the very least to get something out, and that's all we can really do.
Yeah. But if he doesn't pass something with voting rights, I mean, kiss the Democratic fucking majority goodbye. Actually, kiss Democrats' like ability to effectively run for any office for the foreseeable future goodbye.
Yep.
Like, it's just not going to be there. Because all these red states, especially now you got Virginia, who just got a Republican governor, you can guarantee they're going to be looking at fucking with voting rights there. I guarantee it.
Now, my friend, Daki Mock, what do you mean the election was rigged anyway? Because I might disagree with that statement a lot more. Yeah, well, like, please elaborate specifically what you mean by rigged. Because that could mean some very different things. Let's get back. I'll answer them in mute. Let's get back into this debate.
Cool.
You know, this is what I can do, what we could do for you. You think government can have this dividing line between benevolence and malevolence?
You don't think the government could restrain itself? I thought you were all about limited government.
Well, constitutionally, absolutely.
Okay, so you think the government
only if
could obey restraints about what it's supposed to do?
Only with the fierce limits of courts and not even establishing those departments in the first place. That the best way to limit government is to not create those departments or those means to do it.
Well, I think
have a spy agency domestically, for example. It's
sure.
like, oh, we're only going to spy on a couple people.
Well, okay, so I think that might be the first thing.
What I'm saying is once you introduce that power, it will be abused.
Other than your hatred of Jeff Bezos and Hunter Biden, I think the first thing we've agreed on tonight is that we shouldn't have domestic spy agencies.
Totally
I think, but I think that
including the postal service, which spies on our citizens.
I think that I don't think that's the primary effect of the postal service.
Wait, the postal service spies on our citizens? What the fuck are you talking about? Like, this is some straight QAnon conspiracy theory bullshit, dude. Like, what the fuck is he talking about? Like, he's lost his goddamn mind, dude. I'm sorry. That's like...
I would love to see his source for that. I think that would be hilarious.
Yeah. Yeah. Cue the source sound, Mike.
Is Mike even still in chat?
He's messaging me through another app right now, but he's still floating around. He's lurking.
Absolutely not best mod.
Actually, he's been posting VODs. If you haven't noticed, he posted VOD for tonight.
I noticed my Discord notifications went up quite a bit.
Losing my mail.
Of the postal service. I think that the postal service, given how cheaply it services, how many things.
Source.
I think. Well, I don't think you should attack the postal service. I think that it's been a tremendous economic benefit to many millions of Americans.
Right, we don't have to stay bogged down.
But I do think, but on the philosophical question, that's where you want to go. I think that the more you're worried that one person given too much power over another is going to treat that other like a little kid might treat a fly trapped in a jar, the more what you should want in both politics and the economy is to have power be spread as evenly as possible. So earlier, and I want to make sure I'm addressing this because I wouldn't want anybody to think I was avoiding the subject. Earlier, you were saying that I was like hiding my radicalism by talking about the things that we could do immediately, which is, I've got to say, a little bit funny because I do spend a lot of time writing about the more radical long-term stuff.
Like banning private beaches and letting in the entire country of Afghanistan.
Yeah, I think that well, first of all, I don't think the entire country of Afghanistan wants to come. I think a lot of the entire country of Afghanistan, unfortunately, celebrates supports
you actually do right about
supports the Taliban. I think refugees fleeing from the crisis that we created absolutely should come in. But yeah, I do write all the time about the radical stuff. Those things are not uncontroversial. I don't think I'm afraid to talk about it. But I think that when you talk about the really radical long-term goals, you say a lot of times you just talk about the value of markets, and I do agree. Markets are good at some things.
Good, we agree on that.
Yeah, they have I think that if what you're concerned with is coordinating production of consumer goods, what people want, I think markets are good at that. I think that there's a difference between markets in consumer goods and the labor market, and I think the difference is that the labor market, people's need for a job and people's need to keep the job they have is vastly less elastic than their need for a given consumer good, because it's much harder for people to replace a job than to just start consuming one thing than another thing. And I think that the workplace is really a site of authoritarianism. And so, sure, do we need some markets? Absolutely. I think that there are domains in which we've proven empirically, like I would argue healthcare, we were going back and forth on that earlier, that taking those things out of the market could actually be much better. But are there domains you need markets in? Sure. I would say that for those domains that you need markets in, you can at least have those markets be worker-controlled firms. So I think that, like, if you look at Mondragon in Spain, employ 80,000 people, extremely successful company, does lots of research and development stuff, and is worker-owned. People get to elect management. People have operating agreements.
From what I've heard, I think Kirk may. I'm curious what Kirk's going to respond, because we're finally seeing the worker co-op narrative be pushed into the conservative mindset, and we haven't really seen many like talking points against them yet. You know.
Mm-hmm.
So I know Vosh pitched market socialism to Kirk before, and this is like really the first pitch that we're truly seeing of market socialism. So not that I'm like specifically interested, but I'm not that this is like going to be very unique, but I'm very interested in seeing whether Kirk has a prepared response for this or not.
Let's find out.
Equivalent of a union contract with no separate clause on the other side of the bargaining table. And so if you say, should we have as a goal of government policy that the private sector be more like Mondragon, or should it be more like Amazon or Walmart? I'd say it should be more like Mondragon. And one reason I think that is precisely that the more you worry that human nature is selfish and cruel, the less power you should want one person to have over another in the workplace or in society as a whole, which is why I want democracy in both cases.
So first of all, I understand the argument of employees owning companies. We have that in America too. Publix grocery chains is a great example in Florida. That could still happen in a market. But I guess this is, and you haven't taken a position on human nature.
I love.
I think
You're not familiar with Publix, right? Do you have those in Arizona? I know you used to.
I've been down to Florida. I know about Publix. They got great sandwiches. Dude, they got great fucking sandwiches, man.
I just love how it's interesting. I guess his response was, "We already have that," and an interesting response, I guess. Does that mean he's in favor of it? It kind of sounds like he's in favor of it.
That's kind of what I'm hearing. You know, I mean,
yeah. From what I've heard, is he likes Publix. He doesn't like Jeff Bezos. That sounds like a win in our book.
I'll take it. Yeah. See, and in Arizona we have Winkos, which are also ESOPs. So.
Ambiguity.
My position
is you said if you believe this,
my position is that human nature is a mess, that there's a lot of truth to both pessimistic and
I think that's fair, and that's more
accounts. But I also think that to the extent that you worry about the bad stuff, that gives you a reason to want to distribute power evenly.
Right. So the best way to distribute power evenly, in the opinion of a conservative, would be first and foremost to empower the family and to allow not just workers but entrepreneurs to create new companies.
He already destroyed this family argument, and it's a really interesting case because he already took down like.
Empowering the family is providing these essentials through the government so that they can use their money for the incidentals and things that are otherwise, you know, more beneficial or fruitful to creating the family environment that he's wanting. Like,
yeah, that's true. Empowering the family would be removing burdens in the country, like paying for healthcare, having massive education bills, difficulty with transportation, and even like with immigrant families having
a free car for everyone.
But having ICE bear down on some of these immigrant families. This is the stuff that's harming families.
Exactly.
And not having a $10,000 electric car in your Midwestern area is truly harming family's ability.
I agree. Everybody gets a $10,000 electric car. God damn it.
We love you, Red. Don't worry. You're here watching.
Workforce or in the workplace, the best competition, the best way to empower people is choice, is competition, is not to say that we are now going to mandate that you need some sort of labor designation on your board. That's been the opposite of choice. I'll give you an example, which is that if you have a very specific skill and you work for Ford, right now, Ford Motor Company, you have to be unionized to work for the United Auto Workers, right? It's mandated. Whereas like if we had more competition, then maybe there might be non-labor there.
So this is what I was confused with me about that point, because I hear conservatives saying this all the time, that if there's a union contract in place that says that to be hired for this job, you have to be a member of the union, or really is usually you have to either be a member of the union or pay an agency fee, but whatever, we can just say.
Oh no. Obi-Wan Kenobi just brought up the brisket sandwiches from Buc-ee's. Oh shit. Yes, those are bomb too. I've been to Buc-ee's. Sorry.
I actually don't have the sandwiches from a pub too often. I actually just because we have some like nice local things in my city as well. So typically I don't go to the Publix, though I have been actually going there more because I prefer the business to other areas.
Right. Yeah, I agree. I try to give more to like local businesses and stuff like that. But yeah. I had another one I was gonna talk about, but I forgot. Another one of those grocery store types that has some good shit. But oh well.
I think there's one in the north for like Windings or something.
Yeah. Oh
as
no.
well. Which I think is a true co-op, not even a ESOP.
what I was going to
But
bring
yeah,
up,
you were talking about sandwiches.
what I was going to bring up was I have also been to Wawa, which Wawas are fucking awesome too. I love those Wawas, dude. They're fucking rad.
Member of the union, that if you have that this is an unfreedom, that workers are being forced to do something against their will. But what confuses me about that is that any condition for hiring, you could say, is forcing workers to do something against their will, because obviously there's this wildly unequal bargaining power. Workers need the job way more than a company usually
I think
needs.
you're misrepresenting business. I really do.
Any given worker, that's by and large, it's much easier to replace a worker than it is for a worker to replace a job. And given that, sure, I agree that anytime you make something, you can only have this job, or you can only keep this job if you do X. That's a case where you're limiting people's freedom. But if you really go with that principle, then that should go for everything at a job. And I would say out of all the things that people are forced to do for certain jobs, the one that's least objectionable is you have to have this thing that actually protects, makes it harder to fire you, that that helps you keep more of the wealth you generate for the company in your pocket, that gives you some sort of say because you get to vote in a union contract. That's way less objectionable than all the other stuff you're forced to do to have a job.
Like what?
I wonder if Charlie Kirk is against drug testing.
True.
Like
I think
well,
Charlie
I think
Kirk
Like not show up drunk? Like,
takes.
no, I think
It's very possible that he takes the the anti-drug law stance, because that's something that conservatives have been willing to move.
That's true.
So I'm not sure. Here, I will look it up. You keep going with the video.
I think we could agree that that one's reasonable.
Okay.
And if that was the extent of workplace authoritarianism in the United States,
hold on. I really want to zero in on
I'd
this.
be much less concerned.
I want to zero in on this because
concerned about it. But
I want to zero in this because I'll agree that there's some externalities and some jerks and some dirtbags. Do you really believe, let's say a majority,
Sure.
a majority of workers are being exploited by their bosses and that the owners of production? You really think that in America?
what do you mean by exploited?
You used the word. You said exploitation or workplace authoritarianism.
Yeah, the word
that is your term.
The word I used was authoritarianism, not exploitation. But I'd be happy to talk about it.
But like, let's say, do you think that a majority of workers, to use your terms, are living under a workplace autocrat or form of such right now in America? Let's say a majority, 50 plus 1.
Yeah, much more than that.
So we're going to definitely
sure,
disagreement on
sure.
this.
So they have a so. If you say
I don't have
the vast
information
majority
right here.
of
It seems that
workers
it's
in the United States work at workplaces.
been
They're living under
unclear
tyranny
about
without
it.
them real.
What's that?
It seems like he's been a little bit unclear about his drug war. I have a tweet from here. It says, your husband's on drugs, put more men in prison than any other program. Or your husband's war on drugs, when they were talking about Hillary Clinton. So he might have some. He might use it as a dunk on Hillary. But I'm not sure. He's been a little bit inconsistent. But he might be against it. I'll be fair to him.
Realizing it?
So, okay, let's be clear about what we're talking about here. So they have that the vast majority of workers go to work in workplaces where they don't get to make any sort of managerial decisions. Those are made with it for them. And
why?
it's your way
And
of,
let's be fair. Why is it? Because someone took a risk to start a company and those workers didn't. Because they decided to go into their savings, to go to a bank, to take out a line of credit, to take a risk to start something new.
do you think everybody has an equal ability to do that?
Of course not. I mean, absolutely not. Does everyone have an equal ability to go dunk a basketball or to become a decathlete? Of course not. I mean, does everyone have an equal ability to become a college professor? Of course not.
That's
That's a silly argument. Are some people going to create better widgets and gizmos?
Yeah, it's not relevant, because here's the thing: anybody can start a business. That doesn't mean that they're the skilled labor that creates the product, and that's the point.
And genetic advantages has nothing to do with material.
Exactly.
If Kirk, and I would challenge Kirk, if he legitimately thought that being able to jump really high to dunk a basketball is the same as being able to business. I would be shocked if Kirk thought that.
Yeah, exactly. Because literally anybody that can go down and file for an LLC can technically start a business. You know.
And I want to point out, Mike is absolutely correct. Kirk is pro Publix, so I guess I better leave Publix. All right, we're done with Publix. Confirmed.
Somebody else, of course not. But what people do have an equal ability to do is they have an equal ability to take the risk. There are plenty of people that couldn't split the atom, that work extra hours, that go into their savings account.
Ability to take the risk.
Hold on, why is that? Why isn't that
the reason people don't have
millions of people start new businesses every year in our
That's
country?
completely consistent with this. The reason that people don't all have an equal ability to take the risk is that what would be risked is very different depending on your initial financial situation.
No, but there's plenty of people that...
Okay, but there's a difference between plenty of people...
Equal ability meaning this, meaning that do you have the freedom to do that? Do you have the willingness to lever yourself up, to go to the bank and say, you know what, I want to take out a second mortgage on my home, and I'm going to go start some sort of shoe company on the side of the street.
You have to be able to afford a home to be able to take a second mortgage on to be able to do that. Yep. Enter most of the labor in this country who cannot afford to buy a home right now.
And the other argument that you could say too is, hey, if you really want all people to have the ability to start these small businesses, why don't we give them more money?
Yeah. Based give them the money to like get out of the labor sector and start their own business. You know, if they get paid enough, then they can do that. But we're not going to talk about that because we don't really want fair and equitable businesses. We don't want a bunch of small mom and pop shops. He wouldn't like that. That's not what he wants. That wouldn't be suitable to like his argumentation, you know?
I mean, apparently he doesn't want that and he doesn't want Amazon. So I don't know what this man really wants anyway.
Sounds like he wants socialism. Pure unbridled socialism.
No. Oh yeah, the only thing he's praised are ESOPs.
Go Charlie! Go Charlie!
Yeah, we've won.
Then all of a sudden
I
you're
find the way you
saying
put that
that
really
the 5
interesting, but
people that are working in that cobbler store are being oppressed by the guy that might have gone 2 years without paying himself just to be able to start that small business. And so
He didn't go without paying himself. He may have had to like use business resources in order to survive, but he didn't really go without paying himself entirely. He just used the resources within his business and didn't collect a paycheck. You know, I've seen that before. I've known many business owners who went through that. That's such bullshit. And what they usually end up doing is they have a certain number of shares in their business and they cash the shares out to themselves, right? And that's what ends up being their paycheck. But yeah, it's not a direct paycheck. No, they're not paying themselves a wage in the same sense. But are they effectively able to survive off of it? Yes, they are. So I hate that. I hate when they use that argument.
here's where I'm starting to just like, I wish
you
you'd give a little more appreciation
I would like to separate a couple
to how
of issues
capital
here.
was deployed.
I would like to separate a couple issues here because I think a lot of different things are being run together. First of all, on the subject of whether everybody has the equal ability to take entrepreneurial risk, I think that it's really interesting that in your example, you said, oh, you can take out a second mortgage on your home. So what does that suggest? That you own a home and your finances are generally good enough that would be approved, which obviously is a situation that tens of millions of Americans are not in.
So I think we're coming to a good disagreement.
But also, I would say that that when you talk,
I am the new Ben Burgis. Sorry.
You have become Ben Burgis.
It's like
You were always.
It's
Wait,
like one of those memes where you see the transition happen, like over like the 4 panels.
Wait, I am curious. We've never really seen you without a. I mean, you do have a beard. You could have been Ben Burgis this entire time. I have a feeling that you both like Bernie, right?
Oh yeah.
Okay,
Bernie?
confirmed. And you know what? I've never seen you.
You've never seen what?
I've never seen you and Ben Burgis in the same room. Suspicious much?
No, it'll never happen.
about entrepreneurial risk, you say, well, it's not reasonable to say that workplaces where people make decisions that that's not authoritarian because people, in some cases, certainly not all cases, got in that position by taking entrepreneurial risk. I think that there are two different issues that are being conflated there, which is one, is it authoritarian, right? And that's just a question of what's the structure of the firm. And the second is it
job
justified?
Voluntarily.
Because
they weren't stormed out of the house and put a gun to their head and say, now you must go work for Home Depot. They showed up and filled out a job application and wanted and hoped to get the job. Now, are there examples where that is the case? Where they're, I guess.
Notice that everything that you just said applies to agreeing to work at a company that's a closed shop, and so your contract specifies that you have to join the union. Nobody forced them at gunpoint to go apply for that job at a closed shop. That they could, if they want to find an open shop where they don't have to join a union, good luck to them. They can find it.
No, I agree that you can go work for a non-union shop, but you cannot be a public sector teacher in the state of California without being part of the National Education Association.
Okay, but you just said public sector teacher. You could be a private sector teacher. So how is it? That
I agree, but why should the taxpayers subsidize a union project?
Well, I think that what the taxpayers are subsidizing is first of all a better quality of.
This has nothing. This has nothing to do. Like he just totally fucking veered off, man.
Yeah, we were talking about. Okay, so what would have been relevant if he brought up an example, private sector directly relating where we have a regulation requiring people to do something, right?
Right.
Now we're on public sector jobs which have no separation between what happens, and like it's an entirely different argument.
Welcome to Kirk world.
Superior.
Kirkland.
I think that Finland has some of the best.
America.
Yes.
Well, no, but I mean, like Finland and America aren't like such radically different societies.
Of course they are. One is 7 million people, one is 335 million
Okay,
people.
wait a second. Why is it that what works at 7 million in this case is not?
Wait, we gotta check them. How many people does Finland
I can
have?
name a lot of examples why.
Why?
Fact check.
Yep. Finland has 5 million people, so suck it.
First of all, we have
Get
way
fucked,
more different
Kirk.
cultures. We have different state-based models. And let me just say this one thing. First of all, Sweden has full school choice, and 1 in 5 families in Sweden send their kids to private school. So we can talk about Scandinavia as much as we want. But let's go back.
But which country has better schools, Finland or Sweden? Finland does, and that's with no private schools. So
And they also have very strict immigration.
I
But
think, well, I don't think that's why, but I think that you have.
What the
but I think
fuck?
that you are,
Okay.
He's all over the place, dude. Like, are you
Pause.
fucking kidding me? Like, what
I
is
think-
that non sequitur? What the fuck did that have to do
And I
with
think
that?
that's really bad, but I'll give my credit to Kirk, and I will give my criticism to Ben Burgis, that I think Ben Burgis should have been harder on that, not let him that in the, which is the only thing that let him justify that now. It was an incredibly dumb statement, but the fact that he was able to get away with characterizing these Nordic countries as reject immigrants in all capacity was what him get away with that. Now, it was a non sequitur, but what he's gonna do is he's gonna like take the worst bits and pieces of every European country and like amalgamate them together. Probably be worse than the United States.
Well, yeah, if you do that, sure. I mean, nobody said, and that's what I hate. And they just need to say that outright to Charlie Kirk. It's like nobody's saying these countries are perfect. There are programs and social safety nets implemented in some of them that work very well. That doesn't mean you like every single thing about the country. I think that's a fucking ridiculous notion. I've always fucking hated that. Like, you can have nuance. I mean, there are things I like about Cuba, but I sure as hell wouldn't tell people to go fucking live in Cuba, for fuck's sake, man. Like, Cuba's fucking kind of horrible for a lot of reasons,
I also just want to say, because I've been attacked by the worst mod in your community, Jason, how you came here to watch us, not Charlie Kirk and Ben Burgis. You want us to talk. If you want to watch the video on your own, you can go watch it on YouTube. I believe we have the link. We're providing excellent content for you. And if it lasts another 2 days, that should be wonderful for you.
Yeah, that's great content. If I can stay online for 2 days in a row, I guarantee we'll get a lot more followers. Me and Sen will be looking real haggard, though. But, hey, we'll stick it out.
Something like that.
Right. All right, here we go.
Get a better quality of education when people are less precarious. They can really commit to it. They have they're getting paid more, so you're going to attract better applicants. And also, I think that the teachers count too. I think that teachers deserve to have those things, and I'm all in favor of it. But the larger point was, if you're going to say that something isn't unfree,
or
if nobody's
autocratic,
forcing you at gunpoint to do it, then that should apply just as much to your objections to content.
Mike, I'm sorry.
So I wanna go
I'm
back
not on
to
the
the
tolerant
opinions in
left.
circles.
We do not tolerate any of your terrible actions right now. I'm sorry, Mike.
I'm gonna need another gas station Slurpee. Hey, Obi-Wan too. Thank you so much for hanging out, man. We'll definitely see you tomorrow. I'll be on at 7:30 like always, man. At 7:30 Pacific time, 10:30 Eastern. Just so you know.
Where I think we want to join
Here,
unions.
get
Go
us
ahead.
some
Public
too.
sector unions are not given that sort of choice.
What's that?
Get us one as well. We could use it.
Yeah, for sure. We'll all have them.
By the way, FDR, Franklin Delano Roosevelt.
You have your
worked hard
coffees.
to
I
protect
brought
the
nothing to
He
this.
said all government employees should realize that the process of collective bargaining
Yeah, let's
as
make me
usually
have to
understood
piss.
cannot be transplanted into public service. He warned about the public sector union differentiation between private sector union differentiation. But I want to zero in on this because I think we have a really interesting point philosophically. Do you think if someone takes a risk in America, they should be able to keep a reward?
Not entirely, no. I mean, you don't think entirely. I mean, like, the only way you could think entirely is if you were an anarchist and you didn't think that we should.
But what are the limitations on that then?
I mean, again, I think that the question that you want to ask, if the question is some transfer of wealth justified? Because I think that's the real question, right? When are transfers of wealth justified? And I think that you need to go back to what are the principles that justify what you think a distribution of wealth in the first place should be. Now, you could think that whatever kind of distribution you get, letting the chips fall where they may in a free market, that's what's justified. I don't think that. I think that the distribution of wealth that we have, and I think taxation and redistribution, even in the sort of market socialist system that I was advocating earlier, I think you'd still need those things. But I think that the distribution of wealth that's justified is the one that would emerge from a social contract that people would agree to under certain circumstances.
So I guess it all comes down to numbers, I guess.
Well, no, I mean,
So,
this isn't a claim about numbers. This is a claim about basic moral principles.
But
I think that the question is, if you were, the best version of something like contract theory if you were behind John Rawls's veil of ignorance,
which I totally reject.
sure,
And
I mean, of course you totally reject it, Charlie.
I'm happy to get into the Rawlsian theory of justice,
You
but
couldn't
yes.
believe any of the things that you believed if you didn't reject it. But I think that.
But I actually, I'm going to ask you about the veil of ignorance.
But if you're asking about,
I'm taking over.
I don't think that there's some magic number.
If y'all are enjoying this fantastic
if you want to know
from me and
whether the tax
Jason,
system is just,
you should go ahead and hit the follow button down below.
If you knew that you were
I believe it is.
know who you're going to be in this society, would you agree to it? And the same way that if you didn't know,
If you're enjoying,
you wouldn't agree to racial discrimination.
go ahead and take a follow. We're doing a great job. We're having a great time. If you really like it, drop Jason a sub or drop me a sub, drop me a follow, or do whatever the hell you like.
How would you want the rules of society to work? And I think that's going to be the answer that's going to tell you when redistribution of wealth is justified.
I would want the rules of society to value action over favoritism, hard work over complacency, family creation over licentiousness.
I can't pause it, Mike.
Those things are right and wrong regardless of what veil.
Jason just like left me in the dust. I'm unable to pause the video.
Own, thought experiment.
So you talked about hard work there.
Yes.
So if you have a basic value to industriousness, if you have a basic objection
sub to me and not to Jason, I make the better content.
Okay.
Inheritance and stock ownership.
So let's talk about both of them. Stock ownership, you might be able to get me to agree. Inheritance, I think, is really cliche. Why do most people take big risks to create wealth? Which also goes to this question: how is wealth created?
Wealth is created by workers. Those are the ones who create wealth. No. The straw man that people usually trot out at this point in the argument is they say, oh, when you say workers are creating wealth, you're saying that there's people who are creating it. And I would say, if you want to say that the only incentive that you can get, that you cannot have a thriving dynamic economy without people being able to leave millions of dollars to their descendants, then I would say that it's very confusing, first of all, that even within traditional capitalist companies, you have plenty of childless people who are motivated to do that.
No, I think that's totally true.
But secondly, that you have cases like Mondragon, that you have very economically effective worker cooperatives.
Pause, not because of something that they've said, but an argument that I am building. So there's an argument that I'm building up over time that I think could really kill with even conservatives. Conservatives hate taxes. Libertarians hate taxes. But I think my favorite form of tax and my preferred way to truly remove the money from the billionaires is with an estate tax. I think you could make an argument that a really high estate tax, a really high progressive estate tax could work really well.
They call it the death tax, and they've been shooting it down for fucking ever, dude. That's the only problem.
They have, but and I agree with you. But I think, if you have a truly good faith conservative and you're talking with them, I think you could make arguments that, because I honestly think that because with these arguments that Kirk is making, all whenever you're talking about free market types, they're all about working from their personal values and taking what they have, what little you have, and working your way up to the top. But a lot of these baby trust fund babies are born with everything that they want, and I think that's something that we can both kind of get behind, that they should also have to work with everyone else in a strange sense. I think you could. It is my preferred way. I think it is the least violent way to truly tax out the money from the billionaires.
I agree. Yeah, I mean, because a lot of these billionaires are now saying they're not leaving money to their kids. I mean, they've already given them the resources in life. If the kids aren't succeeding on their own, after what the resources are getting in life, then by all means, what's the point of giving them
why not?
an inheritance?
You know what?
You've already if they need the inheritance, they've already fucked up their whole life. Because they're handed resources, they're handed connections, they're handed proximity to power, they're handed everything that they need to succeed. And if they can't make it without daddy's money after he dies, then they weren't going to make it anyways.
I think you could make a really reasonable argument that you could say, leave these people with $10 million and that's it.
Yeah.
Who the fuck is going to need more than $10 million?
Yeah, it's exorbitant.
And, we have 100 billion, people reaching up towards hundreds of billions of dollars. And at the end of the day, 10 million is a drop in the bucket, while massive for an individual. I think you could make a sell for that, and I'm not sure.
Sure. I mean, I wouldn't be mad at it. Even a high estate tax would leave people probably more than that anyways, in the richest situations. So
yeah, I think I think what my argument wants to be is people. I don't want it to be a flat estate tax. I think that's incredibly bad. I think making it a really progressive estate tax could be really good.
Yeah, I could see that.
and I think like making it so them I think we're going to go because my streaming shit is like not working tonight. I'm gonna have to rely on Mike to get the VOD for the stream.
Oh, we got you covered, baby. We got you covered. You know that. You know that. When you come
Yeah,
to
all
the
right,
society's
let's,
house, we got you.
Let's try and get through this thing.
All right, let's do it.
pass on to their descendants, but people are still motivated to work, and these companies can still be very successful.
And look, you might be able to get me to agree on like 500 million, a billion, but again, the reason I wouldn't agree with it,
500 million, not like
yeah,
5 million.
but like,
you should be able to pass on $5
the
million.
reason I don't agree with it is that where's it going to go? To go fund some spy agency so that they can go spy on Americans through
Well,
some
look,
spies.
I mean,
The point is that like
if you want to say
no, but the
we should
point
abolish the spy
no, but the
agencies,
point is
I'm with
every
you on that.
time that there's this like, would you raise taxes to do this? The default answer is no, because we're funding like that money would then be transferred away from some private utility to something that I consider to be a government that is doing a lot of harm and very little good. And so, but I guess there's this question of wealth being created, and we're kind of we're going at this from different angles.
That's a really interesting objection.
So I have this. There's this thing that bugs me about conservatives. They pretend to be the most patriotic.
There's this one thing, like
I mean,
one
there's
single
several.
thing bothers you about conservatives.
There are several, but they pretend to be patriotic. They pretend to care about their country. They pretend to love their country, but they don't just. They're not just questioning of their government. They actually fucking hate their government. And it's like, but this is the institution that your patriotism is afforded to. This is the institution that was built by the Constitution that you fucking quote every single time. Like half of these fucking government programs and shit that you're talking about were created by conservatives. Hell, the EPA was created by Richard fucking Nixon. You know, I mean, come the fuck on, dude. Like, be consistent in your argument. That's all I'm saying. Be consistent, you know? And I think they lack some consistency. I think you can't sit there and say you love your country, but you hate your government. Your country is your government. Everything, the founding principles of our country, the way our government operates, which allows us to live the lives that we live, is only through that. So you can't sit here and quote the Constitution to me and tell me that you don't trust your government, or you hate your government, or you think we're the worst functioning government, like he's saying, a harmful government. Like, so which is it? You can't have it both ways. Like, pick your side, dude. Like, I mean, because I've always said this. I've always said this. I'm a patriot. I love my fucking country, but I love my country enough to see the flaws and want to fix those. You know, I don't feel like that's what they're saying. It seems like they just can't stand
the
any
line
government.
that I've heard specifically Charlie use, because did you watch the Charlie Vosh debate?
I didn't watch it.
That's a killer debate. I recommend watching that debate. I think Vosh really put Charlie through the ringer on that. But the thing that Charlie was very insistent on, which was very creepy, was that you have to be grateful to your country, regardless of whatever the country has done. And you have to be grateful towards it. And like when he asked him, so then why aren't you a fan of the government? And he says, I love the people and not the institutions. And that would be the line that you would hear from Kirk.
But the institutions are what created the culture that gave the people to him, that he loves so much.
Yeah.
That's that circular logic. You see what I'm saying? There's no.
Oh, trust me. I think in order to be a conservative, you have to be morally inconsistent.
Yeah, I agree. Agreed. Okay, I'll carry on.
But if you would say, hey, it goes to charity instead of the IRS, then I might be able to agree with that, which is what we're doing at this debate, by the way, which goes that, this is so great. I do have a question for you, actually, as a sidebar. Why is it when you challenge me to debate, why didn't you say that all the proceeds would go to the IRS and to a private charity?
Well, I think that...
Does private charity do a better job?
No.
Wait, pause.
First of all...
This has nothing to do with anything, but yeah.
Yeah, but isn't this, just really quick, I thought this was Charlie's show. It's called Debate Night with Charlie Kirk.
Yeah.
What do you mean he challenged you to a debate?
Yeah.
I could be wrong, but I'm fairly certain that the way you get on the Charlie Kirk show is not by going on Twitter and challenging him to a debate.
No, he was probably invited on. I'm sure.
Yeah.
Now that framing is so gross.
If Kirk wants to give us the data and actually show that Ben Burgis was really interested in coming on Debate Night with Charlie Kirk, I will take back my statement. But until we get that information, I will hold my tongue.
Agreed. I'm not buying it.
the reason the debate hosting website, the way that works was already there. I have nothing against private charity. I am fine with doing that. I obviously participated in doing that in this case.
Is it preferential to government?
I do not think that private charity can be a substitute for collective government action. I
Really?
think the empirical track record is very clear that
Is
you're
he?
not going to get private charity.
God, this is like the thing that the left has been saying for ages. I'm surprised that he's either feigning surprise at that, or he's genuinely surprised. And it's very surprising.
I don't know any leftists that wouldn't donate to charity in lieu of our government working in the capacity that we want it to. But that's not because we choose that. That's because it's the option that we're left with. You know what I'm saying? Like, of course I'm going to go donate to a charity if I can't have a socialist or democratic socialist government or a government that takes care of people, because that's the only alternative. Like, what the fuck else am I supposed to do, you know?
And at the same time, the other problem with that is charity is not going to solve Medicare for all.
Yeah. And
you're never going to have a private charity to like fully fund a Medicare system.
And by the way, you can't just send blanket money to the IRS and be like, here you go, IRS. It doesn't fucking work that way. And he knows that. He knows that damn good and well. The guy's been in enough debates. He's been around the political sphere enough to know how government works. And he knows you can't just go fucking send blanket money to the IRS and be like, hey, help people with it. It doesn't fucking work that way.
Yeah, I want to point out.
They did, but, you know.
I was like originally on the fence on how well Ben Burgis is doing, and he's been like improving more and more as the debate has gone on. I have loved that he's managed to surprise him by defending the post office, which is based. And I love that he has been able to surprise him by suggesting the idea that charity is not a substitution for government.
Exactly. Yes, we participate in it because we don't have the government that we want, and we have to. That's the only means. Nobody wants to give to somebody's GoFundMe cancer page, but we do it because if we don't, that person isn't going to get cancer treatment. We care enough about like individuals to be like, hey dude, that sucks. I want to make sure that you get taken care of. I wish our government would do that for us. Like, what the fuck, dude? Like, it's not a supplement. It's absolutely not a supplement for a good government policy. It's what we're stuck with as a result of bad government policy.
And the thing that I think Kirk knows these arguments. I think he's feigning surprise. Like, it's such a shocking idea that charity isn't good, or like isn't a substitute for these means.
Well, the surprise acts as a rhetorical device for his audience.
Yeah, that's what I'm pointing out.
So yeah, I agree.
As effective. Yeah. So, for example, and we also need to talk about what we mean by effective here, because this is a really crucial point. So there are a few different questions. One, are you going to get, like, is there some amount of private charity that you could give for medical expenses that's going to get you to a point where our rate of mortality amenable to healthcare is as low as it is in Canada or the UK? I don't think so. I think we've kind of run that experiment. Second point is part of what I mean by effective is giving people freedom and a dignified life in ways that they don't have if they're worried about quitting jobs they hate because they'll lose their health insurance, or if they're doing things like starting GoFundMes to buy their insulin, which means that they have to craft, do you have enough of a tearjerker story that you'll stand out from the other 10,000 GoFundMes? I think people are far freer. I think people have far more dignity if they just get these things as rights just by virtue of being part of a society.
Yeah, that's where we're going to totally disagree. Where that private charity not only involves themselves in the person's life to hopefully be able to break them out of their economic circumstances, I would argue it's much more efficient. In a variety of different ways.
Pause.
I was going to point something out about that. Most big charities, the preponderance of the money you donate to them goes to the administration of the charity. Very little actually ends up in the hands of the people that they've created the charity for.
To be fair, I will push back a little bit on that because it does depend on charity. Some charities do that, some don't. So I will be a little bit fair.
I would say if you talk about Goodwill, if you talk about Salvation
what I was
Army,
thinking,
if you talk about I'm talking about the Susan G. Komen. I
don't disagree with that, but I know that was a major criticism of Vosh when he was doing his PCRF stream, or the Palestine Children's Relief Fund, and I was like, there is some actual good coming from this kind of stuff, and I do agree with you that too much of it probably goes to the head of the business, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I wouldn't truly take that angle. I would say that the idea that you could donate a system to fully replace either a full government market or a full unregulated market, or a full government agency is like utopian to me. And I would need to see, like you significantly point out, an angle where charity has ever been able to succeed over the government in that case.
No, and it hasn't. You're not going to find it. There is nowhere in world history that charity has done more than what a good, strong government with good social safety nets can do. It's just not fucking possible.
You could make some argument. Like I know, like before we have our modern day medical system, a lot of hospitals and a lot of like agencies that weren't run by the government were actually run by like churches and shit. But that's not like a good thing.
No, because part of them helping you is that you have to ascribe to their religion, you know. That's always been the thing with that, is that you're going to get proselytized if you choose to use those services, right? And like a Jewish person going to a Catholic fucking hospital doesn't want to be fucking sold on Jesus Christ, you know. They're like, yeah, dude, I'm good, man, you know.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. And the other element of it too is God, I just forgot what I was about to say. There was like a part of it where even when you look at the things that these are able to account for, I think charity in like very minor cases can be like pretty helpful. I'm not like against charity in the case. I think like, and I had a slight argument with a longtime viewer of mine where like I was kind of shit talking charities, right? And he came on to defend charities, and we were talking, and he was like, I don't think like charities that could ever be a replacement for healthcare. But like if we're talking treating very minor diseases that the healthcare industry is not going to take a look at, then charity might actually be the best avenue to like look into that kind of stuff. And that is potentially true to me, and I would agree with him on that.
Yeah, and in today's society, it's what we have. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. It's not what we want, but it's what we have. I would argue though that like when you talk about like the charities that Bill Gates runs, like the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, or like the Clinton Foundation, I don't think that those are credible charities. I think that those charities are designed to have global influence, and I think that's
the Trump Foundation.
Yeah, I think the whole purpose of those foundations is to maintain a global influence, because they
Have you ever seen the video that whatever his name is, John Oliver, did on the Trump Foundation?
Probably, but I'm sure it came out quite a while back.
It did, but it's gold.
I love John Oliver, by the way. He's like, his shit is fucking gold. If I could get away with putting more of his shit on my stream, I would, but every time I do, I get a fucking copyright violation when I try to upload to YouTube. I'm like, fuck you guys, man. I want to comment on this shit. It's so good.
The way you need to do it is you need to get a filter, put it over the image.
Right. Like I'll just make it look like he's all in like chalkboard, like
exactly.
Chalkboard imagery or something.
But anyway,
I digress.
Let's get back into it.
$1 billion Americans give to charity every single year, I would argue, does a far better job of offering a social safety net than the multi-trillions of dollars that we spend on social welfare
wait a second.
in a variety of different ways.
How about the $500 billion we spend on charity? Take the part of it that's spent, for example, on healthcare, and compare that to comparable, economically comparable countries where healthcare is provided as a right to everybody outside of the market. Which one does a better job? America, where you have to, if you don't have health insurance, if you don't qualify, for Medicaid or Medicare, you have to beg on GoFundMe, or countries like Canada and the UK, which it seems like by all the obvious metrics, who lives longer, who has a lower rate of infant mortality, who has a lower rate of mortality amenable to healthcare, all of those obvious metrics, it seems like those government healthcare programs do way better.
You won't hear me bragging on many aspects of the American healthcare system. Many of it is very cronyistic and corrupt, but to say we're not spending government money on it is just not.
Well, did I say that?
No, but you're implying. I mean, we're spending.
Okay,
I don't think I said or
we
implied.
have trillions and trillions of dollars.
So he doesn't like the American healthcare system, but he doesn't want to improve it.
He wants to his solution to the American healthcare system is to defund Medicare and Medicaid.
Yeah. That's going to help people a lot, I see that working out for like vast majority of Americans,
That'll totally help everyone. But the argument that he's invoking here is not a populist argument. His cronyist, his corporatist approach towards describing America is not what it is. This is a strictly an anarcho-capitalist argument that I've been hearing, and they define like a corporatism as capitalism with any government whatsoever.
Yeah, not working.
So, you would need to challenge, like, what I would like to see Ben Burgess do, which he hasn't done, but in all fairness, he has been crushing Kirk regardless, is push Kirk on what he actually would like to see as a system.
Me too. That's the thing. I want him to position it to where he's not the one providing the solutions, but Charlie Kirk is providing the solution. Tell us what you would do then. And he's going to say what most conservatives say. Fucking nothing. I would do nothing. I wouldn't change anything.
Besides, of course, defund Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security.
I just want to rip out the rest of the social safety net from underneath you, and you guys can rely on charities and churches, and hopefully you make it. And if you don't, fuck it. Not my fucking problem.
You were probably Jewish anyway,
right? What were they, Jewish or black or immigrants? Shit, it's all right. Don't worry about them. Fucking bullshit, dude. God, dude, gross.
We spend on government-run healthcare.
Sure, I think it would actually be vastly more efficient if you look at how much is being spent for what results. I don't think there's any question that Canada and the UK are getting way more bang for their buck in terms of government spending on healthcare.
So the UK has a total. So you would have the government take over hospitals.
Yeah, ultimately, I think that would be better. I don't think.
So where would medical innovation come from?
Well, medical innovation would come from exactly where it comes from right now, which is mostly the public sector. If you look at pharmaceuticals, this is and this is really good. I really like this argument because this is something people often trot out in defense of private health insurance. Well, you need that to have these incentives to develop pharmaceuticals. If you look,
he's about to rail him. This is good.
Yeah, Kirk really Ben Burgess didn't even have to set a trap.
No, Kirk walked right into it willingly.
No. Not even walking into it, he said it himself.
Yeah. Let me just set up the knockdown for you.
Yeah. God. So the amount of pretty much all of our medical innovation does not come from the private sector. This is a myth that has been told from the capitalist industry around the world. While in some cases it may create some innovation, in all cases it's been proven to be slower than actually putting innovation in the hands of the government.
Well, and to that point, if you look at most pharmaceutical companies, because he's specifically referring to pharmaceutical companies.
Well, he was specifically referring to hospitals in that sense.
At the end, though, he brings up pharmaceuticals because he's talking about the R&D part. And I want to point out that Katie Porter did a great job by fucking railing against some of these pharmaceutical industry people, showing that most of their money goes towards marketing and stock buybacks, not towards R&D. Like, R&D is done mostly by the government. They are 100% there to make money. They don't give a shit, and that's what they do. They go in and buy up smaller startup pharmaceutical companies that come out with a really, really good pharmaceutical, and then they market that shit and sell it off. They aren't doing any R&D. All they're doing is buying up smaller fucking pharmaceutical companies. That's literally all they're doing.
You know what I just realized? That we missed, and I had to think about it for a second. The biggest, non sequitur that I've ever seen from Kirk. Are you ready?
Go for it.
Ben Burgess says he wants to even nationalize hospitals, and Kirk says, what will cause medical innovation? As if hospitals are inventing medicine.
Yeah, right. Like they're I mean, I know there are a few research hospitals, but they're attached to fucking universities, dude. Like, what the fuck, dude? Like, it's a whole different fucking ball game, man. Like,
I don't know why I missed that, but the idea that medical innovation comes from hospitals is hilarious.
Yeah, no, they're usually treating like emergency situations or, yeah.
Doing the job as a hospital.
Exactly. We're spending our time caring for patients, not necessarily researching shit, which usually happens in labs and other places, just no big deal, but, just saying.
NMEs.
I love that.
New molecular entities, which are genuinely new drugs, not just you tweak it a little bit and you slap your corporate brand on it. 75% of those are developed already in government-funded labs. I think this idea that there's a lot of private innovation in there, I think is at the very least wildly overstated. I think that you can absolutely have healthcare innovation without it being the case that within hospitals or when people need to pay for treatment, you have this element of private profit, which I think has been a disaster in the healthcare system.
Do you think there's a reason why America has the highest quality healthcare, not for the most amount of people, but the highest quality healthcare in the world?
It does.
Well, I think that's a better argument. If you can afford it.
Well, the lie is that it does have the highest quality healthcare. No, it does not. No. Rich people can get very good healthcare, but the results don't bear out when you look at the preponderance of the population, and that's how you judge. That's how you judge quality healthcare.
Yeah, what he was saying is if you're rich, you're going to get better healthcare than you get if you were in Norway or something.
Well,
But
that's
that
just
doesn't
like
count.
saying just like saying a charter school that takes nothing but the smartest students is a really good school. No, it's not. It just took a bunch of the smartest students so that when it takes the standardized testing, it tests higher. Like that doesn't mean that it's a better school. As a matter of fact, most of those, not to go too far up, but most of those schools are actually worse because they don't offer special education. They don't offer English as a second language. They don't offer a lot of the classes and coursework that public schools offer, and services, even things
Such a
like
bad
free
argument.
lunches and free breakfast, so yeah, but I guess in some ways it's equivocal though. You know what I'm saying? Like,
So the thing that I have that's weird about that argument is I don't know why you bring up this argument. It's a bad argument. But you have to you can either do two things. You have to either coach your argument by saying our system does not help the most people, but it does those it helps get pretty good service. Or you can leave out that information and say it gives the best service, and then you have to have Ben Burgis crush you.
yeah, and
There's no advantage in saying that whatsoever.
he's cooking himself, cooking Kirk.
Yeah, I think Kirk did better in the beginning, and he's just fizzling out as time goes on.
Yeah,
I don't think Kirk. It's unfortunate.
I'm watching him try to flip through those pages in his book, and I think he's frazzled. He's trying to find the argument, because I think he mapped out exactly how he wanted it to go, and Burgess has taken him off his course a little bit, because he's definitely trying to drive the conversation, specific directions. Charlie Kirk is, and Burgess is I don't think we saw it at first because he was playing nice, but I think now he's letting loose a little bit, letting the cannons go. So
Yeah, I think it's slightly. I still would like to see Kirk push on a lot of the stuff, but I've seen all of the debates that he's had on his new show, right? I don't think he's won a single one of the debates he's had on his debate show.
no, because he sucks. Hey, Nerdidity, what's happening? dude?
Hey Nerdidity, how are you doing? It's good seeing you.
All right, let's see if we can muster through the rest. God, this is painful though, isn't it? It's like watching a dog.
I enjoy this. Well, Kirk was doing so much better in the beginning. And
I
now
knew it was gonna fall apart though. I knew it. I fucking knew it, dude. I'm waiting for him to resort to ad homs and strawmen.
this is just getting worse and worse. And he's already been strawmanning it, but it's unfortunate to see it devolve into this situation.
Let's watch the perpetual downfall of Charlie Kirk.
It is the best healthcare on the planet.
Sure. I mean, if you if something is that if you can skip to the head of the line by having enough money, then absolutely, you can get world-class healthcare. But the question I'm interested in is not are well-off people or really well-off
It's a
people.
segue to my next question.
Well, okay, but the question I'm interested in is not are they going to have better healthcare than the average person in Canada or the UK? What I'm interested in is the average person in the United States going to have a better experience with the healthcare system and have better healthcare outcomes than those other
No, of
systems
course.
deliver? And that's just inarguable.
So the
that
question,
they have better
the
outcomes
question is
and
then,
better
how do you get
experiences.
something that a few people have that a lot of people have? More government
Uh,
intervention or
I
market
might
forces
have,
applied
like-
that allow things to be cheaper?
Here's one criticism I have of Ben Burgess in this case, and I think he's been doing pretty well. And you could chalk this up to being good faith and still many his arguments, but you didn't have to reaffirm Charlie's argument there. You could have just said, "Well, I don't care. The only thing I'm interested in is helping as many people as possible." That's what I would have said, rather than saying, "While it's true that the American healthcare service helps those that can afford to pay for it, I think that we should help those that also can't afford to pay for it."
Yeah,
He could be a little bit more rhetorically effective in that case.
I think so too. I think you're right. I think he's trying to go a little bit trying not to come across like an asshole, but he could really fucking rail on Charlie Kirk right now. He could
At
just
this point,
fucking lay
yeah.
into him and fucking put him to bed. But I think he's, again, I talked about at the beginning, the optics of a leftist or a democratic socialist going hard, is always like, oh, they're completely out of control. See, this is exactly what I was talking about. They're fucking radicals,
Yeah.
So it's always a tender balance,
Yeah, I'm not sure. I think Ben Burgis could go a little bit harder and he doesn't steal Manning Charlie. I think, like, when you get someone who's Charlie was doing so much better at the beginning, and he's, like, petering out. And I don't think you have to steel man him to keep. I think at this point he's trying to make sure Charlie doesn't look too bad for his own audience.
Yeah, just put the nail in the coffin already, man. Like okay, it's okay. You can do it.
Kirk
Right,
built
man.
it for you. Kirk built you the coffin.
All you gotta do is throw the lid on it and hammer it shut, baby.
Yeah,
we're there.
Don't make him do it himself. He's probably tired after building that coffin.
Right. Took a lot of effort to get there. A whole hour and a half,
And faster delivered and better delivered. Market forces do a better job for that all the time, whether it be in technology or transportation.
I think there's a structural reason why market forces are not going to be as effective in healthcare as they are going to be in many other areas, and that structural reason is not some special radical Marxist thing that I think. That structural reason is something that you'll find in your wildly pro-capitalist neoclassical Econ 101 textbook, which is that supply and demand are going to do a much better job of shaping things in the direction of consumer preferences for things that are pretty elastic. You drive past one gas station, you see, that looks a little bit too expensive. You drive
easy arguments.
You get to another gas station. Those market forces are going to do a much better job of delivering for the consumer there than in cases like health insurance, which is wildly inelastic. For one thing, if you need heart surgery, you will pay any amount that is in your power to get it, for the same reason that if we didn't have, public fire services, it was just like in ancient Rome where Crassus would go around with water and offer people's homes, fire service bad out. Yeah, people are going to sell for whatever price you're going to pay in those circumstances. People are going to pay.
I want a Photoshop, Mike, if you're there. I need you to Photoshop. I need a Photoshop of Charlie Kirk in a fireman's hat. I really need it.
Prescription you put on for 10 years. It's still a giant stressful pain to switch providers that you have to find.
I'm not defending every detail of the American system.
The point isn't about the details. The point is that this is a structural reason that our demand for healthcare is way less elastic than our demand for other consumer goods.
The American healthcare system
which means that market forces
is
are going to be less
hardly
effective.
market, though. We don't have price transparency. We have an oligarchy of the hospitals. We don't have health savings accounts in most states. We don't allow health insurance across state lines. Now, while I agree that there is this, that at times there can be externalities of where the profit.
Because health insurance across state lines is a fucking disaster. It's literally a disaster from an administration perspective. It's not feasible. They've tried doing that in some areas. It just doesn't fucking work, dude. It does not fucking work. It's really, really fucking difficult. And that's being an insider in that. I know because I've worked with companies that have tried to make that happen. It does not fucking work. It's really, really hard to administrate those policies. It costs the insurance companies too much to do it too. They don't like the fucking price tag associated with it. So a lot of times they don't even want to fucking do it anyways.
Someone in my chat was saying they were having a great day until they saw Charlie's face.
Yeah, I feel that. I could see that. That's definitely not a face you want to wake up to.
I don't know. I've been enjoying seeing Charlie's defeated, crushed face throughout the process of this debate.
Yeah, the demoralization.
After that...
We should call
After the fireman's comment, I was so happy to see Charlie's face. He was so upset.
I think the name of this segment's got to be the demoralization of Charlie Kirk. The systematic demoralization of Charlie Kirk.
Man.
Is that a perfect fit?
How small do you think Charlie's face really is to his head? Is it really that small, or is it just a meme?
It is kind of small, man. It's weird. He's got it's kind of squished up right in the middle, and then he's got big forehead and then kind of longer kind of bulbous chin. It's not super long, but it's just everything's right here, it got all squished in or something.
Man.
Now, maybe if you see him in person, it doesn't look as bad. Maybe it's just something with how the camera treats his face. But
Jason, how tall are you?
6'1".
Yeah, so Charlie, I think, is 6'4" or 6'5". So maybe his small face fits a normal-sized person.
Right. I think there needs to be a contest between him and Jack Ma to see who has the smallest face.
That would be great.
buy a t-shirt, like, okay, yeah, I have leukemia. Like, that's not the same thing. I get that. Where the charts and the graphs can't explain all of that. And that generally, the best fit line, though, of market principles can help for the vast majority of things that are not in that 10% category of life-saving treatments. Because, and you know this, the vast majority of people going to the doctor are not like, I have a gunshot wound, I have leukemia,
No, absolutely
or
not.
cancer.
That's what I just said.
No,
though.
I know, but market forces in those cases, you could agree, could be very, very instructive and very helpful.
Well,
empowering the consumer and price transparency.
So,
and bringing
okay.
that price.
so I
Pause
think
real
that
quick.
here are the things.
So I'm going to see if Ben Burgis brings up this example, and it's the example Bernie Sanders used, and it's insulin. So what Charlie's talking about, and this is the common conservative line, is they're okay with the idea of socialized healthcare only for like direct emergency situations.
Right.
Meaning if you're having a heart attack, if you're shot in the chest, or like stuff like that. Where the healthcare industry also does not serve it does not serve stuff like insulin.
Yeah.
And it's because, and the exact argument that's going to be made is it doesn't matter how much demand there is for a product. I mean, it doesn't matter how much like supply there is for a product. Always be there.
Yeah.
Necessary demand.
Yeah, there's always going to be a demand on some level because there's always going to be people that are, have health issues.
So, like, the big reason that supply and demand works is because, in theory, you can go, hey, the demand, like, I don't really care about this enough to really buy it. But with insulin, you don't really have that option.
Yeah, you're going to die if you don't have insulin. That's it.
Also,
the
multiple
alternative is
companies,
death.
like, towards competition, multiple companies are not going to offer better insulin. You get insulin, and they're going to all do it for the same price because they can all afford to do it.
Yeah, and insulin is insulin. I think there's only a couple different versions based off of your diabetic need, but like pretty much it's kind of all the same. Like it is.
And this applies to even like non-lethal stuff. Like let's look at depression. If you have like serious depression and you really need these meds, you don't really have an option if you're going to not get these meds, because it could be like really serious if you don't get access to these meds.
Well, sure. I mean, if somebody is in a state of like severe depression, depressive episode, or something like that, that could result in like a suicide attempt or something like that. I don't fucking wish that on anybody, but those are the circumstances when you don't have your mental health meds. I mean, you can end up, in some cases, if you're bipolar, it could be the other way. You might end up hurting somebody else,
Yep.
Going into a mania,
and it doesn't matter how expensive these meds get. You need it no matter what.
Exactly. Unless you just smoke weed every day.
Don't self-medicate, folks.
Don't listen to me with that, All right. Carry-ons. Let's go.
That, as a matter of fact, market forces are right now, we could argue about the diagnosis, but right now, they are creating lousy outcomes
I would argue
in the American healthcare system.
We hardly have market forces in most healthcare. Most hospitals are nonprofit, government-run agencies.
This is what it sounds like to me. Like when you say that they have...
Wait, pause.
It sounds like nothing so much.
That's false, right?
No, most hospitals are not nonprofit. Like, I can tell you, maybe in some places they are, but fucking in Arizona, they're all like, man, the hospitals are all owned by the same company almost. Dignity Healthcare owns like 90% of the hospitals in Arizona, and they are very private and they are very, very money motivated. Like, no question about it. So I don't know where the fuck he's getting that from. Like,
I think he's lying with statistics, probably. Maybe, like, an argument that you could maybe make is if any hospital accepts any form of government subsidies, they're no longer private.
Yeah, and I would call bullshit on that right away. Mm-hmm. Like, that's utter bullshit. So, yeah. All right.
As some ultra-leftists saying, well, look, sure, Soviet economic planning had a lot of problems, but that's because it wasn't communist enough. They still had money.
I'm arguing that...
Because if we look at the systems that actually exist, then the United States has one of the most marketized healthcare systems in the entire world, and certainly relative to developed rich countries,
at least in the developed world,
outcomes. And if you want to say, well, if we made it even more marketized, we would actually have better outcomes than all of the systems
in certain aspects
that are socialized. I think that's a leap of faith.
Let me give you a great example. So you want to empower regular people, consumers. Would you agree that there should be a federal law to mandate hospitals publicly publish their prices, price transparency.
Yeah, sure, I'm all for that.
Okay, that's a market fix. We want people to have the information because what they have right now is they're driving down.
That's
the street
not a
and
market.
they're
That would
not pricing
pause.
things. And
Hold
so that's
on,
just an
though.
example.
Yeah, I have some things to say on that too, because when you are in a medical emergency, you don't have time to shop for a hospital. Like, you're in a fucking medical emergency, you're gonna go to the closest fucking hospital to say, if you're having a heart attack, you're not spending the time shopping for fucking hospitals. I'm sorry, that's bullshit. Oh my fucking god, dude.
And while that's also true, that is not a free market solution. You're literally putting a regulation on the market to force hospitals to reveal their prices. It's not free market at all.
Exactly. What's free market? It's a captive. You're in you're a captive consumer. You don't have a choice as to whether or not you're going to purchase that service. It's what's afforded you at the time. You just take it. Like, yeah. I'm sorry. That's such a fucking asinine argument. Like, yes, I'm going in bargain shopping hospitals. Like, well, my wife is having a miscarriage. Like, yeah,
Okay.
that's what we're doing.
Also, credit to Mike. We have been pausing and talking way more I think it's taken us like 20 minutes, like at least 30 minutes to get through 5 minutes of this conversation.
All right, we'll let it go for a little bit.
Yeah.
So we can do
Let's
that.
let the people speak.
Of how hospitals and being kind of this oligopoly of nonprofit profit mixture, which is incredibly corrupt, that they are hiding behind this idea to not empower the consumer. What I'm saying, and I think there's some middle ground here, that we want to empower patients to know, like, wait a second, you're going to charge me $45 for a Tylenol? Like, that's dumb.
I agree that price transparency would be better, but what would be even better?
And by the way, that's not every conservative agrees with me. Some are like, they can do whatever they want. I think that's silly.
Okay, well, that's good. Put that alongside the progress on the
On
Bezos,
Hunter Biden,
the
Jeff Bezos, and price transparency, right? So I don't want to spend all of our time on healthcare, but yes,
let me just say
there's
one
so much more I want to get
Sure,
to.
but let me say one last thing about that. What would be even better than having transparency on what you're paying for things that you badly need, which doesn't have to be as dramatic as a gunshot wound. Insulin is something that people badly need. Psychiatric medication is often something people badly need. And if they get off it, without proper medical, circumstances, that's going to be a disaster for them.
Is it getting hard?
Price transparency is not treating those things as commodities.
You got to say
Look at the
something.
systems in the world today, the ones that seem to be a lot better.
He mentioned the psych meds.
I'm not going to get into waiting lines in Canada or any of that, because some of that stuff is
really happy to get into
some of that is very much disputed, and quite honestly, I'm not prepared to go into that as much. So I just kind of want
to. Okay, I would say.
Good. Okay, pause.
Because I'm not.
Sure. One comment.
So he actually conceded that the waiting lines in Canada are bullshit. Thank you.
Yeah.
A conservative actually conceded that. I am so fucking shocked he conceded that. I am so fucking shocked. Because usually conservatives will fucking die on that hill. People in Canada have to wait 6 years to get seen for their fucking medical issues. No, they don't. You fucking lying sack.
Credit to Kirk. I'll give him, Kirk has surprised me occasionally in this debate. He said some somewhat reasonable things, learning that these I think it's good that some of these even though they're at the end of the day dumb talking points, that some of the right-wing talking points are being updated a little bit. That's nice. And credit to Kirk. Someone like Crowder wouldn't have done that.
Well, they're having to move their arguments slightly to the left, which I think is fucking brilliant, because that just shows the Overton window has moved.
But I guarantee you, if we had Crowder on the stage, he wouldn't do that.
But Steven Crowder's also a really shitty debater, man. He's not good.
Neither of them are good.
I'm not a fan of Charlie Kirk, but I think sometimes his arguments are at least a little more salient. I feel like Steven Crowder really plays on emotions, and he does it. I don't know, man. He does do the same thing as Charlie Kirk. He backs himself into a corner a lot of times with his ideology.
I have to give credit. I think that's the first time I've ever heard a conservative argument against national health care, saying that the waiting limits is actually conflicted.
Yeah. Good on him for owning some actual facts instead of just making shit up. So I'll give him that.
I think that if you want to talk about Canadian waiting line,
healthcare rationing, because it's not unlimited, therefore you have to prioritize who gets it, right?
No healthcare system is unlimited. But the question is always, if there's a limit, what is the principle that you use to decide?
That's interesting. What would you say that is?
Who gets
the youngest?
And I would say that absolutely the worst way to do it is for it to be made not by doctors, making decisions about, okay, what do we think is going to pay off realistically? Is how long can we keep this person alive versus, any of those things. The worst way to do it is to ration it by money, which is what we do. So what I think about Canadian waiting lines is there is some truth to it. There are some things.
Thank you for saying that. Not everyone says
that you do,
so I
that
agree.
you do have longer wait times for.
I appreciate you.
Okay, pause.
Start looking
I
at
hear
numbers,
both
but there are
sides.
some things that you have longer waiting times.
You have longer waiting times for non-essential surgeries. Like I've
so
talked to a lot of Canadians about that. Like it's like non-essential stuff, or stuff where like you're going to be all right for a while. You know, if it's between your knee surgery and somebody's heart surgery, the heart surgery is going to go first. You know.
To clarify for that argument a little bit, like for example, there are pretty long waiting lines for stuff like therapy at the moment, which is unlike places like England, which is unfortunate, but it is much different than like waiting lines for heart surgery, as you said. So I think
and fundamentally all that means is that there needs to be more funding and a build out of their medical system to properly like service the people in the country, right?
And what this might be, and I have a prediction here because Ben Burgis is not a online debater, but he is an academic, and the academic debate sphere is entirely different than the online debate sphere. So if he was in an academic debate, he would actually get points for ceding that ground to Charlie. But I would say in this area, it wasn't really the place to do it optically,
Right.
because it didn't need to. Charlie literally.
You already
gave
walked
him
back
that ground.
on it. Yeah, you already walked it back. You didn't need to say that at all. So I think if anything, he's just doing a courtesy at this point.
Yeah.
That part of the reason you have longer waiting times is that more people are in line. We don't exclude people from the line because they can't afford it. And I think as a matter of basic human rights, that's good not to exclude people from the line. And two, if the reason we're worried about it is because we think that people will die waiting, I think we can look at all the statistics comparatively between the United States and Canada. And I know a lot of people want to say that all of that's just lifestyle stuff. But I grew up right by the Canadian border in Michigan. All the Canadians I know.
In the Upper Peninsula?
No, in the Lower Peninsula, but I actually had to drive south to get to the New York Canadian border.
What the fuck?
Oh, wow. Okay, you were near the Canadian border.
And all the Canadians I know love beer and hockey and Tim Hortons donuts. I don't think that the reason that they have these better healthcare outcomes is that they're that much healthier than Americans. And certainly I think the infant mortality differences, the lifestyle of infants is very similar everywhere. They just kind of lie there. And you could say there are certain factors, parent behaviors that create differences there. But I think even there, like way more Brits smoke than Americans. The rate of drinking is higher.
That is definitely true.
I think that
Okay, good.
those are the
Pause.
things that are most immediately going to impact that. And then especially
If I was Kirk, until he got to that point, I could have called, like Ben Burgess had on using anecdotal evidence right there. That was like just saying, "Hey, I know more like Canadians that are unhealthy than Americans." Well, there are some competing statistics. I'm glad that he ended up bringing up that there are some like wavering areas on that, and I think like he brought up with actual statistics instead of saying, "Hey, I live on this border," and then I know people who ate hamburgers all the time or something.
Right. Yeah. I think anecdotal evidence can be good as long as you have the statistical and other supplemental evidence to back it up. As a matter of fact, I think it can be a great exclamation point in an argument.
And you know what? I'm gonna say it. I'm gonna attack me versus Ben Burgess right now. I think Ben Burgess just wanted to shit talk some Canadians.
Fuck those Canucks. No.
I think he saw his chance and he went for it.
Oh, what would Steven Crowder have said?
I think the one you're going to have the hardest time explaining is mortality amenable to healthcare.
But yeah, let me just make my position clear. Why I think some of your critiques are actually very valid and helpful. Where you totally lose me is government takeover of hospitals. And because let me ask you.
Okay, can we at least do government takeover of insurance?
Well, let's do it with hospitals because that really is the question, right?
Sure.
So let me just ask you a question.
No, it's
spend some
not.
time on it, but now you've got me interested. Do you think the VA works? Well?
Single payer is not a takeover of hospitals; it's a takeover of the insurance industry.
It's not even a takeover of the pharmaceutical industry either.
Yeah, it's just purely like this is your insurance, and we will pay out to your pharmacy and to your hospital. So even if you're looking at single payer healthcare in the vein of like, let's say Sanders, okay, like policy or Jayapal, who actually Jayapal's policy goes quite a bit further than Sanders. She is to the left of him on the healthcare front. What you see is that it's an insurance policy. So there isn't government takeover of the hospitals. The hospitals can still work and be privately owned. Doctors can still have private practices. Nobody's conscripting doctors to work on specific patients. They're just saying that if you want to get paid through like an insurance type program, this is what it's going to be. There's only one, Sure. I guess a doctor or a hospital could say, we don't want to take, government insurance, or we don't want to take the single payer program, and we only take cash. Sure, you could do that. That's going to be on you. You're not going to get as much business, or maybe you just get a bunch of rich folks. I don't know. I don't know how that would fucking work out to their advantage, but but even in like places like Italy, one of the chief things that a lot of the doctors say there is that the reason that they enjoy practicing there is their biggest expense they don't have to pay for. The biggest expense to American doctors, physicians, surgeons, malpractice insurance.
Mm-hmm. You could and I think you can make good arguments for nationalizations of the pharmaceuticals in hospitals. For pharmaceuticals, they engage in a lot of what I would say is, instead of actually focusing on making new medicine, they take their existing medicine, change it a little bit, and then mark it up at 3 times the price.
Yeah.
And I think you could make reasonable arguments for that. I think hospitals ensuring a higher standard of doctors, ensuring, rather than having to function through the private industry, you can make arguments for that as well. But those are the things that we really need to focus on, and that's not what we're truly arguing for in this case.
Right.
So I think it would have been smarter if Ben Burgis focused on the insurance part.
Yeah, agreed. I think that, I would be okay. Believe me, I'd be totally fine with nationalizing insurance or nationalizing prescription drug companies and hospitals. I think that'd be fucking great. But for the sake of this argument, that's not what we were talking about. And I think he went a little bit too far, which is going to be hard for him to reel himself back on, but we'll see.
I think that I would say 2 things about that. So the first is that if you actually look at surveys of people, and sometimes defenders of private health insurance love to do that because they say, hey, look at these surveys where most people say they're happy with their health insurance. I think it's very unclear what that means, or does that mean that you're happier with it than you would be with not having to pay for it and actually saving money like most people would with Medicare for All, even according to the Mercatus Institute? But the people who are most likely to say if they're happy with it are seniors on Medicare and veterans and active duty military personnel, who are the ones who are living under the British system. But are there cases where people have to wait way too long for certainly psychiatric care?
Do you see what I'm getting? I'm
no,
saying
no,
this in good faith. The VA is a mess in a lot of services.
But I think that, and I think unfortunately there's a cycle sometimes where conservatives are successful in getting funding for things cut or certainly not increased the way it should be, and then they use the results of that to undermine it. But I think one big difference, if you accept, for the sake of argument, that despite those surveys that I just gave, that overall it's way worse, then the question is, what's the difference between the NHS in Britain and the VA? And I think the biggest difference, why the NHS has all these great outcomes, certainly compared to the US healthcare system, I think the difference is that the NHS is for everybody. Only a small minority of Americans are veterans, so what goes on in the VA is not really something that's on most people's radar most of the time.
Let me ask you another question.
So there's a lot less political incentive to care about it.
Usually, typically, in urban areas, are the county-run hospitals the best?
Dodging
I'm
the
sure
question.
they're not. They have because I think that oftentimes they're severely underfunded. It's certainly.
You get what I'm getting at here.
So I get what you're getting at, but I think the question is.
So yeah, I want to point something out, and I hear this from conservatives all the time. Oh, X public program doesn't work because it's totally dysfunctional. Okay, so why did you cut funding to it 3 years ago?
True.
That's how they justify their arguments. That's always how they justify their arguments. You implement a social program, and then the way that the conservatives justify their arguments for its dysfunction is by, as soon as they get control, fucking bleeding it of all of its funding, and then turning around saying, see, it doesn't work. Well, yeah, if you take away the funding for it, if you take away the resources for it, of course it's not going to fucking work, you fucking moron. Of course I don't think they're a moron. I think it's by design, Of course they don't want it to work. Because they want it to go back to the market so they can line their fucking pockets,
Sorry, my eyes started bothering me. And I think that argument that you pulled up right there is actually super crucial, and it's something that informs a lot of my policy prescriptions. That argument is the exact same reason why I'm against the Republican Party as a whole. That argument is why, at the end of the day, that I think I am actually a socialist. Looking at when you mean-test a system, and when you give the power in the hands of other people and expect them to do good with it, that they're going to undermine it, and then they're going to point out that it's not functioning, and ignore the fact that it was because they undermined it.
Right.
That's why I think we need to fully nationalize at least the health insurance industry. That's why I think getting rid of the Republicans and making them electorally non-existent is crucial. And that's also why I think that eliminating the billionaire class is also incredibly crucial.
Yeah, because they have the largest profit motive, and they're the ones most likely to engage in trying to invest in, say, like invest in like the health industry, the medical industry. You know, they're the most likely to do that and take advantage of the economy, which would disenfranchise people that can't normally afford medical care, or that otherwise, you know, are doing GoFundMe's and shit for, you know, whatever it is. They don't care about that because they see it as an opportunity to generate income, and that's what it's all about, you know.
My eye is
Let's
killing
accept
me,
that,
but
right?
let's
Like,
keep
I'm certainly
going.
not going to pretend like I have a bunch of stats that are memorized.
Yeah, and even let's just use
Put some
Atlanta.
tussin on
The
it.
Emory Hospital is way better
on county.
and I can say from personal experience, it's just the
Sure.
Emory Hospital is far superior to just county.
But here's what I think is the more relevant point of comparison. Not when it's a municipality, which is often, you know, cash starved in general, and it's going to be, I think, actually much less efficient than doing it
They
federally.
do receive a lot of
but they
federal
have
money, a ton of federal money.
but why is it then that you think that in Britain or in some Scandinavian countries where most hospitals are publicly owned, their healthcare outcomes are so much better?
That's a very fair question. I have my own personal opinions of it. Not every healthcare outcome is better. We have a higher cancer survivability rate for certain sort of treatments. We have a higher quality of care for certain people. There's some people that conjecture in the healthcare field. It could be because
No,
of
that's incredibly
many
weak.
different underlying health conditions of how obese America is.
Yeah,
where we
that's
are
kind of
more
a
obese
bullshit
than other
argument.
terrible countries, also our diet, nutrition. But
That's like data
it's
mining to find
the
the
cause. If your argument is it's
specific
because
point.
that the government is running it, I reject the argument simply and totally because I know the government runs almost nothing efficiently and correctly. But I guess that's the crux of the argument that you're saying. That you're trying to sell me that in a multivariate analysis, you put all those other things aside. That it's because some guys
I
in
don't,
government payroll.
I don't put all those things aside. We just went through a
No, I know,
detailed,
but
a detailed argument about why this is a more plausible explanation. Now, it's fine to be not convinced by that argument,
yeah.
but I think,
Okay,
I think describing
pause.
it as, oh, I'm just dismissing everything else rather than giving you reasons why those explanations make a lot less sense. I mean, what is the biggest difference between the U.S. and Canada? What's the biggest difference between the United States and the United Kingdom? It's not that we're much healthier. As you say, there's a lot of things that are relevant here, like drinking.
Kirk
are
gave
actually-
that response, and I think that was an incredibly dishonest response. And the way that he phrased it was almost as if it is a given that the government is incapable of doing anything good. It doesn't justify his claim. It doesn't give an example of a government failing to run healthcare. He did mention the VA, but his response is not anything towards like any other healthcare system. It is purely that government cannot do good.
Which is a bullshit ass argument. Stats, please. Like, there are a lot of things that the government runs very efficiently with, and to discount that, and I'm not saying that there isn't waste in our government. Sure there is, and sure we need to button it up. But like, you know, you don't hear him complaining about the military-industrial complex.
And you know what I would love to see? And I know it would just kill Kirk, and he might kick Ben off of the show. He would say, well, I think the government is doing a pretty good job running our fire station.
Right? It's like, fire stations seem to be working well. And I don't know. It's just me. I'm just saying, like, you know, not a whole lot of houses being burned down without fire people
You could
showing
also
up, you know?
easily say, and it would kill him, are you in favor of defunding police?
What's that?
You could also just ask him, hey, does that mean you're in favor of defunding the police?
Right, right.
We are
Yeah.
a little bit more obese.
Actually, yeah, a little bit more, but if you look at it, I don't think it's dramatic enough to make this the big distinction. And also, I think the healthcare outcomes where you think they, you know, I mean, look, 36% obesity is worse than 30% obesity, but I don't think that's going to explain everything we're talking
That's a
about.
big deal.
Sure, I mean, I am all in favor.
And I will say this.
We could talk about what
you'll
policies
agree
would
with this.
address that.
If you want to think, if I want to go to the final thing
Sure.
that we'll agree on with this, the biggest difference
Sure.
is I think the preying pharmaceutical companies in our country.
Well,
Like,
that is certainly one
But
important
let's
difference.
put the hospital thing aside and delivery of care and all that
Well,
stuff.
I was just going to say
I
that.
think pharmaceutical companies have, and so I'm just going to say this
Sure.
because I think it actually is the best argument to say that market principles, and I would have made this argument if I were you, but you didn't. That's okay.
Well, I mean,
but,
I
but you
did-
kind
I
of
did.
did.
I
But like,
kinda
I'll just
did.
say that like if you're Pfizer, the money is in the middle of keeping someone not healed, but keeping back as an annuity to keep buying your drug, right? And this comes to someone who can't stand the major pharmaceutical companies that tries to be more homeopathic and kind of solutions in all of this, where not conservatives don't talk about that enough. If there was a difference,
Charlie Kirk is eating horse paste. Just saying it.
I would say that AstraZeneca, I don't know if AstraZeneca is another company, but Johnson & Johnson,
Probably.
Pfizer, and BioNTech, which was an originally
That's an
Israeli company.
interesting list, but
yeah.
yeah.
But those are the vaccine manufacturers,
Yeah. Which, by the way, is a perfect example of what I'm talking about with the pharmaceutical companies because most of that research was government funded.
which might have had questionable outcomes. We'll see. So I guess we're not going to get into that. That's too much fun for right now. Let me ask you another question.
Wait.
The point I was trying to make.
Which might have had questionable outcomes. I don't know. If people just get the fucking vaccine, they seem to be doing pretty well, brother. Like, what the fuck are you talking about?
Just for the record, is the outcomes where you say that the U.S. is
I'm not
Pause.
every metric, but it's fair. I'm not defending the U.S.
Sure,
healthcare
but-
system.
Did I How did I not hear about this? Let me send this to you. I didn't. Oh no! Did you know about this? Look at this.
Turning Points USA Foundation dies of. Oh shit! Oh,
I didn't hear about this.
me neither. This happened back in July. What the fuck?
Dude, he's been. Oh my god, Charlie Kirk has been doing so much COVID denialism. And his fucking partner died of COVID.
This is called a piece of shit. This is what a piece of shit looks like. I mean, this is what a piece of shit looks like. It's either that or, well, yeah, no matter what, he's a piece of shit. Because if he's getting paid to fucking express COVID denialism, he's a piece of shit. If he's expressing COVID denialism after his friend died, he's a piece of shit. No matter how you slice it, the dude is a piece of shit. This is fucking like heinous, dude. This guy is seriously a bona fide piece of shit. I'm sorry. I can't say piece of shit more, but I mean, that's what it is. That's fucking heinous, dude. This is your best friend, or he's a good friend. You know, I mean, you've obviously been partners for quite a while doing this shit. Dude.
Holy shit.
Fuck my life.
How did I not? Okay, to quickly point this out to everyone, Turning Points USA is the what Charlie Kirk works at. He's the owner of, and he co-founded it with his friend, Bill Montgomery. And Charlie Kirk has done so much COVID denialism.
I think Bill Montgomery is from Arizona. Like, I'm almost positive he's from Arizona. Because
he used to be from Arizona.
He was in politics here. Yeah, he was in politics here. Yeah, he's fucking, yep.
So, Charlie Kirk has been like Charlie Kirk legitimate has been like one of the worst people out there for COVID right now. He has like done vaccine denialism. He's done mask denialism. He's done Wuhan, like he's engaged in Wuhan lab conspiracies. He's said that it's like harmless for adults to get COVID, and he's engaged in so much shit. And I don't know how on earth you can say that if you're a healthy adult. I don't know what Bill Montgomery died of, but I don't know how you can continue to be Charlie Kirk and continue to be a COVID denialist while this happening to your co-founder.
Yeah, no, I mean, and that's what I'm talking about. Like,
well, to be fair, he was 80.
But this is where the money comes from. This is where the money comes from, though. You know what I'm saying? Like, this is where he's doing it for the money. You know what I'm saying? And that's the problem with a lot of these guys on the right. They're not doing it all because they necessarily believe what they're saying. They're just doing it to collect a fucking paycheck.
It seems like Bill Montgomery was an Illinois candidate.
Yeah, there you go. I was wrong about that.
Okay. Well, anyway, that's just shocking to me. This should have been bigger news.
You would have thought so, right? Like, but bury the lead, right? You know?
Yeah, I guess so. I should tweet this out. I'm at some point I'm going to tweet this out.
I wish you could like attach this debate and then like tweet that out with the debate. Like,
well, maybe like the Vosh debate, because this is pretty divorced from COVID, to be fair.
True. They're just barely touching on little aspects around healthcare, you know, on the outer edges. So.
Anyway, let's keep
I understand you're not defending
because we go to Singapore, we go to other places that have.
No, I mean, Singapore is much less free market than the U.S. system.
Decentralized. Well, they're more economically free. I'm not a defense lawyer for the American healthcare system.
Singapore's healthcare system is like Obamacare.
But trying to convince the American public, what you're trying to do is say, hey, let's nationalize the hospitals, nationalize the private insurance, which is what you eventually want to get to do, is obviously done in a ride with me, and I think a majority of Americans for a good reason.
Sure, but what I was going to say was those metrics where you say that we do better are things that I think a big part of the reason that we're going to do better on those is those aren't about overall outcomes for everybody. They're about specific kinds of services that not everybody's going to get in the first place. And that goes back to what we were saying earlier, that sure, if you can afford it, Absolutely.
So yeah,
Yes,
and
anywhere.
the final thing I'll say, because I want to get on these other topics, is
Sure.
we know how to get things cheaper and better, and that's usually market forces with some externalities being handled. So I'll give you one example. We might agree on Hunter Biden, Bezos, price transparency, and I don't think pharmaceutical companies should be allowed to advertise. I think it's the weirdest thing ever. They're running. Ask your doctor about this. Like, do you need it? Then your doctor should tell you about it. You shouldn't be propagandized by the
Sure,
pharmaceutical
yeah.
companies.
If you're asking your
All right,
doctor if
fourth-
this is right for you,
fourth
that's
thing.
a drug dealer, not a doctor. But
I agree.
But I think that
I totally agree.
but I
because
think-
it hurts the family. All right, so I want to get to this next thing because we keep on going in circles about all this.
And it hurts
Because it hurts the
okay,
family.
This could go forever, and we'll wrap it up eventually. I promise. Do you believe in absolute truth?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay, I'm just interested.
I mean, do you, let me make sure I understand what you're asking. Right?
Yes.
So,
Okay.
when you say absolute truth, do you just mean that whether things in general about any subject are true or false?
Yeah, I guess what I'm getting at, and I hate to use like the cliche
Sure.
word, is would you consider yourself a postmodernist? That truth is relative.
No, absolutely
Okay,
not.
so that's good. Do you think that postmodernism and that kind of movement is harmful or helpful?
Even if, I mean, it seems like, are you familiar with postmodernism and all this stuff?
I mean, on a rudimentary level, I have a base understanding of what they're referring to, but I haven't sunk my teeth into like deep philosophical fucking shit like that in many, many years.
So I'll quickly point out, if Kirk knew his shit, he knew that he was talking with a Marxist professor, from what it seems, and Marxism is expressly against postmodernism.
That's
So you should
always
know
been
that.
my understanding, which was kind of why I thought it was odd that you brought it up, because that's more
Marxism is a modern philosophical term, while there you can certainly incorporate elements of Marxism in postmodernism. If you identify as a Marxist, typically you're not a postmodernist. So there's that. Second, that's also a straw man of postmodernism. Postmodernism says that there is not one narrative that the world lives by. So let's say, let's say I, for example, say bacon tastes great, right?
Mm-hmm.
That is not a universally true statement, because someone else could have bacon and think it tastes terrible.
Mm-hmm.
Some people may so what it means is, like, Marxism may be a great means to describe some aspects of reality. I think it's a really good descriptor, but it's not going to describe all of reality.
Right.
And that's what postmodernism is. And the straw man of it, believing in no truth, that there is no truth, is nonsense.
Yeah.
Just for your little philosophical lesson.
I'll take
I
it.
think it's harmful. I don't think.
This is a mini philosophy tube with Seine.
Yes.
Elaborate that.
I don't think we should believe in alternative facts any more than anybody else should. I think that what's
I agree
true is I think that what's true, generally speaking, it depends a little bit, what we're talking about, and I'm not saying the only reason I'm saying
Like
that is
Newtonian physics, like
is
force
just
equals mass
sure,
times acceleration.
Sure.
Right?
Well, yeah. I mean,
That's
technically,
not-
Newtonian physics is a good enough approximation.
Postmodernism in any capacity.
Quantum physics and relativity
Of course, but you
physics,
understand what I'm saying.
But I understand what you're saying, and I agree. Right? Absolutely. I think that truth is objective. I think if you want to get into an argument about who in practice, who has political power, is actually denied that, more than others.
Yeah, I don't think there'll actually be much fruit in that discussion.
Then we could get into that.
He said.
But
It's not that helpful,
if your question is whether truth is objective, then I think it is. I did, if I could slip one in.
Sure. You can ask me questions, too.
It is a little bit off the track of most of what we've been talking about, but
Yeah, Charlie,
because
truth is
I have
objective when we look at your article.
I've seen some of your previous
about your friend
posts,
dying.
and something's come up in a couple
Yes.
of them.
Yeah, was truth objective that COVID killed your friend, or are you just like speculating that may have been what killed your friend? And in another time, that may not have been called COVID. It may have just been called the flu. So he just died of the flu.
True. Is true a fact that Charlie Kirk started COVID? That is a true fact.
It's 100% true. I thought everybody knew that.
In Roblox, of course.
It's not a politics question at all, at least directly.
Is it more metaphysics?
Yeah.
Okay, there you go.
It's a more metaphysical question. I've seen you make this claim that you'll say things like, well, there's no social contract, our rights come from God.
Yes.
So first thing is, can you elaborate a little bit on what you mean by that?
Yeah, just as the founders did, as they said in the Declaration, the laws of nature and nature's God, where whether you believe it's an actual being of a triune God like I would, or kind of more of a deistic type God, that you have rights and something gave it to you, and that the social contract that we have recognizes a transcendent order.
So if something gave it to you, I assume that what you mean by something gave it to you.
I would believe in omniscient, omnipotent being, but I'm not proselytizing you to
Well,
believe
no,
right?
I'm not. I don't think you are. I mean, I was the one who brought it up. I'm
Sure.
just curious.
Okay, no.
You know, so if because when you say that something gave it to you, you can read that at least two different ways. So one of them is, and I assume this is not what you think, but like, you know, one of them is that like literally in a cause and effect way, we have certain legal rights because of like the intervention of God. But of course, it's clearly not the case that God is like stopping China from putting dissidents in jail. I assume what you mean is that we morally have a right to those things because God gave it to you.
That's correct. But if you're asking, do I believe that in a God that can intervene
Well,
supernaturally,
sure,
I do.
Sure, you can, but I mean, like,
And
but
I'm happy to get into that.
Sure, fair enough, right?
I don't think there'll be much.
I don't think that's actually relevant to the question.
Yeah.
But I'm trust me, whatever else I am, I'm a huge.
I don't know where we got into this.
And I have a question about Christopher Hitchens for you.
Sure, awesome.
I know you wrote a book on it.
I did.
This is
just
like-
a couple weeks ago.
You went way off the fucking rails.
I didn't know like we were just like answering random questions. Like, okay, he pitched this as Charlie Kirk versus atheist Marxist Professor Ben Burgis. We're just now getting to the atheism, and I haven't really heard much Marxism brought up.
No, me neither. I've heard about pretty normal social safety net stuff that we just want what the rest of the world has. I don't know if that's Marxist. That seems like just keeping up with the industrialized free market world would be kind of good. Yeah, if they're using a blended economy that leans more on a social safety net for our medical care. Oh, shucks, darn, shit really sucks, right? That's bad for everybody. That's bad for the market if labor is healthy and can work longer hours because they don't have to worry about whether or not they're going to die of a fucking heart attack. Far be it for me to think that, hey, if you want a good market, you might want your employees healthy. Just saying. I don't know. Probably make more money that way. That's just me. I don't know. Even if you're a fucking capitalist, like, I would think that you'd be in favor of socialized healthcare for the pure reason that you wouldn't have to pull the money out of your pocket to pay for their healthcare. And in addition to that, you could guarantee that you have a healthy labor force that could continue to perpetuate production to feed your income necessity or desires. So the fuck ever, dude.
And you know what? I'm gonna say a really hot take. Are you ready?
Yeah.
Any good capitalist should be a socialist.
Kind of, yeah. Yeah. I mean, yeah, if they want their labor to be successful and to provide product for them, that would be a really good idea. I'm just saying, like, it wouldn't necessarily be bad.
But I'd like to thank
Joke,
you.
by the way, yeah.
If you say that God is the moral, is the reason why morally we should have these rights.
The unmoved movement.
That
Yes.
I don't understand how that's going to get around like the Euthyphro problem. Like if you say, okay, so Euthyphro, there's this dialogue written by Plato where Socrates
Yes.
is arguing with this ancient Greek holy man named Euthyphro, and they're talking about the definition of holiness. And it's going to take just a second, but I promise I'm going to get through this quickly, and we'll get to the point. They're arguing about the definition of holiness, and Euthyphro says the holy is that which the gods love, and Socrates asks him this simple question. Do the gods love it because it is holy, or is it holy because the gods
Yes.
love it? So translated into what we're talking about here, the question would be, is it morally
Can we just
just
agree
that,
God is
those
dumb?
rights be recognized because that's what God wants?
What's that?
Can we just agree God is dumb?
Yeah, God's dumb. Or
We don't really need to.
Or God is evil as fuck. Like, God is fucking evil. If there is a God, God's fucking evil, dude. Look at the suffering on our planet. Look what he does to people, dude. Just saying. Like, if you believe it,
we don't need to. I've recently been reading Plato's Republic. I don't need to go into Plato to describe why God is dumb. Can we just say God is dumb?
God is dumb. The entire concept behind it is fucking dumb and ridiculous, and all it does is divert from personal accountability, which you would think that somebody who is a conservative populist would care a lot about personal responsibility, right? But it's really easy when you get to dump it off into the hands of something that doesn't exist. Or that you can't see and can't verify that they're taking ownership of your fucking life, But maybe that's
Let's
a
get
debate
through
for another
this.
time.
Or does God want it because
God
it would be
part.
morally unjust to deny them? Because if you say,
Both.
okay, well, that's a really interesting answer. Never heard that one before. I want to get into it. But just to finish up with what the problem is, if you say that God wants you to have those rights because it would be morally unjust to deny it to you,
Yes, and-
that suggests that it's morally unjust for
shit.
some reason other than God wanting it. And
I
then
want to make
God
sure my
part,
internet doesn't die.
at least on the moral question, is going to be
Oh,
sort
we're
of
almost
beside the point,
there.
that they have a
We're almost there,
whatever the
man.
reason is why it would be
We're almost
morally
there.
unjust is a reason that's going to be just as available to the atheist.
Okay, we're good.
Whereas if you
I think
say
we're good.
it's morally unjust
Yes.
because God doesn't want it, and God doesn't have some reason why it would be morally unjust, then it's just like lucky for us, I guess, that God wants us to have free speech and freedom of religion, equal rights for women, because he could just as easily want us to organize a society like the Taliban did.
Right. So a lot to unpack there. I would say both, because through divine revelation and through reason, especially through many of the writings of the early church fathers, we believe in a metaphysical God that not just gave us the law and this interpretation of natural rights because he believed
I
in a
get
certain way we
okay.
should live,
Pause.
right, but also
God debates bore the hell out of me. Do you agree?
Yeah, mostly because there's no way to prove anything that you're talking about. It's just purely philosophical fucking nonsense. Like, there's no way to like, if you can't give a stat on it, right? Like, I mean, there's no like, there's no material way to quantify the validity of an argument, you know.
And I think like debating philosophy is fine, but God specifically, who gives a shit? I think, in all fairness, everyone should operate in their world as if God doesn't exist, and whether he does or not is fine by me. You know.
The most amoral people I know are Christians or people that believe in God, and I'll tell you why. Because the reason for them choosing to live a moral life lies solely in the fact that they have the promise of heaven or the prospect of hell, which means that they don't live a moral life because they want a moral life. They live a moral life because they fear what's going to happen when they die. And to me, there's nothing moral about that. It's a really fucking selfish life, to be honest with you. Because you abide by tenets that don't always agree with society for the sole purpose, and don't always lend to creating a betterment of society for the sole purpose of wanting to go to heaven or fearing going to hell. And I think that's absolutely fucking insane. I think that's why I've always said the people that I know that tend to be the most moral are the people that tend to be like atheists or agnostics, and here's why. Because they're not doing good deeds, they're not acting in good faith, they're not doing good in the world because they see a prosper and they seek to prosper in the afterlife. They're doing it because they care about doing good things for other people. You know what I'm saying? And,
I agree with that.
you know, and so like that's why the God argument's always been like kind of bullshit to me, because I'm like, dude,
And even
I don't
like,
fucking care.
it also doesn't matter if it's right or wrong. Who cares?
And honestly, I have to be fair, I've known some great people who are religious people who are just good people. You know, maybe they're doing it because maybe they're good people because of religion. Maybe they're just good people in general. I tend to think these folks that I know tend to be just generally good people. But I do know others that, you know, are the Bible thumpers, and you can tell, you know, it's performative. It's for what they think they're going to gain in the afterlife, and I can't ascribe to that.
Yeah, I think like when it comes to these kinds of people, if you want to participate in faith, that's fine by me. I participate in faith, but it's not from a belief in God, but it's because I enjoy